The scene opens with a series of quick cuts showing the precision of a professional kitchen. Utensils neatly organized, a knife skillfully chopping ingredients, and pasta being tossed in a pan. Azuma Akari, a bright-eyed young man in a chef's hat and apron, beams with energy as he holds up a finished plate of pasta. He excitedly shares that he comes from a rural area in Hiroshima Prefecture, where his family runs a diner. Driven by a deep passion, a young Akari started making his own bento as early as the 3rd grade, dreaming of one day taking over his father's diner after graduating high school. With the help of a cookbook and his friend's advice, Akari's bento finally became edible, and he quickly gained back the weight he had lost during his early failures. As his passion grows, Akari expresses his desire to work at his father's diner after graduation. His father accepts, but only on the condition that he masters the basics through grueling discipline. Throughout his high schools, Akari endures a punishing schedule, waking up at 5 a.m. and scrubbing ingredients until 10 p.m., receiving no special treatment as his father pushes him to become a true professional chef. Upon graduating high school, Soren informs Akari that he has taught him everything he can and has arranged an apprenticeship for him in Tokyo. Though surprised, Akari finds himself unable to refuse, as his father had already secured his room and completed all the necessary paperwork. With no other option, Akari sets off for Tokyo to continue his journey as a chef. At 18 years old, Akari begins his culinary journey in Tokyo. He throws himself into his training, working from dawn until late at night 6 days a week. On his sole day off, he spends every penny he has visiting top-notch restaurants to refine his palate. While others might see it as a brutal grind, Akari is mine because he truly loves cooking. After 2 years of dedication, Akari's master finally tells him that there is nothing more to teach. Now 20 years old, Akari says his goodbyes to his mentor and colleagues, heading to the station to take the Shinkansen back to Hiroshima. Everything seems perfectly normal as he steps onto the train, but he has no idea that his life is about to take a drastic turn from this moment forward. Just as he was about to board the train, Akari slips and falls, plummeting into a dark abyss until he loses consciousness. When he finally opens his eyes, he finds himself in a strange place, confused and lost, unaware that this is the beginning of his new life as Azuma Shuri. As Akari opens his eyes, he finds a blond man in full armor looking down at him. The man simply notes that he is awake, but Akari is completely bewildered. Staring at the heavy gear, he can't help but wonder if the man is wearing some kind of cosplay or a play prop. Aiden explains to the bewildered Akari that he was found lying in the camp of the group he commands, possessing nothing but himself. Akari is overwhelmed by the confusion, unable to make sense of the words or remember anything. When Aiden mentions that they are in the hilly region of Linbul, Akari can only stare back in confusion, wondering where on earth he actually is. Akari is completely disoriented, struggling to grasp the concept of the region Aiden is mentioning. As Aiden explains that Linbul is part of the Sabrayu continent, Akari begins to question the nature of their communication, wondering if Aiden speaks Japanese or is a returnee from another world. Just then, a subordinate enters the tent, addressing Aiden as captain, and noting that the lost child has finally awakened. As the subordinates enter, Akari finds himself staring at a group of formidable warriors. With Aiden leading the way and other imposing figures looming behind him, Akari is visibly shaken, wondering in fear if these people are actually friendly. Akari stares at the group, momentarily convinced that they must be cosplayers, or perhaps an idol group because of their striking looks. However, his denial is shattered when he notices a massive axe that is taller than he is, leaving him terrified as he realizes the weapons are likely the real thing. The Aiden asks for the young man's name, and he introduces himself as Azuma Shuri. The man then reveals his identity as Gangrave, the leader of the mercenary group. Still bewildered and clinging to his previous theory, Akari wonders if mercenary group is simply the name of the idol group. Aiden decides to clear things up, while Lena wonders if Akari might have hit his head. Aiden describes how Akari suddenly stumbled into the mercenary camp and collapsed from exhaustion, appearing to be in a muddled state of consciousness. When asked if he remembers anything, Akari admits that he only realized he was there once he woke up. Intrigued by the mystery, Aiden then asks Akari where he came from. Akari tells them he is from Japan, but Aiden is completely unfamiliar with the place. When Akari asks if he is still in Japan, Aiden bluntly tells him that he is in the Rinber Hills and that this is definitely not Japan. The realization hits Akari like a bolt of lightning, leaving him terrified and confused as he realizes the Sabrayu continent doesn't exist in his home country. Aiden tells Akari to take it easy, explaining that he was exhausted and covered in mud when he first arrived. In chimes in, mentioning that he was the one who cleaned him up, which leaves Akari completely stunned. Turning serious, Aiden reminds him that they are a mercenary group currently engaged in a war, hoping Akari understands the danger of their situation. Aiden bluntly tells Akari that as an unknown outsider, His presence in the camp is a risk they cannot easily ignore. Surrounded by the intimidating warriors, Akari is struck by a wave of panic. Realizing that in the middle of a war, he could easily be mistaken for a spy. Aiden explains that if Akari is a local resident suffering from memory loss, they cannot afford to hurt him without risking the hostility of nearby villages. While he doesn't believe Akari is a spy, Aiden insists on a full and honest interrogation to ensure the group's safety. He promises that if Akari cooperates, he will consider helping him return home safely. Overwhelmed and desperate, Akari swears he will not lie, wondering how his life ended up in such a predicament. Akari begins by stating his name and explaining that he is a 20-year-old from a rural area in Hiroshima Prefecture, Japan. However, Aiden is completely unconvinced, claiming he has never heard of such a place and mocking Akari for looking like a teenager. Flustered by the comment about his childish looks, Akari desperately insists that he isn't lying, even though he has no idea how he ended up in this world. Aiden asks Akari if he is an outsider, to which Akari responds by asking if he means a foreigner. As the other mercenaries Lena, Dane, Nari, and Jin watch the exchange with skepticism, Akari becomes overwhelmed. He admits that even he cannot explain how he arrived in this world, concluding that it is simply impossible for them to understand. Akari continues to plead, swearing that he is telling the truth. Aiden eventually relents, telling him not to be scared and admitting that his threats were empty. However, as Aiden considers the situation, he notes that Akari's memory confusion shows no sign of improvement. When Akari asks what will happen to him, Aiden coldly concludes that they simply do not have the luxury to support someone who is not useful to the group. Akari remains silent for a moment, his face filled with anxiety, before tentatively asking if he could work for them. Aiden responds that if Akari can contribute in any way, even through odd jobs, they might consider keeping him around. However, Aiden firmly reminds him that they are in the middle of a war and cannot afford to support someone useless. He tells Akari that if he cannot be of use, he will provide some supplies and send him to a nearby village for protection. Stunned by Aiden's serious demeanor, Akari begins to panic. He realizes that if the mercenaries are in the middle of a war, nearby villages likely wouldn't have the resources to support a stranger. Concluding that he has nowhere else to turn, Akari decides that staying with the group is his only option, and resolves to use what he knows about himself to prove his worth. Desperate, and with no other options, Akari begs Aiden to let him stay with the group, promising to do whatever it takes. Surprised by Akari's resolve, Aiden agreed to let him stay on the condition that he works under supervision, while the other mercenaries wonder what a young man like him could possibly contribute. Akari looks on with determination, realizing he has figured out a way to make himself indispensable in this situation. Looking at the powerful warriors around him, Akari realizes that venturing out alone in a war zone would be a fatal mistake. He decides that his only path to survival is to secure a useful role within the group. Despite his determination, he finds himself struggling to organize his thoughts, wondering what he can possibly offer to prove his worth. A flash of memory regarding food triggers something within Akari. With a sudden look of determination, he announces his goal to the group: he just wants to cook. Aiden is caught completely off guard, staring at him in utter confusion. Aiden is completely bewildered by Akari's sudden claim, asking him to repeat himself. When Akari earnestly confirms that he is trained in cooking, Aiden's shock quickly turns into intense excitement. He lets out a loud cheer and pumps his fist in triumph, leaving a confused Akari wondering why he is reacting so strongly. Akari is confused to see the other mercenaries looking so excited. Aiden then decisively entrusts Akari with the role of the group's cook. While Akari accepts, he expresses concern that the person currently handling the cooking might be unhappy about a newcomer taking over. Aiden looks slightly hesitant before deciding that it would be quicker to show Akari the situation than to explain it. Telling him to come with, Aiden leads Akari out of the tent, and the young man is immediately struck by the scale of the operation. Surrounded by rows of tents, armored mercenaries, and the general chaos of military life, Akari can only stare in awe, realizing that he has truly entered a professional battlefield camp. As he takes in the sprawling camp and the people around him, the reality of his situation finally sinks in. Looking at the strangers with their unusual appearances, Akari realizes that he has truly ended up in another world. Aiden brings Akari to the camp's kitchen, which consists of nothing more than a few pots hanging over open fires. To Akari's disbelief, Aiden admits that the mercenary group doesn't actually have a designated cook when Akari questions how such a group could function without one. Aiden sighs, explaining that it was his oversight, but no professional chef was willing to risk their life by coming to a battlefield. Akari realizes he has no choice but to rely on the mercenaries for the time being. Aiden admits that because most of the group has no cooking experience, their meals are barely edible. With a battle looming, Aiden explains that a good meal is necessary to raise the soldiers' morale. He then proposes a challenge. If Akari can prepare a dish that makes Aiden say it is delicious, he will officially hire him as the camp's cook. With a determined look, Akari accepts the challenge. He begins to survey the primitive kitchen, noting the basic tools: a knife, a pot, and a lidli, and the limited ingredients available: onions, carrots, flour, butter, milk, cheese, salt, and pepper. As Akari questions if these are all the ingredients they have, Aiden reveals that their supplies have become critically low over the 3 months of war, and they hope to settle the battle by tomorrow. Aiden explains that the previous cook gave up, leaving it to Akari to provide a satisfying meal before the upcoming battle. He tells Akari that this is his chance to prove his skills and earn the position. Feeling the pressure of this significant responsibility, Akari examines the supplies only to find that all the bread and preserved foods are gone, leaving him with almost nothing. After assessing the ingredients, Akari confidently declares that he will make cream stew. However, Aiden is completely bewildered by the name of the dish. Realizing that such a common meal is unknown in this world, Akari explains that it is a soup made with milk. As he observes the camp around him, Akari finds it strange that while the food culture is so different, he is still somehow able to communicate with the people here. Akari looks at the ingredients, feeling bewildered by how the names match his own world and how he can communicate despite the differences in race. He wonders where he truly is, but decides to stop worrying for now. Grabbing a knife and tying his apron, he notes that, while the tools are unfamiliar in shape, with determination, he declares that he will now begin making the cream stew. Akari gets to work, deciding to make a version of cream stew that doesn't require consommé or soy sauce. He meticulously cuts the vegetables into uniform cubes and begins sautéing onions in butter, explaining that extra onions will compensate for the missing flavor as he adds the other vegetables in a specific order. Aiden questions the process, prompting Akari to explain how the different textures and moisture levels of each vegetable affect the cooking time. Akari explains to Aiden that the order of ingredients is crucial for the flavors to meld properly. He adds flour to sauté further, turning the stew a bright white. Aiden is taken aback by the unusual color, but Akari simply reminds him that a cream stew is supposed to be white. To finish the dish, Akari adds sliced cheese and seasons it with salt and pepper, leaving Aiden still looking bewildered by the process. Akari proudly presents the finished cream stew, inviting Aiden to enjoy the meal. However, Aiden is still bewildered by the dish's white color, noting that it's unlike any soup he's ever seen. Despite Akari's explanation, Aiden continues to doubt, wondering if it's some kind of sweet dessert reserved for nobles. Exhausted by the skepticism, Akari tells him to stop complaining and just eat. Fed up with the complaints, Akari forces a spoonful of the cream stew into Aiden's mouth. Aiden is initially taken aback, but as the flavor hits him, his eyes widen in pure shock. Completely won over by the taste, he begins devouring the stew greedily, leaving Akari surprised by his sudden change in attitude. Aiden takes a bite of the cream stew and is instantly blown away by the flavor. He begins to eat the dish with such ferocious speed and enthusiasm that the other mercenaries, including Nari, Lena, and Dane, can only watch in stunned silence. Aiden eats the cream stew with such ferocity that it leaves everyone around him in a state of shock. Lena, Nari, and the other mercenaries can only watch in disbelief as he completely loses himself in the delicious taste of Akari's cooking. Aiden is completely lost in a state of pure bliss, his face flushing as he savors the incredible flavor of the cream stew. The other mercenaries, including Nari, can only stare at him in shock, stunned by his overwhelming reaction to the meal. After finishing every last drop of the cream stew, Aiden lets out a satisfied sigh. When Akari tentatively addresses him, Aiden suddenly lunges forward, thrusting his empty bowl toward the young chef and urgently demanding a refill. Caught off guard by the sudden intensity, Akari can only stammer a surprised agreement. Aiden looks at the pot of cream stew, admitting that its intense whiteness had initially made him hesitate to eat it. However, as he tastes it again, he is struck by the flavor, exclaiming that the essence of milk is deeply infused in the dish, despite the surprising lack of a strong milky scent. Satisfied with the meal, Aiden lets out a sigh of contentment and immediately asks for another bowl of the delicious stew. Akari agrees to give him more, but first he reminds Aiden about the test, realizing he had completely forgotten in his excitement. Aiden sheepishly apologizes. Aiden beams with joy and declares that Akari has passed the test, calling the cream stew a truly remarkable dish. He expresses how happy he is to finally enjoy a proper meal after so long. Hearing this, Akari lets out a sigh of relief, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. Aiden admits that while the lack of meat is a disappointment, the vegetables are so delicious that he doesn't need any subpar meat. Curious, he asks Akari about the nutrients he mentioned earlier. Akari explains that eating vegetables is necessary for balanced nutrition, realizing that Aiden is completely unfamiliar with the concept. He simply describes nutrients as essential fuel for keeping the body healthy, leaving Aiden wide-eyed in surprise. Surprised by Akari's explanation of nutrients, Aiden suddenly asks if he is a doctor. Akari is bewildered by the question and quickly clarifies that he cannot treat injuries or illnesses, only managing health through his cooking. This leads Aiden to realize that Akari likely does not belong to any known country. Aiden suddenly calls out to Akari, leaving the young man startled. With an enthusiastic smile, Aiden asks him to work for them. He then announces to the entire camp that he is hiring Akari as their official chef, tasking him with filling their bellies and restoring their energy. The entire mercenary camp erupts in cheers as Aiden officially welcomes Azuma Akari. With a wide grin and a firm handshake, Aiden tells him they should get along and asks him to take care of the group. Overwhelmed by the sudden enthusiasm, Akari can only stammer his understanding, unknowingly beginning a new legend within the mercenary group. With Akari now officially part of the group, a new chapter begins, in a world defined by the era of the warring states. The journey of the young chef and the mercenaries truly starts here. The world is plunged into absolute chaos. On the continent of Saburayu, warlords fight relentlessly for power, leading to endless battles as armies clash to claim territory and send their enemies to a bloody end. The various lords each seek to prove themselves the true ruler of this warring state, harboring ambitions to become the supreme master of the Saburayu continent. On the battlefield, the clash of swords and spears resounds daily, with arrows and stones flying through the air, while slaughter is carried out through magic and sorcery. In this world, people fight, steal, and survive, where the sanctity of human life holds no meaning all in the pursuit of wealth and fame, because it is precisely in such a warring state that the mercenary business becomes profitable. The harsh reality of this era is further shown through raw violence, as men fight brutally to claim and defend their territory. The focus shifts to Gungrave, who reveals a darker side of his history. Long before becoming a mercenary leader, he was the head of a gang in a small town, spending his youth engaging in criminal acts such as murder and arson, aided by a special talent that fueled their lawless endeavors. Gungrave's natural talent is on full display, as he effortlessly disarms a knight with a precise swift strike. The shocked knight is unable to comprehend how a mere brat could master such advanced knightly swordsmanship, to which Gungrave simply and nonchalantly replies that he just watched and learned. Gungrave explains that he possesses the extraordinary ability to perfectly remember everything he sees or hears, from academic knowledge to the complex affairs of the world. Realizing that leading a criminal organization had become too dangerous in a changing era, he decided to leave his town. Together with his crew, he formed a mercenary group, confident in the skills of the 8 talented individuals who stood by him. The mercenary group initially operated smoothly, but as it grew to nearly 100 members, problems began to arise. Gungrave explains that the sheer cost of wages, equipment, supplies, horse feed, and food became a heavy burden. He admits that he didn't realize at first that simply existing as a mercenary group consumes a vast amount of money, learning the hard way that nothing is free. The cook's food was simply terrible, and this poor quality slowly began to take a toll on the group. To compensate for the rough rations on the battlefield, the men spent all their hard-earned money on extravagant feasts in taverns. Consequently, the Danshiken group's funding shortages only worsened, leaving them unable to properly equip themselves with new gear. Gungrave admits that the burden of leading the mercenary group was often so overwhelming that he felt like giving up. He recognizes the value of a talented cook, but he simply lacks the funds to hire one. Yet, despite the hardships and the constant struggle, he is desperate to keep the group alive, for the organization has become something far more meaningful to him than just a way to make a living or survive. Gungrave looks out over the city, recalling the loneliness of his youth. As a war orphan, he felt he had no place to call his own. He remembers the desperate choices he made, resorting to theft and evil deeds not for greed, but to survive and help other orphans. He believed that by taking wealth from those who monopolized it, he could end the cycle of suffering and create a better world for people like himself. Gungrave recalls the tireless battles he fought, the enemies he slew, and the moments of crushing defeat and humiliation he endured. Despite the pain, he refused to break, continuing to fight for his purpose. However, after 8 years of leadership, he begins to feel anxious as the size of his mercenary group has failed to grow beyond 100 members. Gungrave recalls the moments of deep despair when he felt that his abilities were no longer enough to lead his group further. However, that was when a fateful encounter occurred. He met a strange man named Azuma Akari, who would eventually change the course of his destiny. At the Gungrave Mercenary Corps encampment in Rinbel Hills, Gungrave sits with Dane, Lena, and Nari around a map. Scratching his head with a sheepish smile, he admits that his attempt to make some money turned out to be a complete mistake, leaving the group wondering what their next move should be. The situation has grown dire, as the conflict has devolved into a draining war of attrition over the last 3 months. With heavy losses and dwindling funds, the very existence of the mercenary group is at risk. Due to the open terrain of the Hiratsuka Hills, Gungrave and his commanders conclude that a heat-on strike is their only option, especially since reports indicate the enemy will fully mobilize their forces by tomorrow morning. Kagaya, the Intelligence and Security Unit commander, argues that continuing the current battle is a poor strategy that will only lead to more unnecessary casualties. She urges Gungrave to withdraw. Gungrave, acknowledging Kagaya's background as a former priestess and her valid concerns, agrees that moving to a new battlefield while they still have strength is a better option than forcing his exhausted soldiers to fight on. However, he hesitates, hinting at a complication. A formidable presence emerges. Ultros, the commander of the 2nd Infantry Battalion and the Punishment Unit. Gungrave notices him and asks if he has something to say, but Ultros responds only with silence. Gungrave, however, is not confused. He knows that Ultros has long since vowed to show his intentions through actions rather than words. Gungrave looks at Ultros, recognizing the silent resolve in his eyes. He knows that for Ultros, retreating now would mean denying peace to the comrades they've already lost. While Gungrave understands this internal struggle, Captain Orius steps in with a grim reminder. At this rate, the mercenary group will not be able to sustain itself. Orius speaks to Ultros, acknowledging that he believes pulling back would prevent their fallen comrades from resting in peace because of his deep care for them. However, she firmly points out that pride and recklessness are different, reminding him that as a free combat unit, they can operate at their own discretion. She adds that their employer would not stop them from leaving, even if they chose to withdraw. Listening to her, Gungrave admits to himself that Orius' perspective is valid. Orius points out that the battle has dragged on for too long, and that while their employer might be displeased, a withdrawal would likely be permitted. However, Gungrave's resolve shifts. With a look of intense determination, he declares that he does not want to retreat and is determined to see this fight through to the very end. Gungrave reflects on the core values of his group. Knowing that strength is everything, he fears that retreating now would not only demoralize his men, but also ruin their reputation in the eyes of others, which would cripple their future operations. After a moment of heavy silence, his officer Sorius, Ultros, and Kaguya acknowledge his authority and agree to follow his lead without further objection. Gungrave acknowledges the situation and decides to postpone the detailed strategy until after they have eaten. But as he tastes the meal, he finds it lacking, noting that it isn't good. Orius looks on with a distressed and apologetic expression, while Gungrave laments the fact that there are no good cooks in his squad. Gungrave quickly clarifies to Orius that he didn't intend to blame her for the meal. However, as he looks at the food, he reflects on how the absence of a proper cook has become a real issue, admitting that he hadn't realized how much of a disadvantage it was for the mercenary group to have no one capable of making delicious food. Watching his men eat the bland, unappetizing food, Gungrave realizes that meals and gambling are the only comforts on the battlefield. He understands now that delicious food would give his soldiers more strength to fight. Overcome with regret, he clutches his head, admitting he once viewed cooks as mere salary thieves and neglected to hire one. Now, he despairs that no one will be willing to join his group in such a role. Teg, the commander of the archery unit, bursts into the camp with high energy, shouting for Gungrave. Gungrave is initially annoyed, demanding to know why Teg missed the strategic meeting, leaving Teg flustered. However, Gungrave quickly dismisses the issue, urgently grabbing Teg and dragging him away, insisting there is something he needs. Teg leads Gungrave and the other commanders across the camp. When Gungrave asks if a lost child is really why he was summoned, Teg admits he's not sure how to explain it. But the kid feels strange. Intrigued, Gungrave looks toward the tent where the child is being held. The commanders comment on the irony of skipping meetings yet being eager to see a lost child. Kauga, the 1st Infantry Unit commander, and Lil, the Magic Engineer Unit commander, both admit they are curious about how a child could possibly be in the middle of a battlefield. Asagi, the Special Operations Unit captain and Chief Equipment Appraiser, joins the group, stating that she won't miss the chance to see who has arrived. Gungrave looks at his commanders, thinking of them as problem children, who possess exceptional talent but lack the ability to work together. With a weary sigh, he gives in and decides to finally see the so-called lost child that Teg found. Gungrave arrives to find the so-called lost child fast asleep on a cot. Staring at the young man, Gungrave is intrigued, noting that he is a tough one to judge. The group makes their way toward the tent, with Lil wondering if the stranger is truly as strange as Teg claimed. As they gather, they question where the young man came from, and Teg prepares to reveal a truth that seems hard to believe. Teg explains that according to his subordinates, the young man simply appeared out of thin air. The commanders are left in disbelief, and Aureus begins to wonder if this is the legendary transference magic of the wise man Aureliusan ancient power that is believed to be lost forever. Gungrave reflects on the situation, realizing that Aureus' strong denial only makes the stranger's appearance more mysterious. Meanwhile, Asagi observes the sleeping young man and finds him unusual, noting that he resembles the people from her homeland in the eastern region. However, she adds a cryptic detail, mentioning that the people from her home are different from regular humans, leaving the nature of the stranger's identity even more uncertain. Asagi continues her explanation, suggesting that the people from her homeland are denser than she is, a comment that leaves Gungrave puzzled. The commanders then begin to speculate on the stranger's origin. Aureus wonders if he is merely a regular villager, while Teg observes that although he looks shabby, his hands are devoid of calluses. Asagi agrees, noting that his smooth skin aligns with the characteristics of those from her region. Lil notes that she knows of no wealthy merchants who use such attire, leading Orpheus to wonder if the stranger could be the son of royalty to explain his refined upbringing. Asagi agrees, though she mentions that she never encountered anyone like him during her time at the temple. Gungrave looks at the sleeping Azuma Akari, concluding that there is no easy answer to him. The young man appears ordinary yet entirely out of place, making him a truly mysterious being. Gungrave takes a closer look at the stranger's attire, a simple white shirt and indigo pants. While it seems ordinary at first glance, Gungrave is shocked to find that the fabric's weave is impossibly perfect, far surpassing any known manufacturing methods in his world. He marvels at the impeccable craftsmanship, viewing the simple t-shirt as a product of almost divine skill. Gungrave is utterly fascinated by the material of the shirt, wondering what it's made of. He notes that the fabric is incredibly beautiful, durable, and unlike anything he has ever seen. He imagines the fortune a clothing guild would make if they could mass-produce it, potentially sparking a fashion revolution across the continent. His amazement only grows as he turns his attention to the pants, declaring them to be the most valuable of all. Gungrave examines the indigo pants, marveling at the precise dye pattern and the efficient placement of the pockets. To him, this simple outfit is a treasure, a crystallization of wisdom that seems to condense technology from hundreds of years in the future. Looking at the sleeping man, Gungrave can't help but feel that he has encountered someone from an entirely different reality. Gungrave looks down at the sleeping youth, feeling a sense of dread about the situation he has stepped into. However, he saw a small silver lining in the fact that the stranger seems to be nothing more than a bumbling idiot, rather than a calculated spy or intelligence agent. Turning to the other commanders for their thoughts, they recall how worn out and mud-covered Akari was upon his arrival, noting that his complexion has finally improved after being cleaned up and allowed to rest. Gungrave decides that since he senses no malice from the stranger, he will not kill him. While Altros remains silent, Lil expresses her own curiosity, focusing on the stranger's attire. As a fan of inventions, she is completely baffled by the unfamiliar sewing techniques and fabric, unable to determine if the materials are biological or something entirely beyond her understanding. Kuugahu gazes at the sleeping stranger, a sudden thought crossing her mind. Could he be the person mentioned in the legends? She quickly suppresses the idea, worrying that if they let him go, the temple might protect him worse, silence them for knowing too much. Gungrave catches her troubled expression and asks if her concern is related to the temple. Though Kuuga dismisses it as nothing, Gungrave isn't convinced and resolves to question her about it later. Gungrave orders his commanders to wait outside, deciding to handle the interrogation himself. As Azuma Akari opens his eyes, he is greeted by Gungrave, who simply notes that he is finally awake. Disoriented and at the strange group of warriors, Akari's mind races as he questions his surroundings, realizing with a shock that this place is definitely not the island nation of Japan. Gungrave is completely taken aback by the mention of an island nation, while Kuga questions if Akari came from across the sea. Outside the tent, the other commanders listen in disbelief, wondering if there truly is another continent beyond their known world, with some having heard rumors while others are completely unaware. Gungrave contemplates the outer sea, the treacherous waters that isolate their vast continent from the rest of the world. He recalls the raging storms and ferocious sea creatures that make venturing beyond the horizon an impossible feat. Looking at Akari, Gungrave realizes that if this outsider truly comes from beyond the sea, it means there is another world out there, and a human has somehow managed to cross the impassable divide. Gungrave continues to process the unbelievable information. He summarizes the stranger's details. His name is Azuma Akari, and he hails from a place called Hiroshima in the island nation of Japan. Upon hearing that Akari is 20 years old, the commanders are stunned, unable to reconcile his youthful looks and clear skin with the fact that he is actually older than some of them. Gungrave tells Azuma Akari that they need to decide how to move forward. He admits that while sending Akari back to his homeland would be the best option, it is impossible since they have no knowledge of where it is. He considers the quickest solution simply throwing him out to avoid taking on an unnecessary burden, but he hesitates, his thoughts trailing off. After spending some time talking with him, Gungrave forms a positive impression of Azuma Akari, seeing him as a straightforward and harmless young man. He realizes that casting him out would be cruel and would likely lead to Akari's death in the streets. Deciding on a more compassionate path, Gungrave settles on a final option. They will hire him and give him various odd jobs to do. Desperate to survive in this strange world, Azuma Akari begs Gungrave to let him stay, promising to do anything. Gungrave, noting Akari's surprising composure despite the situation, begins discussing with his commanders which unit should take him in. However, Lil quickly shuts down the idea of adding him to her unit, as they cannot afford to take in someone who lacks knowledge of magic engineering. Orius refuses to take Akari, noting that her all-female unit cannot accommodate a man who lacks magic. Gungrave realizes that both Orius and Lil's units require magic capabilities, making Akari a poor fit. Then Asagi dismisses the idea as well, explaining that her Special Operations Force has no place for someone who cannot fight. Gungrave can only agree with their cold, practical reasoning. Gungrave looks toward Altros, noting that Akari is completely unfit for frontline combat in the 2nd Infantry Unit. The other commanders agree, pointing out that he isn't suited for intelligence work, and Gungrave adds that since Akari cannot even ride a horse, his own unit is also out of the question. Gungrave narrows the remaining options down to either his own unit or Teg's. Teg quickly shuts down the idea, insisting his unit is out of the question. However, Kuga considers the possibility, noting that if Akari can wield a weapon, her unit might be able to manage him as a regular archer. She adds with a mischievous smile that he would have to be trained Spartan style, leaving Akari looking concerned. Gungrave realizes that placing Azuma Akari in Kuga's unit would be a disaster given her ruthless training methods. With other options exhausted, he wonders if Teg's unit is the only choice left, as the commanders fret over his future. Azuma Akari is lost in his own thoughts, suddenly feeling a strong urge to cook something. Gungrave is completely taken aback when he realizes Azuma Akari actually knows how to cook. Akari modestly confirms that he has trained for it to some extent, leaving Kuga and the others intrigued as they look toward the camp's large cooking pot. Azuma Akari offers to prepare a cream stew for the group. The mere mention of the dish sends Gungrave into a state of total shock and anticipation, his eyes widening in disbelief. Gungrave is struck by a wave of pure euphoria, his face flushing with excitement as he imagines the delicious taste of the cream stew. Gungrave takes a bite of the cream stew and is instantly struck by its incredible taste. He is shocked by the smooth texture provided by the milk and the perfect balance of sweetness and tanginess from the cheese. Finding the dish absolutely delicious, Gungrave enthusiastically declares the dish flawless and officially approved. The other mercenaries are equally amazed, admitting they have never had such a satisfying meal, even on the battlefield. Teg feels a surge of strength, claiming they'll be 100 times stronger for the next battle, while Asagi is impressed, wondering if the captain had always been eating such high-quality food. Even the silent Altros enjoys the meal in quiet appreciation. Ira admits that she should improve her cooking skills for the next feast, and Orius agrees, feeling she needs to learn from Akari as well. Both Orius and Lil are thoroughly impressed by the cream stew, with Orius remarking on how rare it is for Lil to be so satisfied. They both agree that when food is this delicious, nothing else matters. As the mercenary commanders feast on the delicious cream stew, Gungrave stares at the mysterious dish, completely captivated by its unfamiliar flavor. He recalls Akari's claim of coming from a land beyond the sea, realizing that such a unique and otherworldly taste suggests the story might not be a lie after all. Gungrave contemplates the possibility of advanced technologies existing beyond the sea, realizing that Azuma, Akari's unique knowledge and ability to stay composed under pressure are invaluable assets. He concludes that it would be a waste to lose someone like him, and resolves to do his utmost to protect the young chef. As Akari continues his work, the surrounding Tali express their heartfelt gratitude and admiration for the meal, though Akari remains humble in response. Gungrave places a friendly arm around Azuma Akari's shoulder, warmly welcoming him as Shuri and stating that he looks forward to working with him from now on. Surprised by the sudden display of affection and acceptance, Akari looks up at the mercenary leader and softly thanks him, with a bright and determined smile. Azuma Akari asks the group to take care of him. Gungrave looks over the bustling camp and tells him that he is counting on him, officially charging Shuri with the task of supporting the mercenaries with his exceptional culinary skills. As the camp settles, the story transitions into a legend passed down through generations. It speaks of the Sabrayu continent during the Dark War era. a tumultuous hundred-year period where the land was stained in blood by endless battles and massacres. However, amidst this darkness, a remarkable individual emerged to finally bring the era of war to an end. The hero who brought peace to the land is revealed as Gungrave Denju Apparata, the great king of the continent. As the first king of the unified kingdom, he overcame immense hardships to end the warring states period, earning him the title of the first and last hero king. In the royal court, one of the vassals asks King Gungrave how he managed to end the warring states, suggesting it was due to his military strategy, combat prowess, or charisma. While the vassals expected an answer that validated their own roles, King Gungrave gives a surprising reply. It was a hearty stew that ended the chaos of war. King Gungrave reflects on his reign, admitting that while he once believed military strength and political skill were the keys to building a nation, the reality was different. He explains that people will not truly follow based on power alone. Instead, he asserts that what is truly necessary is a delicious meal that fills the belly. By providing abundance and flavorful food, the human spirit is enriched, creating the room for good legendary king. It was a simple, hearty stew that ultimately ended the chaos of war. And peace. And it be enzized. And yeah. King Gungrave reflects on the wisdom a dear friend once shared with him from the bottom of their heart. This legacy allowed the great King Gungrave Denju Apparata to end the age of war and famine, ushering in a time of plenty for all. Together with his companions, they became known as the Nine Heroes, a legend passed down through generations. Now, the curtain rises on a new hero's tale, one that begins with the simple yet profound power of food. The scene opens at the Rainbell Hills, where a chaotic battle is unfolding. Aiden, clad in armor, leads a powerful charge, cutting through the opposition with intensity. His forces successfully break through the enemy's main line, leaving the opposing soldiers in a state of panic as they are forced to retreat. With the enemy's main line shattered, Aiden shouts for his troops to begin mop-up operations. He leads the cavalry in a relentless charge, trampling the defeated soldiers and securing a total victory on the field. In the military camp, the soldiers cheer for their great victory and the return of their comrades. They credit their success to Shuri, claiming that his delicious meals were what caused their morale to skyrocket. Shuri, however, looks completely stunned by the sudden and overwhelming praise. While the soldiers stand proud and blood-splattered, celebrating their triumph, Shuri is completely overwhelmed. Staring at the carnage clinging to their armor, he is struck by the grim realization that this truly is a battlefield. The scene shifts to a title page for Chapter 3, titled Invention Through Creativity and Hamburg Steak. A girl with a high ponytail is seen relaxing among a pile of books and scrolls, hinting at a groundbreaking invention that begins with food. Azuma Shuri introduces himself, revealing that he was suddenly transported to another world. He has since found his place as the cook for Gungrave's Mercenary group, supporting the soldiers with his meals. Now that the battle has finally come to an end, Shuri considers stopping by a nearby town to take a well-deserved rest. While sharing a meal, Gungrave tells Azuma Akari that he wants to reward him for his hard work. However, he expresses concern about Akari entering the town, fearing that acting against local, common sense might lead to mistrust. Confused, Akari tries to clarify that he isn't actually from outside the outer sea, leaving Gungrave momentarily surprised. Feeling uneasy about leaving things misunderstood, Azuma Akari decides to be completely honest. He clarifies to Gungrave that he isn't from the outer sea or any other part of the continent's act. He reveals that he is not a human from this world at all. The confession is so unexpected that Gungrave freezes in shock, accidentally tipping over his cup and spilling his drink across the table. Gungrave is completely stunned, questioning if Akari is actually from Kamakura, the land of the gods. Confused by the name, Akari listens as the legend of Kamakura is revealed, a mythical place in the Subralu continent, where the creator god once appeared before vanishing, marking the beginning of the era of humans and extraordinary beings. The legend continues, suggesting that the creator god was invited to the land before vanishing, and that all humans and magic originated from that place. This is how the mythical region became known as Kamakura, the land of the gods. Azuma Akari listens to Gungrave's explanation, looking completely bewildered by the local folklore. The legend continues, stating that the wise ones who brought magic to the continent were said to be residents of Kamakura, the land of the gods. Azuma Akari listens, initially processing the information, but then the realization hits him. He is completely taken aback, shouting in shock as he discovers that this world actually possesses magic. Overwhelmed with excitement, Azuma Akari realizes he is in a world of swords and magic, imagining the typical tropes of an Isekai story where he would possess great magical talent. But his fantasy is short-lived as Gungrave bluntly tells him that he has no trace of magical aptitude, noting that neither Aureus nor Lil showed any reaction to him. Akari is left completely deflated. Gungrave tells a discouraged Akari not to be so down. reminding him that his impressive cooking skills are more than enough to get by. As the conversation shifts back to the topic of Kamakura Sato, Gungrave mentions that such a connection would be unfavorable for a certain organization. He describes the temple in the southern region, a religious state that governs many countries and believes in the supremacy of the continent, though they are viewed as an abominable existence by those from the outside. Azuma Akari clarifies that he isn't just from another land, but from an entirely different world. This revelation prompts Gungrave to warn him that he is now a super dangerous person who could be targeted for purging if he isn't careful. However, Gungrave quickly reassures him, suggesting that as long as Akari doesn't show off his otherworldly knowledge or skills, he will simply be seen as a talented cook. Gungrave instructs him to just focus on doing his job properly until he returns. Azuma Akari smiles warmly, promising to repay Gungrave for picking him up. Gungrave looks on with a small smile, explaining that while he cannot take Akari to town, he is willing to provide something else. As Gungrave asks if there is anything he wants, Akari pauses, thoughtfully considering his request. As Azuma Akari is thinking, he is suddenly approached by Asagi. She addresses him with curiosity, and Akari recognizes her, recalling that she is Gungrave's childhood friend and the captain of the Special Operations Unit. Asagi begins to tease Azuma Akari, intentionally drawing his attention to her revealing attire. Flustered and blushing, Akari desperately tries to deflect the conversation, mentioning that he is looking for a tent for Lil. However, Asagi continues to provoke him, questioning if he is interested in Lil's body. Akari protests against her crude direction, but Asagi only finds his pure-hearted reaction more amusing. Azuma Akari arrives at the tent and calls out to Lil. Inside, Lil is lounging in her workshop-like tent, surrounded by various tools and books. She looks up, recognizing him as Shuri, and notes that she has already heard about him from Gungrave. With a bright smile, Azuma Akari reveals his request. He wants Lil to make some cooking tools for him. He explains that the utensils available in this world are too different from what he's used to, making them difficult to use. Knowing that Lil is the captain of the magic crafting unit, Akari describes his understanding of magic crafting, the ability to use magical power to shape objects and grant them special skills to create items. Lil reviews the sketches of the tools Akari requested, questioning the need for a cutting board and a frying pan. Akari firmly explains that the existing equipment in the unit is completely unsuitable and unhygienic, emphasizing that food ingredients must be kept clean, which makes the current tools unfit for use. Azuma Akari shows a cutting board that is completely blackened and covered in mold, explaining that the existing equipment is utterly useless. Seeing the dire state of the tools, Lil feels a surge of motivation. When Akari asks when she can finish them, Lil enthusiastically declares she will start right now, immediately jumping into action among her equipment. Lil gathers the necessary materials, metal and wood, to begin her work. As Azuma Akari looks on in curiosity, Lil focuses her magical energy on the ore, determinedly declaring that she will start by crafting the kitchen knife. Lil begins the crafting process by forcefully kneading the metal, infusing it with her magical power. Azuma Akari watches in shock, amazed by both her strength and the magical effect. Lil explains that by containing magical energy within the metal, she can increase its hardness, a fact that has already been proven by research. Azuma Akari shares knowledge from his world, explaining that they mix carbon with metal and heat it to remove impurities. Lil, who relies on magic for crafting, looks at him with total confusion, unable to comprehend the concept. Lil is not satisfied, and insistently demands a full explanation of what Akari just mentioned. Though he admits he doesn't know every single detail, Akari explains that raw metal is naturally full of impurities. He describes the scientific process of applying heat to melt substances, with different melting points to refine the metal, promising to share more of the scientific knowledge from his world to help her. Despite Azuma Akari admitting that his scientific knowledge is merely basic common sense from Earth, Lil is captivated and continues to ask questions. She reflects on the concept of carbon dioxide produced during combustion. Holding up a piece of raw ore, Akari notes that it is high-quality iron, prompting Lil to ask for further clarification. Lil reflects on the state of magic crafting on the continent, concluding that it is still quite immature. Realizing that the iron ore contains impurities, she declares that they must be removed. To Azuma Akari's utter confusion, Lil attempts to purify the metal by aggressively kneading it with her bare hands. Lil forcefully kneads the metal, squeezing out small chunks of waste. Azuma Akari watches in disbelief, wondering if those are the impurities being removed. Determined to refine the metal, Lil then tries to force carbon into the material, shouting for it to blend in. Azuma Akari stares in disbelief at the finished metal, amazed by the flawless result. He exclaims that it's beautiful and praises Lil's incredible skill. Lil responds with a smug, satisfied smile, basking in the admiration as Akari continues to call her amazing. Azuma Akari presents a design to Lil, asking her to craft specific tools for him. Lil agrees and puts her skills to work, resulting in a professional-grade frying pan and a scrumptious knife. Overjoyed, Akari praises her incredible work, feeling that he can finally prepare meals that truly satisfy him. However, the precision required for the design takes a heavy toll on Lil, who collapses in total exhaustion, complaining that Akari's requests were far too detailed. Akari tests the new tools but finds them slightly off, asking for more adjustments while apologizing for the trouble. Lil is completely drained by his perfectionism. Suddenly, Akari changes the subject, asking what she usually makes in her workshop. This sparks an immediate and intense reaction from Lil, who enthusiastically declares it a good question. Lil excitedly shares her passion for creating new things, showing Akari a variety of her experimental magic crafts. She presents a simple megaphone, a piece of paper capable of transmitting sound and igniting on a flying board. While Lil is proud of her progress, Akari is left overwhelmed, realizing he is surrounded by a collection of unfinished prototypes. Curious about the symbols he sees, Azuma Akari asks Lil about the writing. Lil explains that these are called magi spells, which are written using crushed pigments on magic crystals minerals that store ambient magical energy. She describes how this process allows a magic craftsman to transform objects and create special tools by granting them specific powers based on the characters written. Looking at the magi spell, Azuma Akari wonders why it consists of only a single character and suggests that writing multiple characters might be more effective. Explains that combining spells often leads to chaotic, runaway magic, which is why craftsmen spend their lives perfecting stable single spells. However, Akari counters her logic, asking if the chaos is simply a result of simultaneous activation, and suggests the idea of creating a stabilizing spell to manage multiple effects. Lil is left speechless, completely caught off guard by his intuitive reasoning. Azuma Akari explains the logic of electronic circuits, describing the need for a transmission circuit and a switching mechanism to handle multiple functions simultaneously. Lil is absolutely stunned by this revelation and lunges toward him in a burst of excitement, shouting that he might be a genius. Lil reflects on Akari's explanation, realizing that while a stabilization mechanism is necessary to prevent magic breakdowns, the limited size of the magic paper poses a problem. However, when Akari suggests simply stacking the paper, the idea suddenly clicks for Lil, and she excitedly realizes that is the solution she was looking for. Lil jumps with excitement, realizing that stacking magic paper allows her to incorporate multiple functions and stabilize command transmissions. While Akari wonders if his simple suggestion is truly that significant, Lil is completely impressed, declaring it a new technological breakthrough. Full of energy, she enthusiastically calls out to Akari, determined to put the idea into practice immediately. Lil beams with absolute confidence, fully embracing her identity as a genius. Although her name is not yet widely known, her future is certain. She is destined to become a figure who leaves an indelible mark on history. The narrator clarifies that Lil's talent, known as magical craftsmanship, is fundamentally different from traditional magic. While standard magic focuses on manipulating one's own energy and the mana in the air to create phenomena in the environment, magical craftsmanship involves merging one's mana with the energy inside an object to change its form, hardness, or add special properties to it. The narrator further explains the difference. While magic can create phenomena from nothing, magical craftsmanship requires a physical object to function. In her youth, Lil once wept, wishing she possessed the talent for traditional magic. However, as she pursued the path of a craftsman, she realized it was far better suited for her. She spent her days immersed in trial and error at her desk, striving to innovate new techniques and serving as an engineering soldier to set up defenses for the group. While Lil found these days enjoyable, they were often a source of great frustration for Gungrave. The cost of Lil's research and inventions was no small matter. For Gungrave, who handled everything from battle strategies to finances and administration on his own, it was a constant source of worry. Lil honestly felt bad that her inventions had not yet reached a level of practical use. She wanted to create new technology for everyone, but things just didn't go as planned. As the sense of frustration she had, as continued to give it everything she had, as this was the only path she knew. Gungrave approaches Lil with a request, explaining that the cooking tools from Azuma Akari's homeland are different from those in their world. He asks Lil to use her craftsmanship to create the specific tools Akari wants. Although Lil knows that Akari's food is incredibly delicious, she feels a bit hesitant about the request, since she hasn't had much chance to talk to him yet. Lil watches Akari from a distance, thinking that his mysterious presence and impressive cooking skills make him feel unapproachable. Noticing her expression, Gungrave tells her not to look so dissatisfied, and suggests that she might find it interesting to talk to him. He encourages her to simply start a conversation to understand him better, leaving Lil puzzled by his words. At first, Lil doesn't understand Gungrave's request and feels a sense of dissatisfaction. She had always aspired to create something more refined and purposeful, so the idea of making simple kitchen knives and frying pans seems trivial to her. But as she examines the blueprints drawn by Azuma Akari, her expression changes to one of shock. She realizes that the tools depicted possess shapes and concepts that have never existed in her world, sparking her curiosity. Following Gungrave's advice, Lil begins talking to Azuma Akari and is immediately captivated. She discovers his deep obsession with the tools used to create great food, realizing that his knowledge goes far beyond simple cooking. As Akari explains the complex process of heating metal to remove impurities and mixing in carbon, Lil is stunned by his expertise. Viewing him not just as a cook, but as a true craftsman, Lil is completely stunned by what Azuma Akari has just revealed. Demanding a full explanation, she recalls how the local blacksmithing guild strictly forbade her from learning such secrets in the past, treating them as hidden techniques. However, Akari calmly explains that the knowledge he possesses is not a guild secret, but rather a completely different system of understanding metal from his own world, one that is entirely unfamiliar to the people here. Akari begins to explain the fundamental building blocks of the world, mentioning elementary particles. He describes how all substances are composed of atoms, the basic entities of matter, which then bind together to form complex molecules. Overwhelmed by these revolutionary concepts, Lil can only stare in awe at the incredible knowledge Akari possesses. Lil continues to shower Azuma Akari with questions about the fundamental nature of everything, from air and water to the earth and sky. This revelation leaves her feeling like an infant in terms of knowledge, finding the experience absolutely fascinating. Realizing that the magical engineering of her continent is severely underdeveloped, Lil examines a piece of iron, noting its impurities and concluding that they must be removed to achieve better results. Putting the knowledge she gained from Azuma Akari into practice, Lil attempts to visualize magical energy and incorporate carbon into her forging process. By combining this new scientific understanding with her own belief and effort, she successfully creates a metal ingot of unprecedented quality. In this moment of success, she finally understands the profound meaning behind the words left by the renowned magical engineer Arthuria. Azuma Akari beams with joy as he holds his new knife and frying pan, praising Lil for her amazing work and expressing his excitement to cook satisfying dishes. However, the process has left her completely spent. She reflects on how incredibly high and challenging Akari's demands were, noting that such quality might surpass even that of a court chef. As she slumps over in total exhaustion, she acknowledges that Akari's refusal to compromise is the unwavering obsession of a genius. Lil admits to herself that Azuma Akari is a true genius, especially when it comes to the creativity and skill required for cooking. As the moment passes, the scene shifts back to the camp tents, marking the completion of their work. Lil has finally completed her project, a magical stove. By pushing her skills to the limit and incorporating the fresh, unmatched perspectives provided by Azuma Akari, she has created something far beyond her previous inventions. Though she relied on Akari's knowledge, Lil takes immense pride in the fact that her own hands brought this ultimate masterpiece to life, leaving her with an unparalleled sense of fulfillment. Azuma Akari beams with joy, promising to create wonderful meals with the tools Lil crafted for him. Meanwhile, Lil rests in a state of pure contentment on her ultimate masterpiece. She realizes that the true value of her creation lies not in its technical superiority, but in its purpose. Unlike weapons, her stove is a tool for life and culture that will endure long after the war, bringing joy to households of all statuses. This realization brings her a profound sense of fulfillment and the kind of legacy she had always truly sought. Lil has spent almost her entire life devoted to the research and invention of magical engineering, sacrificing her time and everything else to her craft. While it might seem as though the gods have finally taken notice of her efforts, the truth is different. It was Azuma Akari who provided the opportunity and the chance for her to finally achieve this breakthrough. Lil drifts into a peaceful slumber, her face reflecting a sense of contentment. However, her rest is short-lived as Azuma Akari's voice rings out, calling her name with excitement to announce that he has prepared a brand new dish for her. Lil takes a bite of the new dish and is instantly transported to a state of pure bliss. She is amazed by the taste, reflecting that for the first time in her life, meat tastes truly delicious, devoid of any unpleasant smells, tough textures, or greasiness. Lil is completely lost in the flavor, feeling the juices of the tender meat fill her mouth. The outstanding sauce further elevates the dish, perfectly matching her taste. As she reflects on the ingredients, she realizes that Gungrave's extensive spice shopping was worth it, as Azuma Akari managed to turn even the strange-smelling soy sauce into something delicious. Lil is truly amazed by Azuma Akari's cooking skills. She realizes that his talent isn't just about making rare dishes, but but about his ability to combine available ingredients in the perfect ratio to create something entirely new and delicious. As she savors the meal, she feels the true meaning of creation. Afterward, Lil receives several more requests from Azuma Akari, who wants tools that can help him process ingredients more effectively. Eager to support his cooking, Lil happily agrees to cooperate. However, she finds herself deeply impressed, wondering how Azuma Akari is able to come up with so many innovative ideas, surprised by the idea that he could ever fail. Questions Azuma Akari's past. He reveals that he struggled immensely at first, recalling a time when his strict father forced him to eat his own failed creations. Despite the hardship, Azuma Akari admired his father and trained relentlessly, attributing his current mastery of cooking to that disciplined foundation. Azuma Akari reflects on his approach to cooking, explaining that the ability to come up with new ideas doesn't simply come from experience. He tells Lil that he constantly thinks about how to make things even more delicious a process. Others call creativity and innovation. With a determined smile, he expresses his resolve to never forget that spirit and to keep working hard every single day. As they talk about creativity and innovation, Azuma Akari begins to wonder about Lil's own journey. He remembers how she used to proudly show him her inventions, though at the time they were nothing more than impractical, unfinished products that ended up as trash despite her confidence in her own talent. Azuma Akari reflects on how Lil's lack of drive to improve her work resulted in a pile of useless inventions, which ultimately drained the mercenary group's budget. He considers her current state a fitting punishment for her past laziness. Returning to the present, he notices a flying board on the ground and asks if it is actually convenient. Azuma Akari enthusiastically explains the practical benefits of the flying board, noting that it can move heavy items with ease and protect luggage from shocks during transport. Lil is left speechless, realizing she had only ever viewed the board as a vehicle for people to ride. Stunned by his insight, she can't help but admit that Shuri is a true genius. Lil puts Azuma Akari's idea into practice, using the flying board to easily move heavy sacks and protect cargo from damage. Realizing how a simple change in perspective transformed her failed invention into something useful, she looks at Azuma Akari with a grateful smile and thanks him for giving her work a new purpose. Looking at her collection of failed inventions, Lil decides to change her ways. Instead of dismissing her creations as useless, she vows to find a purpose for them and give them real meaning. With a determined smile, Lil commits herself to creating and refining tools that are truly useful to people, marking the first step in her growth as an engineer. In a wide open field, Lil approaches Azuma Akari with a spark of excitement. When Akari asks what she wants, she proudly tells him that she wants him to see something she has newly invented. Recalling her history of failed creations, Akari looks at her with a skeptical expression and asks if it's just another one of her prototypes, causing Lil to react with a frustrated sigh. Lil firmly denies that her invention is just another prototype, claiming it is a finished product. She presents a small dark sphere to Azuma Akari, who looks at it with confusion, wondering if it is merely a pebble. With a confident "just watch," Lil hurls the object into the distance, shouting "release" as it flies away. The small object hits the ground and suddenly erupts into a violent explosion, sending a massive plume of smoke and debris into the air. Azuma Akari is caught completely off guard, his face twisted in shock at the sudden blast. As the smoke clears to reveal a crater, Lil calmly explains that the invention is an explosive stone, which detonates exactly 3 seconds after the magic word is spoken. Azuma Akari is visibly shaken by the explosion, worrying that such a dangerous weapon could easily go off in someone's pocket. Lil calmly dismisses his concerns, explaining that she has implemented strict safety measures. She details the process. The stone only arms when held, the countdown only begins upon release, and it is programmed to recognize the user to prevent nearby explosions. Lil explains that the 3 safety functions of the explosive stone were incorporated based on Shura's feedback. Azuma Akari is stunned, admitting he has never heard of such complex magic spells. Moving on, Lil presents her next invention, the timed flare stone. As she holds the dark crystal, she points toward the distance, announcing that a specific spot will ignite in 5 seconds. The countdown reaches 4, and suddenly, a pillar of fire erupts from the ground exactly where Lil predicted. Azuma Akari watches in shock, completely taken aback by the display. He turns to Lil bewildered, questioning how a magic engineer could possibly use magic. Explains that the timed flare stone can delay its activation for up to 2 hours and leaves no trace after extinguishing. Theo is highly impressed, noting its perfection for covert operations. He tells he will allocate funds for the project and leaves further research in her hands. However, as he looks at the burnt ground, how the research team managed to develop such an amazing tool. Theo is incredulous, unable to believe that such complex magic could be developed in such a short amount of time. confidently tells him to look closer, and reveals a black cube covered in intricate runes. Stunned, Theo examines the object and questions how many spells she has managed to engrave, fearing that such an overwhelming amount of magic might eventually spiral out of control. A detailed schematic reveals the secret behind the devices, a magic program created by Lil using concepts received from Shuri. By engraving countless spells in a structured way, the system stabilizes the flow of magical power to prevent overloads. These mechanisms can be triggered either through direct touch or by speaking a specific magic word. Theo is completely impressed, not calling a genius for her incredible creations. However, the narrator reveals a different truth. Lil is not a natural genius, but has simply borrowed the brilliance of the true genius, Shuri, while Lil was once just an immature person reveling in her own abilities. The narrative hints that from this point forward, things will be different. The narrator explains that what Lil truly lacks is effort and the flexibility to learn from those who came before her, emphasizing that true progress requires creative skills. Realizing this, Lil understands that simply in things is not enough. She must evolve into someone who can truly create. With a determined gaze, see toward the horizon alongside to keep pushing herself, dreaming of the day her creativity will finally surpass even that of Shuri. Lil Blanche is remembered as one of the great heroes who shaped the civilization and culture of future generations. Many of the tools she created continue to exist in modern times, with the stove being a prime example and invention that has evolved over time to become an inseparable part of daily life. The narrator reveals that Lil's impact on the world was far greater than just a few tools. From communication devices to magical vehicles, her innovations laid the very foundation for modern civilization. For these achievements, she became known as the mother of invention. Despite the turmoil of war, to creating tools that enriched the lives of ordinary people, leaving behind a technological legacy that served as the cornerstone of her entire era. Despite her immense achievements and inventions, Lil declined the prestigious position of Chief Magic Engineer in the Unified Kingdom. Instead, she chose to share her knowledge by founding a private magic engineering school, teaching her techniques to all who wished to learn. This institution eventually grew into the renowned Blanche School of Magic Engineering, one of the largest research centers on the continent, while Lil herself continued her lifelong pursuit of research and development. The Blanche School of Magic Engineering stands as a testament to Lil's legacy, yet it is notably devoid of extensive weaponry research. Looking out over the city, Lil reflects on her philosophy, stating that her technology is not meant for war. She warns of a terrifying cycle where the pursuit of military technology becomes an end in itself, eventually leading to a catastrophic future where the entire continent is turned into a scorched, lifeless wasteland. Driven by her fear of how technology could transform warfare, Lil Blanche dedicated her life to using to illuminate the future and ensure human prosperity. Her ideals did not fade with time. Instead, they became the very foundation of the Blanche School of Magic Engineering. The phrase creative ingenuity was left behind as a guiding principle, continuing to resonate in the modern era as the heart and spirit of the academy. Beyond her academic and technological achievements, history records a more personal side of Lil Blanche. Her unmatched love for hamburgers. It is said that her sheer happiness while eating them brought warmth to everyone around her. While some theories suggest this passion bordered on obsession, the truth remains uncertain. Yet it highlights a tale of creation that begins with food. The historical retrospective ends, and the focus shifts to a young chef. As he cooks with an enthusiastic and passionate expression, the narrator introduces a man named Azuma Shuri, describing him as someone who exists on the thin line between being a fool and a genius. The focus now shifts to Yamagishi, a man who shared a deep and inseparable bond with Azuma Shuri. Their friendship began in the 3rd grade of elementary school and lasted all the way through their high school graduation. Yet, despite their closeness, Yamagishi had one major struggle: Shuri's cooking. He found Shuri's lunches so unappetizing that he felt nauseous just by looking at them. Shuri's lunches were a complete disaster, pitch black, gooey, and utterly inedible. As this continued week after week, Shuri gradually began to lose weight. Unable to simply stand by and watch his friends suffer, Yamagishi finally spoke up, asking Shuri if his mother was a bad cook and if he was doing okay. Shuri admits that the inedible food is actually his own failed attempt at creation, leaving Yamagishi bewildered by his strange way of speaking. When Yamagishi asks if he has ever read a cookbook, it strikes Shuri as a revelation. Overjoyed, Shuri thanks his friend, realizing that a cookbook is exactly what he needs, a moment that serves as the awakening for his culinary journey. Taking the advice to heart, Shuri begins to improve his lunches from the very next day. The change is remarkable. Within 2 months, his bento transforms into delicious meals that are completely unrecognizable from his previous failures. As they share these meals, Yamagishi develops a genuine interest in Shuri, and the two boys gradually grow closer. Through this bond, Shuri realizes that aside from his eccentric cooking, he is actually quite normal. Shuri is described as an average boy, neither excelling nor failing in sports or studies. However, beneath this ordinary exterior lies an unpredictable streak. This becomes evident during an elementary school field trip, where Shuri suddenly vanishes, leaving his classmates and teachers in a state of panic as they realize he is nowhere to be found. Soren mentions that a child had been in the kitchen all morning, prompting a question about whether the boy is his student. Young Shuri looks on with eyes full of wonder and excitement. Meanwhile, Yamagishi reflects on Shuri's behavior after seeing him get scolded harshly by a teacher. He concludes that Shuri is anything but ordinary and believes there is something special about him. A montage depicts Shuri's journey through the years. In elementary school, Shuri's curiosity is evident during a visit to a theme park. As they enter middle school, Yamagishi remains by Shuri's side, and Shuri's unpredictable behavior begins to stabilize, allowing others to see him as a normal person. Eventually, Shuri moves on to a high school located close to his hometown. In his first year of high school, Shuri finds an opportunity to shine when his class decides to open a yakisoba stall for the cultural festival. While his classmates are indifferent, Shuri is ecstatic, declaring that he will create a unique five-flavored yakisoba rather than something ordinary. With unwavering enthusiasm, he takes it upon himself to gather all the ingredients and equipment needed for the event. Shuri refuses to settle for mediocrity, declaring that their stall must serve a dish that is truly unique. With total focus, he begins the cooking process, directing his classmates to boil and fry the noodles until they are perfectly crispy. To bring his vision to life, Shuri prepares a meticulous array of ingredients, ranging from fresh pork and shrimp to a complex blend of sauces and seasonings. With professional precision, Shuri begins by cutting the meat and vegetables into bite-sized pieces and carefully deveining the shrimp. After coating the shrimp in potato starch, he stir-fries the pork and vegetables, setting them aside before simmering a rich blend of Chinese soup, soy sauce, steak, and oyster sauce. To finish the dish, he thickens the sauce with a potato starch slurry and adds a final drizzle of sesame oil for a perfect aroma. The five-flavored yakisoba is finally complete. As the sauce is poured over the noodles, the dish becomes an instant hit at the cultural festival. Customers are delighted, praising the delicious sauce and noting that the quality feels like eating at a professional restaurant. The stall ends up being a resounding success. Building on the success of his yakisoba, Shuri is entrusted with running more restaurant stalls throughout his remaining school years. During these 3 years, Yamagishi remains by his side, whether they are studying or just playing. By sampling new dishes together and sharing every moment, the two grow incredibly close, eventually becoming best friends. While Shuri was focused on his culinary pursuits, Yamagishi had his own way of spending his time, often getting into various troubles. During one high school summer vacation, he traveled abroad alone and went missing for a while, only returning just before school started. He claimed he had simply been gambling, and his expertise in cheating was so impressive that Shuri found himself unable to even question him. The scene opens with a quiet night view of a residential neighborhood. Shuri and Yamagishi are catching up over the phone, reflecting on the fact that they have finally graduated. Yamagishi asks if Shuri is indeed heading to Tokyo, which Shuri confirms while sitting by his packed suitcase. Despite the transition, Shuri remains modest about himself, but Yamagishi assures him that he will do just fine no matter where he ends up. As he packs his belongings for the move to Tokyo, Shuri admits that the training is grueling and sometimes makes him want to run away, but he is determined to see it through to the end. During their call, Yamagishi brings up Shuri's persistence, recalling how he insisted on making miso from scratch using soybeans, even though it led to several terrible failures along the way. Yamagishi tells Shuri that, in the end, he managed to make miso that was even better than the store-bought kind. Shuri is left momentarily speechless by the compliment. Realizing the time, Shuri tells Yamagishi that he needs to go to bed since he is leaving tomorrow. As the call winds down, Shuri seems to hesitate, wanting to say one last thing. Yamagishi dismisses a final thought and tells Shuri he will see him in 2 years, to which Shuri enthusiastically agrees. As they finish their conversation and hang up, the scene shifts to a view of the sky. A somber revelation follows. 2 years pass, but Yamagishi never gets to meet Shuri again. The scene shifts from a train station on Earth to a vibrant, unfamiliar land. This is the biography of Azuma Shuri, a man from Earth whose life takes an unexpected turn. In a world he could never have imagined, Shuri's true tale begins as he finds himself serving food to a band of rough Tali in a distant land. Overwhelmed by frustration, Azuma, Shuri slams his hand down, feeling trapped by his own limitations. No matter how many times he tries, he cannot seem to get things right, leading him to question the very nature of talent and effort. He recalls his father's words that talent is innate, while effort is acquired. But The explanation doesn't sit right with him as he struggles to find a way forward. Talent and effort. Shuri still cannot clearly define them. Yet, with a quiet determination burning within, he continues to push forward in his culinary journey, even as a formidable warrior looms in the background. Azuma Shuri introduces himself to the reader, explaining that he has spent a month in a strange new world on the continent of Saburayu. Despite settling into his new environment and gathering information on essential ingredients like soy sauce, sake, and mirin, he remains troubled by the fact that he still hasn't found a way back home. Shuri notes that the seasonings found across the continent were developed hundreds of years ago by someone from Kamakura village, but he couldn't find any further information. Shifting his focus to the current situation, he describes a coastal forest where a battle is about to unfold, driven by a conflict over the control of the salt trade. Salt is an absolute necessity. Without it, the taste of any dish would be a disaster, especially since Lil has with hamburger steaks. Speaking of Lil, her significant impact in a recent battle has brought in a wealth of funding and food supplies. Now that resources are more abundant, Shuri thinks it might be the perfect time to ask Gungrave to hire more staff for the kitchen. A wide view of the mercenary camp shows the bustling environment with tents and supplies scattered around. Amidst the activity, Azuma Shuri is focused on his cooking, but as he stirs the pot, he suddenly pauses. A look of confusion and sudden realization crosses his face as he thinks to himself. That is, Azuma Shuri suddenly notices a mysterious figure slipping away into the dense forest. He points it out to Kuga, who is startled by his sudden remark. In her surprise, Kuga loses her grip, and the stack of plates she was carrying crashes to the ground. Shuri quickly asks if she is all right, and Kuga hurriedly reassures him that she is fine. The mysterious figure is revealed to be Kaguya. She is the captain of an intelligence unit and a former member of a religious organization known as the Temple. With her qualifications as a shrine maiden, she is a formidable warrior priestess. Shuri reflects on Mina's pure and demure beauty, noting her graceful and polite demeanor. He feels that having someone like her around helps him avoid being caught up in Asuga's provocative erotic field. Back in reality, Ultros steps in to help Mina gather the plates, to which she calmly replies that she is fine. As he helps pick up the plates, Ultros is introduced. He is the leader of the 2nd Infantry Battalion and a true symbol of strength, with an incredibly impressive height and muscular build. Despite his intimidating appearance, he hardly ever speaks, choosing instead to show his kindness through his actions. Shuri points toward the forest, mentioning that someone had just headed that way. Kuga, standing beside the silent Ultros, asks Shuri what brings him there. After a moment of thought, Kuga concludes that the mysterious figure Shuri spotted must be Kaguya. Whenever things don't go well with her sword, Kuga retreats to the woods to practice alone, as it is the best way for her to solve her problems. Shuri, standing alongside Ultros, looks on with a puzzled expression, wondering if that is truly how she handles things. The scene shifts to the camp, where the Tali are enjoying a meal. They are impressed by the luxurious shrimp stew, noting how rare and delicious it is, especially in a seaside town. As Shuri pours a drink for Gungrave, the leader praises the meal, and Shuri explains that adding shrimp to fish enhances the overall taste. As the Tali discuss how shrimp are a precious local specialty that cannot be easily preserved, Shuri is reminded of the incredible logistics and refrigeration systems of modern Earth. Wondering when he can return to his home, back in the moment, Shuri turns to Gungrave to mention that he spotted Kuga heading into the forest. Gungrave sighs, calling Kuga an idiot, and explaining that he is likely training in the forest to overcome a slump or some personal worries. Shuri curiously asks if it wouldn't be better to listen to him, but Gungrave dismisses the idea, stating it would only have the opposite effect and that Kuga needs time alone. Confused, Shuri asks for clarification, leading Gungrave to admit that when it comes to the art of the sword, he has nothing he can advise Kuga on. Gungrave looks on thoughtfully, admitting that Kuga possesses a genuine talent for swordsmanship. He reflects on the strength of his unit, noting that while he, Ultros, and Aureus are the only ones capable of fighting at a decent level, none of them can truly hold a candle to the skill of a swordmaster. Shuri reacts with wide-eyed excitement to the mention of swordmasters, imagining a world of fantasy where warriors use special techniques to slice through mass boulders. However, Gungrave quickly dismisses these notions. He explains that while there are indeed famous swordsmen in the area who incorporate magic into their fighting style, Kuga's talent is different. According to Gungrave, Kuga possesses a pure, ordinary form of swordsmanship, which is what truly distinguishes him from others. Shuri is wide-eyed with excitement, imagining the glory of magic swordsmen and calling it a man's dream. However, he wonders if Kuga is any different. Gungrave clarifies that Kuga is just an ordinary human who cannot use magic, excelling only through sheer physical ability and mastery of the blade, a true child of the sword. Gungrave then looks on thoughtfully, mentioning that something similar happened once before. Gungrave recalls a time when Kuga had advanced too far into the front lines and was suddenly ambushed by hundreds of arrows. In a situation that would normally be fatal, Kuga incredibly managed to cut down every single arrow without taking a single scratch. Hearing this, Shuri is left speechless, wondering if she is some kind of manga swordsman. Shuri is completely floored, imagining Kuga as a legendary manga hero. Gungrave continues his explanation, highlighting Ultra's immense physical power and Orius' long-range capabilities. He also mentions his own ability to adapt to any technique he sees. However, he concludes that when it comes to fighting within Kuga's range, none of them stand a chance against her. Gungrave candidly admits that his ability to fight alongside Kuga is based on his memory and various tricks rather than raw talent. He believes that if Kuga continues to hone his skills, he will eventually leave Gungrave in the dust. Confused, Shuri asks why someone as strong as Kuga would be struggling with his sword, and why he would ever leave someone as capable as Gungrave behind. Gungrave simply sighs, admitting that he doesn't have the answer. Gungrave recalls a confusing conversation with Kuga, where she spoke of gratitude and self-love and foot angles in a way that completely bypassed his understanding. He reflects that their perspectives are on entirely different levels, like a genius and a prodigy who simply cannot find common ground. While sharing a meal with Shuri, Gungrave admits that while he recognizes Kuga's inner turmoil, he is unable to help her since her path involves a solitary struggle in the forest that transcends his own abilities. Shuri listens intently, feeling a slight sense of worry. Gungrave smiles confidently, stating that Kuga is the type of person who can manage on his own. Shuri looks at him with admiration, noting how much Gungrave truly believes in his comrade. As the atmosphere relaxes, Shuri pours Gungrave another drink, reflecting on the words Gungrave had just shared with him. The next day, Kuga disappears into the forest alone. Watching her leave, Akari can't help but feel worried. Even while working in the kitchen with Soren, he remains distressed, wondering what he should do to help. Finally, as night falls, Akari makes a firm decision and sets out. Akari cautiously enters the forest under the cover of night, clutching a lantern to light his way. The oppressive darkness is more intense than he expected, and he begins to feel a sense of dread as he pushes forward. Recalling that there is an open area ahead, he tries to keep his composure, but suddenly, something catches his eye, leaving him startled. Akari stops abruptly, his expression shifting to one of pure surprise. Clutching his lantern tightly, he stares ahead into the oppressive silence of the woods, startled by whatever has appeared before him. In the heart of the dark forest, Akari finds Kuga. She stands poised and focused, her sword raised high as she continues her solitary and rigorous training. Akari watches in absolute awe and shock as Kuga unleashes a series of powerful, precise strikes. The intensity of her movements and the raw force of her blade leave him completely stunned. A montage of Kuga's movements unfolds, showcasing her discipline and mastery as she swings her blade with lethal precision and unwavering focus. Shuri watches Kuga in amazement, thinking to himself that she is a stunning figure of martial prowess. He compares her skill to the training of the Mercenary group, realizing that she is on a completely different dimension. Suddenly, Kuga senses someone watching and asks who is there, before realizing it is Shuri and telling him not to scare her like that. Kuga offers a soft apology for scaring Shuri. As they stand together, Shuri finds himself captivated, noting how astonishingly handsome and androgynous Kuga's features are. He reflects on Kuga's reputation as a formidable warrior capable of facing 1,000 foes, feeling a mix of awe and a slight sense of defeat at just how good-looking the commander is. Kuga reflects on Gungrave's involvement in her life, acknowledging that her own burdens had weighed heavily on him as well. Shuri mentions how Gungrave had lamented his inability to solve her problems on his own. With a gentle smile, Kuga tells Shuri to go ahead and sit down, and he hesitantly complies as she settles onto the ground, leaning against her sword. Kuga remarks that Shuri is sharper than she expected for noticing her frequent trips to the forest, though she admits she had been so focused on her training that she lost awareness of her surroundings. When Kuga doubts that Shuri could actually solve her problems, Shuri gently suggests that just talking about them might provide some relief. After a moment of reflection, Kuga agrees, noting that it has been a long time since she's shared her burdens and decides to open up to him. Kuga opens up further, admitting that she feels she is currently in a slump. She thinks of Lil, who has been working hard and creating great things to aid the war effort, and feels that her own ability to only swing a sword is insufficient by comparison. Hearing this, Shuri looks at her with concern and asks if her strength isn't something important as well. Kuga admits that while tools are important, she believes that relying too much on them is a mistake, as true strength comes from one's own skill. However, she looks down with a conflicted expression, lamenting that her sword hasn't achieved the same results as the explosive stones and other inventions. Kuga admits that the introduction of powerful tools made her feel as though her position was being stolen, leaving her feeling anxious and inferior. She confesses that the more she dwelled on this, the more her skills suffered. Shuri reflects on her words, noting how fear and impatience create a vicious cycle that dulls a warrior's edge, wondering if the true problem lies within her heart. Shuri admits to himself that since he has never fought with a sword, he cannot offer any direct answers to Kuga's struggle. He worries that simply listening won't solve anything, but he is determined to find a way to be useful. As a brief memory of his past in the kitchen flashes through his mind, a light bulb goes off. With a sudden realization, he turns to Kuga, ready to propose a solution. Shuri suddenly asks Kuga if she is hungry, leaving her completely bewildered. He explains that hunger only makes worries feel worse, and insists that the first step to solving her problem is to fill her stomach. Shuri returns to the kitchen area, apologizing for the wait as he brings out a generous amount of supplies. Kuga is impressed by the quantity of ingredients he has gathered. Shuri reveals his plan to prepare a luxurious Latinite snack using horse mackerel, leaving Kuga surprised by such a lavish choice for a simple snack. Shuri tells Kuga that Gungrave won't be angry about serving a feast to someone struggling with their worries. He then begins preparing the meal, listing the horse mackerel and pepper, and proudly introduces his special tartar sauce, detailing the ingredients: eggs, onions, mayonnaise, vinegar, salt, pepper, and parsley. Shuri reflects on the challenging process of making mayonnaise, detailing the specific ingredients and the patience required to ensure the oil is added correctly. He is determined to prove that the effort he put into creating both the mayonnaise and the tartar sauce was worth it. As he stands ready with his knife and the fish on the table, Kuga looks on with curiosity, asking what he plans to do with the fish. Shuri tells Kuga that he plans to fry the fish, and she happily admits that she loves fried food. Pleased by her reaction, Shuri gets to work, meticulously scaling the horse mackerel and filleting it into 3 precise pieces. She carefully removes the small bones from the horse mackerel fillets to ensure a hassle-free dining experience, then seasons them with salt and ginger juice. He mentions the special refrigerator that Lil worked hard to create for him to keep the food cool. As compensation for her effort, Shuri prepares a generous amount of hamburger steaks, though he seems slightly overwhelmed by the quantity he's making. Shuri carefully places the prepared fish into the special refrigerator, suggesting that they wait a moment. When Kuga asks if he's going to cook it right away, Shuri explains that he needs a little more time. To pass the time, he brightly suggests, "While we wait, let's have some sake," as he presents a bottle and a cup. Kuga happily sips the sake, remarking that it is a special treat after a long practice. When Shuri asks if she can taste the specific flavor of the drink, he reveals that he doesn't actually drink much himself. He explains that as a chef, he cannot afford to dull his palate with alcohol, a reason that Kuga finds perfectly sensible. Shuri admits that even he occasionally feels the need to cut loose, a sentiment Kuga acknowledges as simply being human. Seeing an opportunity, Shuri encourages Kuga to do the same, suggesting that when burdened by worries, the best approach is sometimes to stop thinking about them entirely. He advises her to refresh both her body and mind first, admitting that this is the only advice he can offer. Shuri tells Kuga that he wants to make it easier for her to deal with her worries and hopes she can relax for now, believing it will help resolve things. This thought leads Shuri to reflect on his own past. He recalls his training period, remembering the times he fell into deep despair because there were things he simply could not do, no matter how much he increased his training. Just as he is lost in these memories, Kuga's voice brings him back to the present. Shuri recalls a memory of his master from his training days, who advised him to drink and sleep well before tackling his worries. Though it resulted in a terrible hangover, Shuri realized that overthinking had been making his movements stiff and holding him back. In the present, Kuga listens to his story with a soft, understanding smile. Kuga recalls her struggles in battle, feeling that her body size has become a limit to her talent. Shuri, hearing this, firmly believes that limits do not exist. This brings back a memory of Soren, who smiled with confidence, believing that with her unwavering effort, Kuga would one day surpass even him. Shuri watches Kuga, who stands in a combat stance but looks deeply distressed. Overwhelmed by her own limitations, Kuga pleads with him to stop, questioning how he can possibly brush aside such painful struggles with simple, optimistic words. Shuri looks on, his expression turning serious as he listens to her pain. Shukri looks at Kuga with sincerity, telling her that her swordplay was truly beautiful and drew a stunning arc. He firmly tells her that she hasn't reached her limit, but is simply hitting a wall. With a determined expression, he urges her not to give up, stating that having such talent is a duty for someone with her immense potential. Shuri thinks of Kuga as a person who leads the way and fascinates others with her way of life, showing dreams even to those who believe they lack talent. Hearing his sincere praise, Kuga softly repeats the word wall, looking at Shuri with a thoughtful and moved expression. The atmosphere shifts as the focus turns to the preparation of the meal. It is time for the final touches. First, the mackerel is washed and patted dry to remove excess moisture, then seasoned with a blend of salt, pepper, and ginger juice. Meanwhile, oil is heated to 160 degrees Celsius to briefly fry the leaf parts of the sansho plant, with the stems carefully removed. The preparation continues as the fried sansho leaves are mixed into panko breadcrumbs, which are then lightly misted with water and left to sit. Azuma Akari dips the seasoned mackerel into a batter of egg, flour, and water before coating it in the panko mixture. To finish, the oil temperature is raised to 180 degrees Celsius, and the fish is fried side down for 1 minute, flipped for another 20 seconds, and then drained. The fried mackerel is finally complete. Azuma Akari carefully plates the golden brown fish and adds a dollop of tartar sauce. As he presents the meal, Kuga is amazed, admitting she has never seen fish fried so beautifully. Akari smiles and invites her to enjoy the dish, noting that he finished it off with a touch of spicy mustard. Kuga takes a bite of the fried mackerel, her expression instantly shifting to one of pure bliss. She finds the dish absolutely irresistible, marveling at the contrast between the crispy coating and the fluffy interior, while noting how perfectly the sweet and sour sauce pairs with the flavor of the sansho pepper. With the plate now empty, Kuga lets out a satisfied sigh, admitting that the meal was truly satisfying. She then turns her attention to Shuri, noting how impressive his knife skills are. Shuri modestly agrees, explaining that he pays close attention to his technique. He teaches Kuga that when preparing fish, cutting too roughly can ruin the flavor, so it is essential to be delicate and let the knife glide smoothly over the soft parts. Kuga is struck by a sudden epiphany. She realizes that relying on sheer strength is impossible for her build, and that she must instead master the techniques and skills that form the foundation of swordsmanship. Overjoyed by this breakthrough, she turns to Shuri and thanks him, leaving the confused young man blinking in surprise. Shuri admits that he may have caused trouble by not understanding Kuga's worries, but she simply calls him a genius. Driven by her new realization, Kuga tells Shuri to go to sleep while she spends more time practicing her techniques. The next day, Kuga is still completely consumed by her training, desperately wanting to preserve the feeling of her breakthrough and insisting on being left alone to perfect her skills. Shuri is glad to see Kuga looking refreshed and energized. This newfound clarity pays off in the following battle, where Kuga fights with overwhelming skill, achieving a victory reminiscent of a legendary hero. From a distance, Miral remarks that she seems to have reached a state of enlightenment, having entered a completely new realm of understanding. The armored cavalry charges forward with a thunderous roar, shouting for their comrades to crush the enemy's vanguard. However, amidst the chaos of the assault, a mysterious spherical device rolls across the battlefield, marking the first live combat deployment of Lil's new weapon, and leaving the soldiers in shock. The enemy formation collapses as explosions rip through their ranks, leaving the armored cavalry bewildered and terrified, wondering how many mages the opposition has deployed. On the other side, the Tali are ecstatic, praising the incredible power of the explosive stones and anticipating an easy victory. Lil looks on, witnessing the devastating impact of her invention. Kuga introduces herself as the captain of the 1st Infantry Unit within the Mercenary Corps. She takes great pride and honor in her role, which requires her to be the first to charge into the front lines to take down enemies. Her subordinates share this pride in being the hardest workers, though she notes that the mage unit are the ones who truly earn the most. Kuga speaks of her bond with her greatsword, claiming it as the very essence of her being on the battlefield. However, she admits that this was only the case until a new force emerged. Enter Will, the genius whose blossoming talents led to the creation of incredible explosive and time-activated ignition stones, changing the nature of their warfare. Even within her own unit, the soldiers are overjoyed, believing that Lil's inventions will allow them to crush their enemies more effectively. However, Kuga finds herself unable to share their genuine happiness. For her, the essence of battle was the pride she took in her own strength and the skill of defeating foes with her weapon as she charged across the battlefield. As the battle rages on, a new thought crosses Kuga's mind. Would it be enough to simply rely on the power of explosion stones? She quickly dismisses the idea, knowing that such a mindset is unacceptable. Her pride as a warrior is rooted in her past. She recalls her days as a resident of the slums, where she and Gungrave fought to survive in a harsh environment. It was through those struggles that she developed her immense confidence in her swordsmanship, a skill that defines her very existence. Kuga reflects on her youth, where she survived by training and fighting adults as a guard. accumulating a mountain of combat experience. She remembers Gungrave as a rare genius who could duel her head-on and master her hard-won swordsmanship in a single glance. Though Gungrave has now risen to become the captain, Kuga's protective instincts remain, making her reluctant to let him risk his life on the front lines. Kuga is determined to be the shield for Gungrave. Wanting to use her strength to ensure his path to glory, however, she confesses that her spirit has grown dull. In her attempt to prove that her sword is still sufficient, compared to the new explosive tools, she has only found anxiety. This internal doubt has manifested as hesitation on the battlefield, throwing her off balance and clouding her once unwavering resolve. Kuga contemplates the steep climb toward Gungrave's level of genius, fearing she has finally reached the limit of her own talent. Back in the mercenary camp, the atmosphere turns tense when a subordinate suggests that they should focus on using explosion stones effectively rather than training with the sword. Suggestions strikes a nerve, causing Kuga to lash out in anger at the man. Kuga erupts in anger, shouting that as soldiers, it is their duty to fight using their own strength and swords. Her subordinates attempt to justify their reliance on the new tools, arguing that they achieve results more safely and efficiently. But Kuga quickly cuts them off, refusing to hear any more of their excuses. For days, Kuga has been training alone in the forest after meals. With the battle approaching in just a few days, she is desperate to regain both her swordsmanship and her lost confidence. To achieve this, she engages in a rigorous practice known as mirror training, facing a reflection of herself to hone her strength. Through extreme concentration, Kuga manifests an illusory enemy and ideal version of herself that exists within her. She engages in a fierce duel with this phantom, clashing swords in a rapid exchange of strikes to push her limits and reclaim her lost confidence. Kuga clashes her blade against the illusory version of herself in a flurry of strikes. Despite the intensity of the training, she pulls back, frustrated by her own performance and muttering that it is no good. Standing alone in the forest, Kuga is consumed by a sense of failure. Realizing that her wavering heart has dulled her sword, she reflects on her subordinates, noting how they have neglected proper training in favor of the efficiency provided by explosion stones, losing their pride as infantry soldiers in the process. Yet, she quickly challenges her own reasoning. She admits that if tools make victory easier, they should be used. This realization leaves her tormented, questioning why she still hesitates, struggles, and suffers in her pursuit of strength. Kuga contemplates the danger of relying on tools, fearing that in a critical moment her comrades might die, feeling helpless. She imagines them regretting their lack of swordsmanship as they face death, wondering if they would have survived or won had they trained harder. Unable to bear the thought of them dying in regret, Kuga resolves to give everything she has, accepting her own death as long as she leaves no regrets behind. Kuga concludes her training with a firm resolve, believing that true reliability comes only from one's own strength. However, her focus is interrupted when she senses someone lurking in the shadows of the forest. Alert and suspicious, she turns toward the hidden observer and demands to know who is standing there. Azuma Shuri steps out from the shadows, apologizing for startling Kuga. Relieved, Kuga scolds him for scaring her. As Shuri smiles, it is noted that he joined the group about a month ago, and his delicious cooking has brought a new sense of cheer and warmth to the mercenaries' mealtimes, significantly improving the group's overall atmosphere. Kuga watches Azuma Shuri as he interacts with the other mercenaries and prepares meals. While his presence has been beneficial, she confesses to herself that she cannot completely shake her distrust of him. She is haunted by unanswered questions: why he appeared so suddenly, what his purpose was at Collinbell Hill, and how he learned to create such strange yet delicious dishes. To her, his skills and his arrival remain an enigma. Kuga questions Shuri about the defeated look on his face, though she decides not to delve deeper into it for the moment. She reflects on how Shuri, driven by curiosity and concern, had followed her into the forest at night. Surprised that he could sense her inner turmoil, Kuga acknowledges to herself that she still has a long way to go. Sitting together under the moonlight, Kuga admits to Shuri that she is currently in a slump. Encouraged by his suggestion that talking might help, she opens up about her inner conflict, confessing that her sword has failed to surpass the efficiency of explosive stones. Yet she remains convinced that one must ultimately rely on their own strength. Kuga had intended to keep her composure, but once she began speaking, all her suppressed emotions poured out. She confesses her struggle to become stronger and faster, admitting that she feels weak and is plagued by anxiety regarding the successes of her comrades. Kuga continues to vent, admitting that she is jealous of Lil's success and feels pathetic for having such thoughts. But just as she sinks deeper into her own self-pity, Azuma Shuri interrupts the heavy atmosphere with a simple, unexpected question. "Kuga-san, aren't you hungry?" Leaving her completely bewildered. Kuga finds it absurd that Shuri treats her deep insecurities as if she were merely a hungry child, noting that even Gungrave wouldn't have come up with such a simple solution. However, as she watches him work, she feels her worries becoming pointless, attributing this shift to Shuri's remarkable personality. She is mesmerized by his precise and confident movements, comparing his refined knife work to that of a master wielding a legendary sword. As the food cooks, Azuma Shuri suggests they wait a moment and offers Kuga some sake, which she accepts with surprise. Sitting together in the quiet of the forest, Shuri gently explains that while he can't provide specific professional advice, he wants to create a space where she can simply relax and process her burdens. Kuga listens intently, reflecting on the unfamiliar feeling of being told to just relax. As she begins to relax, Kuga finds herself reflecting on Azuma Shuri's character. She realizes that he is a smart and empathetic person who truly understands the struggles of others. Feeling a pang of guilt, she regrets having doubted him and viewed him with suspicion in the past. She acknowledges that Shuri has earned Gungrave's trust and gets along well with Lil, realizing that he must have faced his own hardships since arriving in this world. Kuga thinks about how Shuri is just an ordinary person, kind and smart, but completely lacking in combat skill. This reflection leads her back to her own hidden struggle. She once believed her physical build and strength were limits that prevented her from having natural talent for swordsmanship. It was a truth she never wanted to admit. However, she acknowledges that despite these perceived limitations, she grew stronger every time she survived a deadly battle. As Kuga dwells on the idea of her limits, Azuma Shuri gently interrupts her, pleading with her not to use such sad words to describe her progress. He looks at her with sincerity, telling her that her sword is truly beautiful. He reassures her that she hasn't reached her limit, rather, she is simply hitting a wall that she can eventually overcome. Kuga is stunned by Shuri's words. As she processes his kindness, she is reminded of the grim reality of her existence, the countless enemies she has slain, and the blood that has stained her hands. To her, a sword has always been nothing more than a tool for killing. Yet Shuri dared to call it beautiful, and dismissed her perceived limits as merely hitting a wall. Kuga ponders Shuri's words, wondering about the wall he mentioned. Deciding to trust him, she envisions her own combat prowess, and concludes that if she has indeed hit a limit, there must be a way to break through it. She begins to search for something she might have overlooked within herself to reach a new level of strength. Azuma Shuri announces that the food is finally ready. After carefully preparing the ingredients, he presents a plate of golden brown fried shrimp to Kuga with a bright, friendly smile. Kuga takes a bite of the fried shrimp, and her eyes widen in shock. She is absolutely amazed by the contrast between the crispy exterior and the fluffy interior, as the rich, savory flavor of the fish fills her mouth with an unimaginable deliciousness. Kuga continues to rave about the fried shrimp, praising the crispy coating and the perfect balance of the sweet and tangy sauce. Shuri smiles, happy that she enjoys it. However, Kuga begins to think deeply about the way Shuri handles the knife, noting the gentle yet precise nature of his slicing. This observation triggers a memory of her own battles where she relied on desperation and brute force to defeat larger enemies. As she compares Shuri's precision to her own aggression, Kuga begins to see a new path forward for her sword. Kuga reaches a breakthrough, realizing that her path isn't defined by desperation or brute force, but by a unique technique rooted deep within her, forged through countless life-or-death struggles. Grateful for the spark of inspiration, she thanks Shuri. As night falls, she sends Shuri back ahead and draws her sword once more, determined to refine her skills. Kuga stands alone in the forest, reflecting on her past reliance on brute arm strength. She begins to swing her sword, consciously channeling power from her legs, hips, and shoulders, allowing it to flow seamlessly into the blade. Realizing that muscle alone is not enough, she pushes further, seeking to master the very motion of her bones and the balance of her entire body to achieve total control. To further refine her skills, Kuga engages in mirror training, facing a spectral image of herself. As the two clash with blinding speed, Kuga is startled by the unexpected movements of her double, forcing her to react instantly to her own strength. Kuga engages in a fierce exchange of blows with her spectral double, realizing that the figure before her is the embodiment of her former ideal self. As their blades clash in a flurry of sparks, she reflects on how she had merely idealized that version of herself, without truly acting to reach it. With a sudden, decisive strike, she cuts through the illusion, pushing beyond her past limitations. Kuga is thrown back by the intensity of the clash. Gasping, she realizes her sword has slipped from her hand. The shock was so immense that it surpassed the limits of her grip, leaving her wrist, elbow, and shoulder completely numb. Kuga looks at the tree, seeing that the sword which had slipped from her hand sliced through more than half of the trunk. She realizes that she wasn't at her limit, but had merely been hitting a wall in her growth. Remembering Shura's perspective, she bursts into a triumphant laugh, exhilarated by her breakthrough. That night, Kuga swung her sword tirelessly, feeling herself grow dozens of steps stronger in a single night. But the next morning, her triumph was met with an endless lecture from Shuri, who had been worried about her. Seeing the calm smile on his face as he scolded her, Kuga found it truly scary. Kuga smiles warmly at Shuri, thanking him for the help that allowed her to overcome her wall. But the peaceful moment is abruptly interrupted as a thunderous army of armored cavalry charges forward. On the defensive line, soldiers shout warnings of the approaching enemy and scramble to prepare explosive stones to halt the onslaught. Ignoring the desperate pleas of her soldiers, who call her reckless, Kuga charges headlong into the enemy lines. Even as the enemy archers unleash a volley of arrows, she pushes forward, recalling a profound realization she had about her sword possessing two different faces. As the arrows rain down, Kuga moves with blinding speed, her blade dancing to deflect every projectile. She reveals that her sword possesses a gentle sword aspect, a manifestation of her awakened technique. Her subordinates can only stare in disbelief as she carves a path through the onslaught. As the armored cavalry charges toward her, Kuga reveals the other side of her sword's nature. Unlike the gentle technique she used against the arrows, this is the sword of absolute power. With a single devastating strike, she cleaves right through the enemy riders and their horses. With a single devastating strike, Kuga unleashes the strong sword, slicing through both horse and rider with ease. Moving like a blur, she tears through the enemy ranks, noting that her attack speed, reflexes, and overall body control have increased beyond comparison. With a single devastating blow, Kuga tears through the enemy cavalry, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. Her subordinates can only watch in stunned silence, completely awestruck by the sheer power and precision of their captain's combat prowess. The atmosphere at the military camp is jubilant as the soldiers celebrate another great victory with cheers and food. They credit Captain Kuga for the win, acknowledging her incredible strength. Meanwhile, a group of subordinates bows deeply in apology for the impudent things they had previously said, while one soldier tentatively tries to get Kuga's attention. One of the subordinates hesitantly approaches Captain Kuga, admitting it is presumptuous, but asking if she could teach them swordsmanship. Kuga, while eating, remarks on their splendid change of heart, thinking to herself that the idea might not be so bad. To maintain the kingdom, military power is indeed indispensable. When the unified kingdom was first founded, many martial arts, sword techniques, and tactics were created. However, within about 10 years, most of these arts declined, and now only two remain. One of these is the Kuga style, a legendary sword style founded by one of the heroes, the sword Saint Kuga Yanagi. The legend speaks of a sword technique so devastating that it was considered a feat unimaginable for a human. This power is linked to the Blood Garden, a field where the plants were dyed red by the blood of a massacre attributed to Kuga Yanagi, though the absolute truth of the event remains uncertain. Such was the overwhelming power possessed by Kuga Yanagi. Kuga Hanagi was not only a master of the sword, but also the supreme commander of the unified kingdom, a leader who fought on the front lines and inspired his comrades. Though his subordinates were emboldened by his actions, his close friends often found him exasperating. In a haunting moment of reflection, he once remarked that he believed there were only corpses left behind him. Kuga Yanagi realized that by leaping to the front and becoming a shield, he could save tens of thousands of lives. This conviction gave birth to the concept of the life-giving sword, the philosophy of killing one to save many, which would eventually be interpreted as a non-killing sword that suppresses enemies without taking lives in the modern era. Kuga Yanagi's way of life was eventually portrayed in numerous plays and stories, leading to him being deified and revered as the sword god. After retiring from his duties, he became a kindly old man who spent his time fishing and chatting with the king and his old comrades, always enjoying a plate of fried horse mackerel. Even in his old age, the legendary sword god Kuga Yanagi remained a hearty eater, his wrinkled face always beaming with a smile as he enjoyed his favorite dish. This spirit lives on in the present, as Captain Kuga and her soldiers gather around a lavish spread of fried fish, finally savoring the moment they had all been waiting for. The peaceful reflection on the legend of Kuga Yanagi is suddenly shattered as the scene shifts to a battlefield in total chaos. Soldiers struggle desperately to hold the line against an unexpected enemy. In the midst of the panic, Azuma Shuri, clutching a pot, is startled by a companion who urges him to hurry and get out of there. As the order to retreat spreads, Shuri looks on in shock, realizing the danger they are in. Just as the situation turns dire, a group of figures in magnificent attire emerges from the fray. Azuma Shuri stares in shock, realizing that the mage unit has arrived. The mage unit immediately unleashes a devastating torrent of magic, incinerating the enemy soldiers in a massive explosion of fire. As the screams of the dying fill the air, Azuma Shuri watches in sheer horror, stunned by the brutal and overwhelming power of the magic. Time passes, and the scene shifts to a desolate, snowy landscape where the Gungrave Mercenary Corps has set up their camp. As the weather turns chilly and the soldiers gather around their fires, Azuma Shuri appears, introducing himself to the reader as the story moves toward the current state of the course. The war over salt rights has finally come to an end, leaving the Gungrave Mercenary Corps with a massive reward in supplies and gold. Gungrave is thrilled at the prospect of upgrading his troops' equipment, but the search for a new cook remains unsuccessful. He explains to his disappointed Azuma Shuri that no one is skilled enough to assist him, as Shuri's unique cooking techniques are simply too difficult for others to master. The narrative shifts to a new conflict, this time driven by the simple desire for mineral resources, specifically an iron ore capable of producing high-quality steel. In a desolate, snowy landscape filled with military tents, the biting cold is oppressive. Azuma Shuri, dressed in his apron, shivers uncontrollably, barely able to cope with the freezing temperature, while his companion in heavy winter gear comments on the weather. Lil is completely frozen up by the biting cold, leaving Shuri in a panic. To help her recover, Shuri offers her a cup of homemade amazake, explaining that it is a sweet type of sake. After taking a sip, the warmth of the drink immediately brings Lil back to her senses. Lil happily sips the drink, commenting on its sweetness and the absence of a strong alcoholic taste. Azuma Shuri reminds her that it is technically still alcohol, advising her to have only one cup. Shuri explains that he created the amazake using siyas, noting that while this world has drinks similar to Japanese sake, he had to beg Gungrave to acquire the necessary ingredient. Azuma Shuri explains his reasoning for the limited supply of amazake, while he doesn't want the soldiers intoxicated during an emergency. A small amount of alcohol is ideal for warming their bodies in the freezing cold. He watches with a smile as Lil adorably enjoys her drink. However, the delicious aroma attracts Teg, who approaches with great enthusiasm, asking for a taste of the drink. Teg is introduced as the captain of the Mercenary Corps archery unit. Despite his position, he is a light-hearted man with a goofy grin, often serving as the group's comic relief. Azuma Shuri offers him some of the warm amazake, which Teg happily accepts and drinks. Teg is in absolute bliss, savoring the warmth and sweetness of the amazake. However, his joy turns to shock when Azuma Shuri reminds him that it's technically alcohol and he's only allowed one cup. Devastated that he didn't savor it more, Teg is comforted by Shuri's promise to make more once the war ends. Meanwhile, Lil shifts the mood, entirely stubbornly demanding a hamburger. When Teg points out that she has already eaten plenty of them, Lil simply declares that today is a new day. Lil is completely swept up in her craving, shouting with sparkling eyes that hamburgers are always delicious regardless of when they are eaten. Her intensity is so overwhelming that Teg finds her expression scary, while Azuma Shuri dryly concludes that she is probably not okay. As the commotion continues, the view opens up to the camp, showing other high-ranking members like Kuga, Donnie, and Aiden standing nearby. Azuma Shuri observes Gungrave drinking amazake, explaining that the commander's drink is non-alcoholic and made from rare rice kojin ingredient that was incredibly difficult to obtain from sake breweries. As Gungrave gathers with other captains like Ultros for a strategy meeting, Shuri reflects on the challenging situation, noting that the enemy's familiarity with the snowy terrain puts the mercenary group at a significant disadvantage. One of the captains is looking over here. Azuma Shuri notices Orius watching him from the strategy meeting. Turning to Teg, Shuri points out that all the high-ranking officers are gathered and asks why Teg isn't participating. Teg simply laughs it off, admitting that he isn't very good at the thinking part of leadership and prefers to leave the strategy to Gungrave. Shuri is left wondering if that is really okay. Azuma Shuri and Lil share a moment of sympathy, feeling bad for the burden Gungrave carries as leader. In the center of the camp, Gungrave announces the conclusion of the meeting, deciding that the mercenaries will rest for the day and begin their advance tomorrow. As the soldiers disperse, Shuri is left to deal with the biting cold, shivering as he scrubs through a massive pile of dishes. Azuma Shuri continues his grueling task, lamenting how rough it is to wash dishes in such freezing weather. As he works, Arius approaches him and politely asks if he has a moment to talk. As Orius approaches, Azuma Shuri thinks about her reputation as a true magic specialist and the leader of the Mage Corps. He compares her power of natural manipulation to Lil's magical engineering, recalling a time he saw Orius mercilessly drop a massive, meter-wide fireball on an enemy. Azuma Shuri continues to reflect on Orius, describing her as a stunning and absolute beauty. He imagines that if she were on Earth, she would be scouted for show business in an instant. However, he quickly adds a blunt observation: her chest is completely flat. Azuma Shuri quickly adds a disclaimer that he is actually a fan of flat chests, even as he bluntly compares Orius' chest to a board. However, as Orius addresses him, he becomes bewildered, wondering why she is talking to him. He reflects on the fact that despite working there for some time, Orius has always been cold toward him. leading him to believe that she doesn't like him very much. Azuma Shuri notes that while he has managed to get along with Orius' subordinates, the captain herself seems to have no fondness for him. He recalls how she almost always glares at him, leading him to believe that he is still viewed as a suspicious newcomer of unknown origins. Just as he is lost in thought, Orius speaks up, telling him that she needs to talk to him. As Orius prepares to speak, she begins to blush and fidget nervously with her fingers. Shuri is completely stunned, unable to reconcile bashful behavior with the cold and terrifying image he had of her. He wonders what is causing this strange atmosphere, as Orius hesitantly tries to find her words. Orius suddenly asks Shuri to teach her how to cook, leaving him completely shocked that the commander of the Mage Corps would make such a request. While wondering about her motive, Shuri quickly comes to a conclusion, imagining Orius' hidden feelings for Gungrave. Orius' soft, blooming smile whenever she looks at Gungrave is unmistakable to everyone. Within the Mercenary group, her crush is an open secret that they all quietly support. However, despite her efforts to hide it, the only person who remains completely unaware is Gungrave himself, leaving Shuri to wonder just how dense he can be. Shuri considers Orius' request, asking if she has any prior experience. When she admits she has none, he explains that while there are simple dishes, cooking cannot be learned overnight. Curious about her sudden motivation, Shuri asks why she wants to learn. Orius, looking hesitant, asks if he can keep this a secret, to which Shuri readily agrees. Orius blushes and enthusiastically confesses her love for Gungrave. Shuri, completely unfazed, notes that everyone already knows. While feeling a bit cynical about the pairing of a beautiful woman and a handsome man, Shuri changes the subject, mentioning how much Gungrave has been enjoying the cooking lately. This prompts Orius to admit that she felt a little jealous, leaving Shuri bewildered. Shuri momentarily spirals into a comedic panic, wondering if suddenly become a character in a romance story. Meanwhile, Orius opens up further, admitting that she wants to learn to cook so she can finally do something for Gungrave. Despite being one of the people closest to him, she feels helpless and hopes that preparing meals will make him notice her more. Shuri realizes that Orius isn't just a rival, but a compassionate person driven by her love for Gungrave. Orius solemnly declares that everyone has their own battlefield for her. That battlefield is the kitchen, while Shuris is the actual field of combat. Shuri tells Orius that if she truly wants to be useful to Gungrave, it would be better to excel in the area where she already shines. He reflects on her rare talent for magic and her ability to take down the most enemies on the battlefield, questioning the reason why such a formidable fighter would suddenly seek usefulness in the kitchen. Orius reveals the real reason for her sudden interest in cooking, admitting that she has fallen into a slump. Despite her relentless training, she feels she has hit a wall where neither her firepower nor her magic control is improving. Overwhelmed by the feeling that she has reached the limits of her talent, she compares her struggle to what happened to Kuga. Orius explains that this is why she wants to contribute to Gungrave in a different way, asking Shuri if someone like her can truly learn a new skill. Shuri acknowledges her desire to expand her capabilities, telling her that she can definitely learn to cook. However, internally, Shuri is shaken. He cannot simply ignore her words about reaching her talent limit. Shuri explains that since magic is not his field, he cannot offer advice on her talent limit. He also warns her that learning to cook takes time and won't provide an immediate solution for Gungrave. However, he suddenly offers to help her with matters of the heart, which completely catches Orius off guard and fills her with excitement. Shuri asks Orius if she has ever had a meal alone with Gungrave. Blushing and flustered, Orius admits that she hasn't. Seizing the opportunity, Shuri enthusiastically proposes to arrange a private dinner for the two of them, promising a special dish that will help deepen their relationship. Orius is thrilled by the idea of a magical dish. Shuri explains that in his hometown, there is a special meal shared among close friends and loved ones, and he suggests inviting both Gungrave and Orius, since the snowy setting is perfect. However, Orius is taken aback to find that Shuri intends to accompany them, to which he simply tells her to treat him as part of the background. Gungrave arrives, curious about the dinner invitation he received. Beside him, Orius looks on as Azuma Shuri greets them with a smile, welcoming his guests into the tent and inviting them to take their seats. The scene shifts to the dining area, where a round table is neatly set with a steaming pot at the center. Shuri explains that he had Lil quickly put together the tent, chairs, and table to set the right mood. He also describes the ponzu-like sauce, detailing the precise blend of soy sauce, vinegar, mirin, and lemon juice used for the dish. Shuri announces that he will begin preparing the dish right in front of them. Gungrave is thrilled by the live cooking, but Orius watches with a suspicious glare. Shuri is bewildered by her expression, realizing she's imagining some romantic ball element between him and Gungrave. Quickly dismissing the notion, Shuri focuses on the food, noting that the broth is already prepared and the meal is almost finished. Shuri presents the meal as yudofu, a hot tofu dish gently simmered until warmed to the core. He explains that the excellent broth comes from high-quality kelp he purchased during a previous stay in a seaside town. Furthermore, he reveals that the tofu is freshly made, having put significant effort into extracting nigari from soybeans to create it. Shuri explains the painstaking effort behind the meal, recalling how he created the nigari using a traditional Japanese large kettle method. He describes collecting seawater from a seaside town and collaborating with Lil, who crafted the necessary tools for the process. Despite the difficulties with temperature control and numerous trials and errors, he eventually succeeded. However, as a thank you for Lil's assistance, he had to prepare a ridiculous amount of hamburger steaks, leaving him anxious that Gungrave might call him out for using too much of the group's meat stock. Gungrave and Aureus stare at the steaming pot, with Gungrave questioning if that's all there is to the meal. Shuri explains that while various ingredients can be added to the tofu base, he chose a simple approach to align with the theme of today's meal. With a smile, he tells them that yudofu is best enjoyed in cold weather, as the tofu retains heat and warms the body from the inside out. Shuri decides to step back and let Gungrave and Aureus take over the serving. He hands the ladle to Gungrave, explaining that sharing a single pot and serving each other is the true charm of a hot pot meal, as it mimics the intimacy shared between close friends, family, or loved ones. Shuri gives a playful wink, nudging Gungrave and Aureus to put his words into practice. Gungrave readily agrees to the arrangement, and a slightly flustered Aureus begins to serve the tofu into a bowl for him, feeling the warmth of the moment. Gungrave smiles warmly and offers to serve Aureus in return. Surprised and blushing, Aureus shyly accepts with a playful wink. Gungrave hands her the bowl, leaving Aureus captivated by the romantic moment. Shuri watches with a satisfied smile as Gungrave and Aureus enjoy the intimate atmosphere, reflecting on how serving each other from a single pot deepens their bond. However, as Gungrave prepares to eat a piece of tofu, Shuri warns him that it retains a lot of heat inside. Gungrave ignores the warning and takes a bite, only to immediately react in pain as the tofu proves to be scorching hot. Gungrave savors the hot, soft tofu and the tangy broth, feeling the warmth seep into his chilled body. He admits that the dish is far better than he expected, and Aureus agrees, marveling at how such a simple meal could be so comforting. Shuri smiles, satisfied that Gungrave and Aureus are enjoying the warmth of the yudofu. To further enhance the experience, he adds a magical seasoning as a topping. Curious, Gungrave tastes it and is immediately struck by the bold combination of sourness and spiciness, realizing that the secret ingredient is chili pepper. Shuri presents plates of green onions and grated daikon radish, telling Gungrave and Aureus to add them according to their preference. They are both impressed by the crunchy texture of the onions and the refreshing spiciness of the daikon. As they continue to enjoy the meal, Aureus asks Gungrave to pass her the chili pepper. Shuri watches Gungrave and Aureus, noticing how the distance between them has vanished. He reflects that they were always close, but Aureus' own worries had kept them apart. Determined to help them bridge that gap completely, Shuri decides to give them one final push. He turns to Gungrave and asks, Gungravesen, what do you think would happen if this hot pot had no kelp? Gungrave questions if the taste would really change without the kelp, but Shuri insists it would be drastically different. He explains that the subtle umami from the kelp dissolves into the broth and blends with the tofu to create a deep, rich flavor. Shuri then points out that without such a key element, the dish would be bland, much like how their conversation might not have been as lively without a certain essential spark. Shuri extends his culinary metaphor to human relationships, asking Gungrave who the person is that adds depth to his life. He describes this person as someone precious who is always by his side and worries about him. When Shuri suggests that this person might be Aureus, Gungrave is left visibly flustered and surprised. Aureus blushes deeply and softly admits yes to Shuri's question. Seeing his mission accomplished, Shuri decides to make a quiet exit, jokingly calling himself the third wheel. As he walks away, he feels proud of his matchmaking skills, but the victory is short-lived as he begins to wonder when Cupid will finally help him find a girlfriend of his own, noting that he has been single for his entire life. Shuri exits the tent, only to be greeted by a wall of faces. Startled, he looks at the gathered group, including the captain and the other officer, asks in confusion why everyone has congregated there. Shuri stands in disbelief, as he realizes the rest of the group has been spying on the intimate conversation inside the tent. Yuri and Era tease him, admitting they couldn't resist watching something so entertaining, while others chime in about how much they enjoyed the drama. Even Kuga apparently felt a duty to witness the scene, leaving Shuri completely exasperated by their lack of discretion. Yuri and Lil playfully call out Ultros, reminding him that he was the one who justified their eavesdropping as a life experience. Akan, watching the group, Shuri considers warning them to stop, but he stops himself. He realizes that their behavior comes from a place of care, as they are all anxious and excited to see two longtime companions finally come together. Shuri tells the group he'll be making his exit, provided they don't interfere with the couple. The mercenaries wave him off, promising to stay out of the way. As a new day begins, Shuri finds himself shivering in the biting morning air, rubbing his hands together for warmth before being greeted with a friendly good morning. As the morning begins, Orius approaches Shuri, appearing almost divine. Shuri is completely stunned, unable to look away from her radiant and glowing presence. Orius expresses her gratitude to Shuri, telling him that thanks to his help, she finally confessed her long-held feelings and is now together with Gungrave. While Shuri is initially happy for her, the word together triggers a sudden scandalous thought. He freezes in shock, imagining Orius and Gungrave sharing an intimate night together. Orius softly explains that because they are wandering mercenaries with no home, she and Gungrave cannot get engaged yet, though their hearts are bound and they've vowed to marry in the future. Suddenly, Shuri lets out a shout and punches himself square in the face. A bewildered Orius asks what he is doing, and Shuri sheepishly replies that he was simply purifying his impure heart with a punch. Shuri graciously accepts Orius' thanks, brushing off his earlier impulsive action. He asks her to confirm if they plan to officially marry once they find a place to settle. Looking out over the snowy landscape, Shuri muses that finding a permanent home is an immense challenge for a roaming mercenary group, yet he feels confident that Gungrave and Orius have what it takes to make it happen. Shuri admits that while he once found romantic couples irritating, he feels differently when it's his close friends, Orius and Gungrave, finding happiness. After a light-hearted conversation where he shares some science trivia about how Yudofu works, Shuri parts ways with Orius. The scene then shifts to the aftermath of a battle. The group emerges victorious, and Shuri notes that Orius apparently went on a complete rampage during the fight. The sheer scale of Orius' power is revealed as a colossal explosion of fire consumes the battlefield. Rumors claim she dropped a sun on her enemies, a feat so extreme it seems almost exaggerated. Yet it was a truly miraculous strike. In a sudden shift to the past, Gungrave is seen lying on the ground, bleeding heavily from a chest wound. His companions, including a woman named Kaguya, panic and scramble to stop the bleeding. Despite his critical condition, Gungrave's first concern is the enemy, Orius. Upon hearing that everyone else is safe and they have successfully escaped, he finally closes his eyes in relief. Gungrave closes his eyes with a faint, relieved smile, whispering that he is glad everyone made it out alive. Beside him, Orius gazes at him, her eyes filled with sorrow and deep emotion. Orius gazes at Gungrave, admitting to herself that there is someone she truly loves. She remembers their youth as orphans in a gang, where they were forced to steal and hurt others just to survive. Gungrave was the one who led them, taking all their sins upon himself so that the others wouldn't be consumed by guilt. Now, Orius vows that one day, she will stand by his side and share that heavy burden with him. Orius reflects on the moment she realized her love for Gungrave. It happened shortly after they formed their mercenary group, during the worst battle of their history. While serving as the rear guard during a desperate retreat, Gungrave was gravely injured, nearly losing his life to ensure the survival of his comrades. Gungrave lay critically wounded, hovering between life and death. His companions were crushed by self-loathing, feeling that their own incompetence had led to this tragedy. Yet, despite his condition, Gungrave smiled and thanked them simply for having survived. Seeing his kindness in the face of death, Orius finally realized the truth of her feelings. She truly loved him. Orius introduces herself as the commander leading the mage unit of the Gungrave Mercenary Corps. She explains that on the battlefield, magic is a powerful weapon, making mages a formidable threat. By harnessing mana, they can rain fireballs upon enemy lines, create walls of ice to shield themselves from arrows, and cut down advancing foes with blades of wind. Orius continues her explanation, noting that while some can transform mana into physical materials, most people with talent are limited to affecting objects, becoming magic engineers or combat artificers. She illustrates the extreme rarity of true mages, explaining that only 1 in 100,000 and even fewer actually become mages. Despite these odds, she reveals that the Gungrave Mercenary Corps possesses 4 of these rare individuals. Orius notes that the power of her mages is the reason they rarely lose, but it is also why the unit has not grown larger. Because mages are in such high demand, their personnel costs are sky-high, and they can easily defect to another army if the pay is too low. Orius admits it was a struggle, but she eventually convinced her subordinates to accept modest wages by finding a middle ground between money and their shared dreams and purpose. Orius notes that lately, her subordinates have stopped complaining about their modest pay. The reason for this change is Shuri. Despite the low wages, the mages are treated to gourmet food every day that cannot be found anywhere else. This high-quality diet has even led to improvements in their health and the accuracy of their spells. The mage unit is so satisfied with Shura's cooking that they've stopped eating out, viewing it as a net financial win. Orius admits that without Shuri, her squad might have fallen apart long ago. However, the moment of reflection ends as she focuses on the task at hand, an upcoming battle expected to take place in harsh, snowy terrain. Orius enters the room to find the mage unit enjoying a meal. However, she quickly notices the scent of alcohol and erupts in anger, reprimanding them for drinking in broad daylight without permission, and questioning what would happen if a battle broke out right then. The mages are left stunned and speechless by her sudden outburst. The mage unit quickly defends themselves, explaining to Commander Orius that the drink is actually amazek, a low-alcohol beverage prepared by Shuri. They enthusiastically describe how it warms the body without causing intoxication and even improves skin health, jokingly remarking that Shuri's skills are almost like magic. As the mage unit members gush about how lucky they are to have Shuri, Orius finds herself reflecting on the shift in her squad's dynamic. She observes that since Shuri's arrival, the overall mood of the Corps has changed for the better. While her subordinates now respond to her calmly like mature adults, Orius recalls that in the past, a situation like this would have likely devolved into a heated argument. Orius reflects on the ripple effect Shuri has had on the group. She notes how Kuga has reached a new level of enlightenment in his skills. Lil has been driven to invent new devices, and Gungrave has finally prioritized essential supply logistics. As she walks with them and tastes Shuri's delicious cooking, Orius can't help but feel a bit lonely, feeling as if she is the only one being left behind while everyone else grows. The soldiers enjoy their drinks, though some wish for something stronger once they return to town. Watching them, Orius acknowledges Shuri's incredible influence, admitting that while she is grateful, she feels a tinge of jealousy. She finds it suspicious that a stranger could join so suddenly and so quickly earn the complete trust of Gungrave and his members without anyone knowing where he truly came from. Orius continues to struggle with her internal conflict, realizing that her suspicion is leaking into her expressions. She fears that the way she looks at Shuri has become sharp and hostile, and worries that he might eventually hate her for it. While standing in the camp, Shuri catches her staring and looks back at her. Confused by her odd demeanor, Orius confronts Gungrave, worried that the commander getting drunk could jeopardize their professional image during sudden negotiations with their employer. Gungrave calmly reassures her, explaining that his drink is a different kind of amazaki. He reveals that because he couldn't afford to smell of alcohol, Shuri thoughtfully created a version with TP-nal alcohol that tastes exactly like the original. Gungrave happily sips his drink, noting that the extra effort Shuri put into the non-alcoholic version makes it even tastier and sweeter while still providing warmth. He then offers a cup to Orius, who takes a sip and finds it delightfully sweet. As she drinks, Orius is surprised to feel a soothing warmth spreading through her entire body, despite the lack of alcohol. The Tali drink happily, their spirits lifted by Shuri's thoughtful creation, however. Orius watches from the sidelines. Feeling a sting of frustration, she observes the bond between Gungrave and Shuri, noting that Gungrave seems to trust Shuri more than anyone else right now. Despite this, she tries to rationalize it, telling herself that such trust is not the same as the bond forged in the heat of battle. Orius looks on as Gungrave and Shuri stand together, realizing that the trust Gungrave has placed in the young cook is profounded as the act of entrusting someone to walk beside him on his path to power. Watching them, she is overcome by a wave of jealousy, aching for the bond Shuri has formed with the man she cares for. Orius sighs, feeling a deep sense of restlessness. She acknowledges that Shuri's meal and amazaki were perfect, but this only fuels her longing. She wonders if being able to cook such dishes would help her earn a special place in Gungrave's heart. However, as she is lost in her thoughts, she is suddenly startled by something, snapping her out of her reverie. Orius suddenly has a realization. If she can learn to cook, she believes she can contribute more and become truly useful to Gungrave. She daydreams about the praise she would receive for her dishes, imagining herself being needed and appreciated. Reflecting on her current state, she admits that she has hit a wall with her magical abilities and has been struggling to improve. She hopes that by gaining a different kind of strength, she might finally find a new path forward. With a newfound determination, Orius decides there is no time to waste. She resolves to be honest, apologize for her past behavior, and ask Shuri to teach her how to cook. As she spots him in the camp, she notices Shuri washing dishes by himself in the biting cold. Confused, she wonders why he is working alone and where the actual assigned cook has gone. Gungrave announces that the march is set for tomorrow, ordering all soldiers to rest and restore their strength. As Orius watches the mercenaries relax and recover, She understands why Shuri is working alone in the freezing cold. The others are forbidden from wasting energy or risking numb hands on chores, leaving Shuri to handle the dishes by himself. Orius watches in silence as Shuri continues his chores. She thinks about how he handles everything, both the cooking and the cleaning, and worries that the freezing water must be leaving his hands painfully cracked. She realizes that while he doesn't fight on the battlefield, Shuri's contribution is essential, remaining the only official cook even as the mercenary group grows in size. Orius continues to observe Shuri, realizing the immense burden he carries as the sole cook for the group. She feels pathetic for simply enjoying his food and sake while being jealous of the trust he has earned from Gungrave. Disgusted by her own superficial plan to apologize just for convenience, she clenches her fists and resolves to speak with him with genuine courage. Orius finally approaches Azuma Shuri, asking if she can talk to him for a moment. Internally, she vows to stop her resentment and sincerely apologize for her past behavior, recognizing the immense effort he puts in behind the scenes without complaint. As the scene shifts to the surrounding mountain landscape, Shuri responds with confusion, surprised that Orius is asking about cooking. Orius reflects on her request to learn cooking for Gungrave, but Shuri's response is not what she expected. He tells her that everyone has their own battlefield, and that it's better to fight where one shines the most. These honest and straightforward words pierce deep into Orius' heart, leading her to realize just how sincere and genuine Shuri truly is. Orius reflects on her interaction with Azuma Shuri, finally recognizing the kindness she had previously been unwilling to see. She recalls the moment she gathered the courage to confess her love for Gungrave, and how Shuri had responded with a knowing look that she didn't understand at the time. Touched by Shuri's sincere and honest nature, Orius finds herself opening up about her own struggles, admitting that she has been in a slump lately. Orius opens up further, admitting that despite her constant training, she feels she has stopped improving and can no longer control her magic as she once did. She fears that this failure will eventually distance her from Gungrave. Listening intently, Shuri admits that magic is beyond his expertise. But, with a bright smile, he offers a different kind of assistance, claiming he can help her when it comes to love. Orius is left completely bewildered by his sudden confidence. Shuri proposes a special plan to help Orius, a private dinner for just her and Gungrave. This is a significant gesture, as Gungrave has always followed the rule of eating meals with everyone together and has never eaten alone with someone before. Shuri quickly and efficiently prepares everything for the occasion, leaving Orius touched by his selflessness and the effort he puts into helping someone else's love life. The private dinner is a success. Orius is captivated by the simple yet incredibly delicious yudofu, a dish meant for those who share a deep bond. As she and Gungrave serve each other, Orius is overwhelmed with happiness, feeling a romantic intimacy that makes her feel like a married couple. The hot tofu warms her from the inside out, leaving her in a state of pure bliss. The most wonderful part of the meal was the sauce, which possessed the perfect balance of tanginess and a fruity aroma. It soaked completely into the tofu, enhancing its natural sweetness and bringing out a flavor that was far from bland. With the addition of chili or daikon, every single bite offered new layers of appeal and taste. Orius is deeply moved by the warmth of the yudofu, calling it an exquisite dish for the cold. As she and Gungrave share the meal, their conversation flows naturally, creating a comforting atmosphere. For a brief moment, the stress of the battlefield vanishes, leaving Orius to simply savor this rare moment of happiness. Shuri gives Orius and Gungrave a gentle push, stepping away to leave them in their own private world. In the intimate atmosphere, Orius finally confirms her feelings, leaving Gungrave completely stunned. As she closes her eyes in bliss, Orius feels a deep sense of relief and joy, knowing that the emotions she had held on to for so long have finally reached Gungrave. Gungrave gently takes Orius' hands in his and asks her to listen with a look of deep emotion on his face. He finally reveals his own feelings, telling her, "I love you too." Overwhelmed with emotion, Orius cries tears of joy, feeling that this is the most wonderful day of her life. But as she basks in the happiness, Gungrave's expression turns serious as he delivers a heartbreaking caveat. He cannot be her lover right now. Gungrave solemnly explains the harsh reality of his life, telling Orius that he could die tomorrow, next week, or any day. He emphasizes that he never knows when his end will come. Distraught by this grim outlook, Orius tries to pull away and begs him to stop talking. Despite the danger of his life, Gungrave tells Orius that he has a dream. Orius remembers how he always spoke of creating a country, a nation of happiness. As they gaze upon a magnificent city from a cliff, Gungrave's vision is revealed, a place where no one has to go hungry and no one has to live in poverty. Gungrave speaks with conviction, stating that while he doesn't know when he might fall in battle, he refuses to die until his dream is realized. With a determined look, he makes a heartfelt promise to Orius, asking if she will let him be the one to propose to her once he has established his own country. Orius looks on, completely stunned and blushing at his words. With tears of happiness in her eyes, Orius playfully teases Gungrave, calling him a coward for putting off his proposal until he builds his nation. Though she asks if she can really believe him, her expression is full of love. Gungrave responds with a confident smile, firmly vowing that he will definitely become a king worthy of her. Gungrave and Orius share a passionate kiss, sealing the promise they just made. Gungrave tells her that this is his vow and the very best he can do for her right now. With tears of joy in her eyes, Orius softly agrees, accepting his resolve. The tender atmosphere is instantly shattered as their companions suddenly swarm around them, shouting congratulations in unison. Gungrave and Orius pull apart, staring at the group in utter shock and confusion. The romantic atmosphere is completely shattered as Teg, Yuri, Lil, Dane, and Era all chime in with playful congratulations and teasing remarks. A deeply embarrassed Gungrave stammers, asking since when they had all been there. His companions laugh, admitting they had been watching the entire scene from the start. Even as the couple shared their warm meal in the freezing cold, Orius hides her face in her hands, completely overwhelmed by embarrassment. Gungrave and Orius find themselves the center of attention as their childhood friends relentlessly tease them about their romantic confession. However, amidst the laughter and blushing, they all share a blessed and heartwarming moment, cherishing the happiness of being together. Orius smiles peacefully, reflecting on how she can finally stand proudly beside Gungrave. In her heart, she offers a silent thank you to Shuri for everything. As the emotional moment concludes, the scene shifts to the next day, overlooking a serene and cold mountain range. Orius tells Shuri that her feelings have finally connected with Gungrave's and expresses her gratitude to him. While she believes he is blessing them, Shuri suddenly starts hitting himself in a comedic panic. As they continue talking, Shuri reflects on the things he learned in his hometown since childhood. Orius is surprised by his extensive knowledge and finds the story of his hometown's education system truly amazing. Orius expresses her curiosity about the umami found in kelp, wondering if it's something too small to be seen. This leads to a conversation about atoms and molecules, as Shuri explains that everything in the world is composed of tiny particles. To illustrate his point, Shuri explains the science of fire, detailing how combustible material, oxygen, and heat must come together to produce heat and light. Orius contemplates the vast world, realizing that everything is composed of tiny, invisible particles that bind together. She concludes that mages use magic to manipulate these particles, allowing them to interfere with the very structure of the world. This revelation brings clarity to the vague doubts and unease she had always felt regarding the true nature of magic. Orius feels as though all the answers she had been searching for were suddenly presented before her eyes. She recognizes that Shura's knowledge of atoms, molecules, and the disciplines of science and chemistry is the closest thing to the truth of their world. Despite Shura's humility, Orius acknowledges that his understanding is far beyond anything she has ever known. Orius gazes at Shuri, questioning who he really is, however. She quickly dismisses the thought, deciding that she won't pry into his secrets any further. To her, he is simply a benefactor and a comrade. A massive army looms ahead in the frozen wasteland. As a snowstorm begins to pick up, Gungrave notes that the conditions are unfavorable for them and ideal for the enemy, who are accustomed to fighting in the cold. Realizing a difficult battle is inevitable, Gungrave steps forward with determination, vowing to clear the way. As Gungrave calls out to her, Orius closes her eyes and focuses, recalling Shura's explanation that the world is composed of tiny particles. She spreads her magic across the air, the ground, and the snow, feeling a vast amount of information flood into her mind as she perceives the very structure of her surroundings. With this new hypothesis, she prepares to interfere with those particles to change the course of the battle. Orius unleashes a colossal explosion of fire, meticulously manipulating heat and oxygen just as Shuri had explained. The sheer scale of the attack blasts the enemy soldiers backward, while Gungrave watches in utter disbelief at the overwhelming power of her new technique. The sheer scale of the attack is staggering, with enemy soldiers screaming in disbelief. Comparing the fireball to a miniature sun, her subordinates watch in shock, amazed that such a massive spell is even possible. Amidst the chaos, Orius remains calm, noting the overwhelming heat of the combustion she just triggered. The heat generated by Orius is so extreme that even her own allies, the Tali, are forced to create walls of air to shield themselves. As the snow melts away in an instant, the enemy soldiers are left in agony, trapped in their heavy armor. They find the burning heat unbearable, making it impossible for them to continue the fight. Gungrave smiles confidently, noting that the enemy's advantage has vanished. At Orius' signal, he leads the Tali in a powerful charge, storming forward to crush the enemy lines. The battle that followed became completely one-sided. With the enemy's environmental advantage gone, Aureus' comrades were finally able to fully unleash their strength. Aureus herself displayed astonishing precision and power with her magic, sweeping through the opposing forces. The result was a massacre, leaving the battlefield littered with the fallen, as the remaining enemy soldiers could only cry out in despair. Following the one-sided victory, Aureus' subordinates approach her in disbelief. They question what happened to her, noting that the massive fireball and wind blades were far beyond the capabilities of the captain they once knew. Aureus acknowledges their observation with a confident wink, claiming that she has simply attained the truthal starting from tofu. The story delves into the history of the Age of Dark Wars, a time when exceptional mages were highly sought after and revered as heroes. Among them, one woman stood above all others, attaining a depth of magic known as the truth, a level of power unreachable by modern mages that allowed her to summon the very sun upon the battlefield. This legendary figure was known as the Witch of Truth, Aureus Operata. As the Queen of Gungrave Operata, the first monarch of the unified kingdom, her influence reached far beyond her military victories. Her most celebrated legacy was her decision not to conceal the truth, but to share its knowledge with the entire world. Aureus' legacy lived on through the founding of the National Academy for Mages, where she served as the first director to educate future generations. Because of her foundation, mages became known as the proud defenders of the kingdom. But Aureus was not only revered for her power and wisdom, she was also renowned for her unmatched beauty, leaving a trail of broken hearts wherever she walked through the city. Despite the countless men who adored her, Aureus' heart belonged solely to King Gungrave, a testament to her sincere and unwavering devotion. While her most gifted disciples became known as the Three Sages and continued to lead the academy, her mastery of the truth remained an unreachable peak. Even centuries later, no one has ever matched her, proving that Queen Aureus' knowledge was truly beyond comprehension. When speaking of the truth, Queen Aureus once left behind a hint to reach its depths, claiming that a single dish held the key. This dish, originally made by a single cook, has since become a beloved traditional winter meal in the unified kingdom. It is a simple yet profound dish of kelp and tofu simmered together. Queen Aureus had a deep love for tofu, making it a regular part of her diet. Every time she enjoyed the dish, she would remark that tofu not only warmed her heart but was also filled with the knowledge of the truth. The scene returns to the present. Having emerged victorious from their previous battle in the snowy plains, the Gungrave Mercenary Corps is now traveling from the north toward the south. In a continent filled with shady stories, suspicious rumors have begun to surface from the south, casting a shadow over their journey. Gungrave notices Akari's pale and exhausted expression and asks if he is okay. Akari, leaning miserably against the edge of the wagon, is confused by the question, but admits that he still feels sick. Beside him, Lil remarks that the bumpy journey is far from. The carriage jolts violently, leaving Azuma Akari pale and nauseous. He covers his mouth, overwhelmed by the rough ride, noting that the vehicle lacks any form of suspension or rubber tires. As he feels his body and inner ears taking a beating, Haru warns him not to throw up, to which a miserable Akari can only offer a weak apology. Gungrave tells Shuri that with enough training, he would suffer less from motion sickness if he learned to ride horses. Shuri counters that the issue isn't his ability, but that horses simply can't stand him, recalling instances where he was thrown off or nearly kicked. Despite his misery, Gungrave notes that Shuri never loses his characteristic laid-back attitude. Shuri turns to Lil and asks if she rides horses. Lil responds with a deadpan expression, explaining that her feet simply don't reach the stirrups, prompting a quick apology from Shuri. Meanwhile, it is revealed that Lil has been conducting some strange research lately, which led her to get tattoos on her arms and legs. Shuri looks at the intricate magic runes on Lil's limbs, wondering if it's really okay to mark up such beautiful skin. However, his thoughts are cut short as his vision begins to wobble. Suddenly, Shuri collapses, leaving Lil and Gungrave startled and shouting in alarm. Screams in panic, calling out to Shuri and demanding that the carriage stop immediately. Gungrave and the other mercenaries are startled by the sudden commotion. Inside the wagon, Shuri lies motionless, completely overwhelmed by nausea. He feels his body grow heavy and cold while his head burns. The scene then shifts to a wide view of the mercenary camp where the carriage has finally come to a stop. Shuri introduces his current state, lying in bed and feeling unwell. He explains that the exhaustion from their journey and the drastic shift from a cold region to a warm one caused him to catch a cold. As the group's cook, he feels anxious about who will prepare the meals while he is incapacitated. But a companion tells him to stop worrying and focus on recovering. Resting in a hastily set-up tent, Azuma Shuri is under the care of Miss Kaguya. As Gungrave watches over him, Shuri expresses his regret for slowing down the entire unit's progress. Rather than relying on magic spells, Kaguya employs her knowledge of traditional Eastern medicine, using techniques such as moxibustion and acupuncture to treat his condition. Miss Kaguya, who is known as a medical prodigy and a secret intelligence agent, finishes treating Azuma Shuri with acupuncture. After diagnosing him with a cold, she warns Shuri to be extremely careful with his health, noting that their current lack of proper medicine and nutrition makes any illness a serious risk. Lying in bed, Azuma Shuri reflects on how managing one's health is the foundation of being a responsible adult, feeling like a hopeless case for causing trouble. Gungrave looks on with regret, apologizing to Shuri and admitting it is his fault for neglecting medicine stocks and not hiring an assistant to help him sooner. Despite this, Shuri insists that the situation only happened because he didn't take better care of his own health. Gungrave tells Shuri that as the leader, the responsibility is his, and that he actually finds happiness in being depended upon. Touched by the words, Shuri asks if everyone else is eating properly. Gungrave smiles and tells him that he is still the best, and that the entire group is hoping for his quick recovery. Gungrave warns that Kaguya could only provide emergency care and emphasizes the urgent need for proper medicine to avoid any complications. Despite his illness, Azuma Shuri remains determined, thinking to himself that he cannot die of a cold when he still has the goal of returning to Earth. Seeing Shuri's resolve, Gungrave tells him that he believes in him and reveals that everyone in the group wanted to rush in and take care of him. Gungrave reminds Shuri that he isn't alone, as the entire mercenary group is there for him. Touched by their collective concern, Shuri gives a weak laugh and asks Gungrave to convey his gratitude to everyone. As Gungrave leaves the tent, he promises to do so and tells Shuri to focus on resting. While resting, Azuma Shuri notices that his cooking tools and ingredients have been brought to his bedside. He wonders if the others are hoping he can cook for himself to regain his strength. Looking at the eggs, sake, and honey he bought at a previous village, he decides to go ahead and use them. Following a precise process, Shuri first boils water to heat the sake. While waiting, he thoroughly whisks together eggs and honey in a bowl. Once the sake is warm, he blends it into the egg mixture and strains the liquid into a cup, completing his homemade egg sake to help him recover his strength. After finishing the egg sake, Azuma Shuri is disappointed to find that his cold has robbed him of his sense of taste. He decides to simply get some nutrients and go back to sleep, but the act of preparing the drink brings back memories of his life back home. He recalls how his father would make egg sake and ginger porridge, and how his mother would prepare special dishes for him whenever he fell ill. As he lies weakened by the cold, Azuma Shuri is overwhelmed by a wave of loneliness. He thinks about how friends and family would normally care for him when he's sick, but now he has no one. These swirling, melancholic thoughts weigh heavily on him as he struggles with his illness. As he rests, Shuri reflects on the months he has spent in this unfamiliar world. He worries that time flows differently here, fearing that even if he could find a way back, he might return to an Earth where hundreds of years have already passed. Overwhelmed by the uncertainty of his return and his current vulnerability, he can only whisper the names of his mother and father in his heart. In his moment of greatest vulnerability, Shuri admits his heartfelt wish to see his mother and father just once more. As a quiet night falls over the mercenary camp, the heavy atmosphere lingers until Shuri finally wakes up, letting out a long yawn as he stretches his arms. Azuma Shuri wakes up, realizing he had fallen asleep and that it is now pitch dark outside. As he stretches his body, he notices that his condition has improved. He wonders whether the recovery was thanks to Kaguya-san's acupuncture or the warm egg sake he drank before sleeping. Shivering from the night chill, Azuma Shuri suddenly feels an urgent need to relieve himself. He dashes out of the tent in a hurry, rushing toward the nearby woods. After finding relief, he sighs in contentment, but as he looks back at the camp, he is struck by how quiet everything is, concluding that everyone must be fast asleep. Just as Shuri believes the camp is silent and everyone is asleep, he is startled to find Teg standing right there. Confused by Teg's presence near his tent at such an hour, Shuri is greeted by the commander, who had spotted him. Azuma Shuri's mind races, imagining a bizarre and uncomfortable scenario where Teg visits him in bed, quickly dismissing the thought as impossible. Returning to reality, Shuri asks Teg why he is there in the middle of the night. Teg Lai calmly explains that he was just worried about Shuri's condition and wanted to make sure he was resting well. Azuma Shuri reflects on the situation, realizing that he can't simply dismiss his illness as just a cold. In this world, such symptoms are seen as the gateway to far more lethal diseases. Understanding why Teg was so worried, Shuri feels a wave of guilt for being a burden to the team as someone who cannot fight. With a sheepish smile, he scratches his head and apologizes to Teg, assuring him that he has recovered enough to move around. Azuma Shuri smiles and informs Teg that he should be able to return to work starting tomorrow. However, Teg is taken aback and reacts with sudden intensity, shouting at Shuri and asking if he really thinks Teg came to check on him just to tell him to hurry up and get back to work. Teg abruptly pushes Shuri back onto his bed with a loud thud, shouting at him to stop talking nonsense and just go to sleep. After firmly tucking him in and giving him a pat, Teg softens his tone, explaining that he isn't actually angry, but simply exasperated by Shuri's lack of self-care. Shuri apologizes for his dumb comment, but internally wonders if being exasperated is just another word for being mad. Teg's expression softens as he admits that the group is the one that should be apologizing, acknowledging that Shuri has supported them all, while they failed to do the same for him. Looking at Shuri, Teg asks him a poignant question. Does he want to go back to his hometown and see the people who cared for him there? Shuri looks at Teg with a longing expression, admitting that he desperately wants to return home to see his family. However, his mood quickly shifts as he confesses that he might not be able to go back. Teg, sensing the difficulty, assumes it is because Shuri hails from beyond the outer sea. Shuri remains silent, questioning himself if it is truly okay to keep hiding the truth forever. Teg solemnly reveals that he and the other members of the group, including Gungrave, grew up as orphans, having never known their parents. He tells Shuri that he is fortunate to have a home and family waiting for him. Realizing the weight of this revelation, Shuri feels a wave of guilt for being thoughtless in mentioning his family in front of them. As Shuri reflects on the deep bonds the mercenaries formed as childhood friends, Teg looks at him and decides to tell him something important. Teg tells Shuri that while it's true they don't have parents, they view their childhood friends as family, so there is no need for any half-baked sympathy. Shuri feels flustered, realizing that Teg saw right through his feelings of guilt. Teg then muses on the idea of a family existing beyond the continent, acknowledging that Shuri might truly be unable to return, and admitting that crossing the sea is something he had never even considered until now. Shuri briefly considers telling Teg that he is from another world, but he quickly dismisses the idea, feeling that it is far too late to reveal such a truth. Suddenly, Teg asks if Shuri would be willing to tell him about his family, provided he is feeling well. Caught off guard, Shuri is surprised, but Teg explains that as someone who grew up without one, he has always wanted to know what a real family is like. Shuri is taken aback by the intensity of Teg's request, realizing that the man is completely serious about wanting to know what a family is like. Moved by this, Shuri begins to speak, describing the warmth of eating meals with his parents, and the simple comfort of being welcomed home after a day with friends. Small, everyday moments that have now become incredibly precious memories to him. Shuri recalls the days when he rebelled against his parents, and how the struggle of living alone after leaving home eventually taught him to be grateful for them. As he shares these intimate memories with Teg, his feelings for his family and for Earth grow even stronger. However, this nostalgia brings a painful realization. He has no way of returning home, and doesn't even know where to start looking. Looking out at the mercenary camp where he now serves others, Shuri begins to wonder what this strange new place truly means to him. A montage unfolds, showing Akara's life with the Talifram, the tension of risking his life, and witnessing the brutality of battle to the warmth of sharing meals and celebrating victories together. Through the highs and lows, he has found a sense of belonging. As he looks back on these ordinary yet precious moments, Akari realizes that these companions have quietly become an irreplaceable part of his life. Overcome by a wave of emotion, Shuri can't hold back his tears. Teg, noticing this, calls out to him in surprise. Flustered and embarrassed, Shuri quickly wipes his eyes, insisting that it's nothing. Teg looks at Shuri with a sympathetic expression, telling him that in a blood-soaked place like this, someone as kind as he is doesn't belong and would be much better off with his family. Shuri denies this, admitting that while he does want to go home, that isn't the only thing driving him. As he envisions himself walking away with his gear, Shuri realizes that if his only goal was to return, he would have simply left the mercenary corps to act on his own. Wiping away his tears, Shuri finally admits the truth to himself. This place has become an irreplaceable home. He reflects on the comfort and warmth he found among the Tali, realizing that he simply wants to stay by their side. Leaning back in peace, he concludes that being with them makes him truly happy, and he vows not to leave without repaying all the kindness they have shown him. With a look of pure sincerity and emotion, Azuma Shuri pleads with Teg, begging him to let him stay and continue working with the mercenaries. Teg looks at him with a warm, amused smile, telling Shuri that it would be a waste for only him to hear such a request, and suggests that he should say it in front of everyone. Teg smiles warmly and tells Shuri that he has always been, and will always be their comrade, asking him to keep looking out for one another. Shuri responds with a determined and happy, yes. Teg then notes that Shuri looks much better now that has let his feelings out, to which Shuri brightly agrees, feeling a great sense of relief. After their heart-to-heart, Azuma Shuri tells Teg that he is thinking of making a Latinite meal, and asks if he would like to eat it together. Despite a brief moment of hesitation, Shuri shyly explains that the dish is tied to his memories, expressing how grateful he would be to have someone share it with him. Shuri recalls the trial and error he went through to create his own homemade consomme stock, which involved drying vegetables and grinding them finely with spices. He then prepares the rest of the ingredients for the dish: cabbage, carrots, potatoes, onions, sausages, water, salt, and pepper. Azuma Shuri begins the preparation by peeling and cutting the potatoes and carrots into precise pieces. He then cuts the onion and cabbage into wedges and makes small incisions in the sausages to ensure the flavor seeps in better. Finally, he brings the water and consomme stock to a boil, adds the carrots and potatoes, and once they soften, adds the remaining ingredients to simmer gently over low heat. After seasoning the dish with salt and pepper, Azuma Shuri completes the pot au feu. He happily invites Teg to dig in, and Teg is instantly struck by the amazing aroma of the spices and ingredients drifting into his nose. Teg takes a bite and is immediately captivated by the excellent flavor and aroma, noting how the refined consomme broth brings out the best in every ingredient. As he explores the dish, he is surprised to find sausages, which Shuri confirms pair well with the meal. Teg then notices the potatoes, admitting that while he already knows Shuri's cooking is great, the taste of these potatoes is particularly impressive. Teg thinks about how potatoes are such a common crop in their world that many people eventually grow tired of eating them. Shuri smiles, noting that the potatoes in this particular dish are especially tasty. Teg agrees wholeheartedly, admitting that there has never been a bad dish from Shuri, as he continues to eat with great satisfaction. Teg is absolutely captivated by the meal. As he bites into a sausage, the juices burst with flavor, leaving him in a state of pure bliss. He continues to savor every bite, noting how tender the carrots are, and reaffirming that the potatoes are delicious, concluding that it is truly a fine dish. Teg is completely enamored with the meal, praising the soup's wonderful aroma and the richness of its flavor. He notes that the potatoes, soaked in the broth, are in a class of their own. Azuma Shuri smiles, agreeing that it is a truly excellent dish, though he modestly claims his palate may not be refined enough to fully appreciate it. As he looks at the food, a wave of nostalgia hits him, and he quietly admits that he still hasn't quite caught up to the taste of home. Azuma Shuri opens up to Teg, explaining that the dish was one his family used to prepare for him, and he made it out of nostalgia. He tells Teg that he truly wants to stay with the mercenary group. But despite that genuine feeling, he still struggles with a lingering sense of loneliness. Moved by Shuri's confession of loneliness, Teg speaks up with conviction. He reveals that he and his fellow mercenaries are orphans who grew up without knowing their parents, finding solace and kinship only in their childhood friends. To Teg and the others, their comrades are their only true family. Looking at Shuri with sincerity, Teg reminds him that he is not alone, asserting that Shuri has always been, and will always be, one of them. Teg warmly tells Shuri that he is a part of the family they hold dear, bound together by a shared fate. He encourages Shuri to lean on them whenever he feels lonely. Deeply moved, Shuri can only whisper Teg's name, feeling incredibly fortunate to have found such a place to belong. Overwhelmed by the warmth of the group, Azuma Shuri weeps, unable to believe that someone like him could be accepted as a comrade so quickly. Teg smiles warmly, assuring Shuri that they will protect him. He explains that the thought of Shuri's cooking waiting for them gives the mercenaries the strength to survive any hardship, making Shuri the heart and home they all long to return to. Teg smiles warmly, telling Shuri that they are the ones who should be thanking him for the warm and comforting meal. He admits that if they had parents, they would have made meals just like this. Overwhelmed with emotion, Shuri bows his head in silence. As the night passes, Shuri reflects on how something truly wonderful happened. He has gained irreplaceable friends, who now call him a comrade and family. The next morning, Azuma Shuri returns to the camp with a bright smile, greeting everyone. The Tali are overjoyed to see him back, with some even calling his recovery a miracle. Shuri humbly apologizes for causing them worry, but the unit members warmly welcome him back, admitting that they would be in real trouble without him. The Tali tease Shuri, reminding him that no one else can make Hamburg steaks for Captain Lil, which makes him realize how much they truly rely on him. Feeling a warmth he has never known, Shuri reflects that this place finally feels comfortable. Looking back, he recognizes this as the pivotal moment when he made up his mind to stay, though he was still searching for the strength to fully embrace that resolve. Looking up at the sky, Azuma Shuri speaks to his parents in his heart, admitting that he doesn't think he will ever return to them. He has found a new purpose in life among his comrades, and he is determined to follow this path. With a look of resolve and happiness, he vows to give everything he has to what he can do in this unfamiliar world. Shuri continues his mental message to his parents, wishing them well, and assuring them that he has found happiness in this new world. As he looks at Teg, he feels a deep sense of gratitude. thanking him for never dismissing his words and for always bringing warmth and cheer to the group with his sincere and playful nature. Shuri recalls how Teg's dedication to his training intensified from the day he recovered, leading to an unbelievable increase in strength. Looking at him, Shuri realizes that beneath that power, Teg is a person of incredible kindness and true strength. Shuri approaches Captain Teg, hoping to get some advice on how to use a bow. However, Teg quickly brushes him off with a smile, insisting that he isn't the type of person to teach others and tells Shuri to leave such matters to the vice captain. As Teg casually walks away, Shuri is left standing there, completely bewildered. As the focus shifts toward Teg, he admits a hidden vulnerability. He has always struggled to think things through or make decisions on his own. Teg continues his introspection, recalling the time Gungrave first formed the Mercenary band. He admits that his only motivation for joining was the ability to make a living, whether on the battlefield where he focuses solely on shooting enemies, or in his leadership role, which he mostly delegates to his adjutant. Teg confesses that he has always avoided making his own choices. He views his life as one of simply going with the flow and choosing the easy way. Teg introduces himself with a cheerful smile, proudly stating his position as the captain of the archer unit. He reflects on how he started using the bow, almost by chance, only to find he had a natural gift for it, eventually becoming a pillar of the group's combat strength. He recalls Gungrave's advice to use a bow to better fit the unit's composition, which shaped his current role. Teg admits that there is one thing he deeply regrets, a bitter memory that still haunts him in his nightmares. In a flashback, chaos erupts as his comrades frantically search for Gungrave. Teg is confronted and harshly accused of running away and leaving Gungrave behind. Just as Teg struggles to find the words to defend himself, a shout breaks the tension. The cavalry has finally returned. The flashback reveals a scene of chaos and desperation. Soldiers frantically carry a wounded Gungrave, shouting for Lady Kaguya as they realize their captain has been taken down. Teg looks on in absolute shock, haunted by the memory of the day they lost the battle and were forced to retreat. In that battle, Gungrave's cavalry had no choice but to hold the rear, since Kuga and Ultros units were operating separately, resulting in Gungrave being gravely wounded. Teg recalls how he simply went with the flow and ran away because he hadn't been ordered to stay, effectively abandoning Gungrave. The memory leaves Teg haunted by the image of the wounded commander lying on a stretcher. Gungrave barely survived his grave wounds thanks to the help of Kaguya, a town doctor, and the devoted care of the group. While this event caused the mercenary band's reputation to rise, Teg is still plagued by regret. He believes that if his unit had joined the rear guard, the situation might have been avoided entirely. Driven by this guilt, Teg swears a solemn oath to himself. Looking at his comrades, Teg feels a deep bond, seeing them all as family, and promising himself that he will be the one to protect them this time. However, he honestly admits that he still hasn't overcome his tendency to simply go with the flow, meaning his solemn oath remains unfulfilled. It was during this period that Gungrave decided to bring a new man into the company. Teg recalls the arrival of Azuma Shuri, a man who seemed far too scrawny to ever survive as a mercenary. However, Shuri possessed an incredible skill that no one expected: his cooking. Thanks to Shuri's unbelievably delicious and charming dishes, mealtimes for the group have become a source of genuine joy and bliss. Teg recalls the feeling of eating Shuri's food after a victory, making the Tali feel truly glad to be alive. Although the sheer quality of the meals is almost frustrating, Teg realizes that Shuri is the one providing the strength they need. In his eyes, Shuri is the silent protector of their family, supporting them all from behind the scenes with his delicious cooking. Teg reflects on how Shuri's cooking has touched everyone, from Lil Kuga and Orius to Ultros, Asagi, and Kaguya. Even Teg himself has come to see Shuri as a true comrade. But just as the bonds of the group strengthen, Shuri suddenly collapses from exhaustion. Chaos erupts as Shuri suddenly collapses, leaving the mercenaries in a state of panic. Kuga immediately takes command, shouting for Kaguya to prepare for treatment and ordering Gungrave to keep the men in place. Shuri is quickly carried away on a stretcher by Haru and others, while the group frantically prepares a place for him to recover. Shuri remains unconscious, barely able to let out a faint groan. Shuri weakly whispers an apology as he lies in a state of collapse. Watching him, Teg begins to reflect on the situation. He realizes that in the freezing cold of the region, the mercenaries had placed the entire burden of cooking on Shuri's shoulders. Teg understands now that Shuri isn't weak. Instead, he is simply too skilled at enduring his hardships and hiding his pain from everyone. Teg is struck by the fact that Shuri's first instinct upon collapsing was to apologize. He realizes with regret that they had relied far too much on Shuri's kindness, dumping all the burdens of the camp on him without a single complaint from the young cook. As the others gather around the unconscious Shuri, Teg concludes that the harsh conditions have most likely left him with a severe cold. Kaguya confirms that Shuri's collapse was caused by a cold. Watching the frail cook, Teg reflects on the cruel reality of their world. While the wealthy can easily afford doctors and recover, the poor often suffer from delayed treatment. He realizes that for those without means, a simple cold can lead to serious complications, making it a silent killer of the impoverished. Outside the tent, Teg anxiously asks Gungrave how Shuri is doing. Gungrave tells him that there is nothing to worry about for now, though he laments that they didn't have the proper medicine to prevent the situation. Consumed by remorse, Teg clutches his chest, blaming himself for taking Shuri for granted and ignoring his needs, feeling as though he repaid Shuri's kindness with betrayal. Teg remains silent as he looks back on his past behavior. He confesses to himself that he was far from concerned about Shuri's health and had even viewed helping the young cook as a nuisance. Now, consumed by regret, he sits alone and calls out to his parents in his heart. Teg gazes at the unconscious Shuri, the realization hitting him hard. It was obvious, he thinks. Shuri has a family he longs to reunite with, and that drive is what kept him fighting to survive. As Teg calls Shuri, working tirelessly in the camp, he realizes that the young man never once complained about his loneliness, or the helplessness he must have felt while the others bonded around him. Teg is haunted by the realization of how little they actually know about Shuri. He questions whether they ever tried to understand the young man's pain or worries, or even what his family is like. With a heavy heart, Teg admits that they didn't even try to ask, leaving them knowing nothing about Shuri's life beyond his role as their cook. Teg sits alone outside the tent, reflecting on his own passivity, and admitting that he has just been drifting through life. His thoughts are interrupted when Kuga and Ultros approach him. Noticing that he is still on guard duty, they kindly offer him some food, which Teg accepts with sincere gratitude. Teg takes a bite of the food, only to make a face of disgust. While he admits it's not completely inedible, Kuga jokingly mentions that her squad prepared it, acknowledging its questionable quality. However, as she looks at him, Kuga realizes that the sadness on Teg's face isn't just because of the bad food. Kuga reaches out to Teg, reminding him that he isn't the only one hurting, and that they are all suffering in their own way. She admits her own regret, wishing she could have helped Shuri more. Teg sighs, admitting his complete lack of talent for cooking, but realizes that his inability shouldn't have been an excuse to stop trying. Kuga nods in agreement. Kuga doesn't let Teg wallow in his guilt, telling him that acting like a lone tragic hero is irritating. She reminds him that their immediate priority is to take care of and protect Shuri, and they can make amends for what they couldn't do once he is healthy again. Kuga firmly tells Teg that she intends to do her part in caring for Shuri. Teg listens and acknowledges her words with a small, understanding smile. Kuga then points out that Teg isn't the only one struggling, noting that the other mercenaries are also blaming themselves. Even Ultros, standing silently beside them, has been reflecting on own failures. Despite the shared guilt, a lingering sense of regret remains. Kuga tells Teg that it is about time. Shuri faced his own health properly. She admits she doesn't understand why he constantly pushes himself so hard, but believes it is finally okay for him to relax. As Teg listens and reflects on her words, he looks toward the sleeping Shuri, hoping he can truly take this opportunity to rest and recover. The mercenary camp is quiet under the night sky. Teg shivers in the cold, reflecting that even though they have moved to a warmer region, the nights remain quite chilly. Although he has heard that the area is peaceful, he decides to take a walk around the perimeter just to be safe. As he patrols, Shuri is seen nearby, still appearing exhausted and unwell. Teg rushes into the tent, only to find Shuri's bed empty. Panicked, he wonders if Shuri, in his desire not to be a burden, has wandered off alone despite his frail condition. Just as his anxiety peaks, a voice calls his name from nearby. Teg spots Shuri standing outside and breathes a sigh of relief, glad to find him safe. Seeing Shuri look so much better, Teg wonders if he had simply stepped out to take care of something. But as Shuri smiles, the momentary calm is shattered by the words he is about to speak. Shuri puts on a bright smile, telling Teg that he has recovered enough to move around and plans to return to work the very next day. However, it's clear that Shuri is just pretending to be okay. Desperate not to be a burden to anyone, seeing through this, Teg loses his patience and shouts, asking if Shuri really thinks he came there, just to hear about him rushing back to work. Teg, feeling hurt that Shuri treats him like a complete stranger, shouts at him to stop joking and go back to sleep. He forcefully pushes Shuri back into bed and tucks him in. As Teg looks around the tent, he notices it is packed with cooking tools and ingredients. He suddenly understands why Shuri felt the need to rush back to work, and he decides that whoever left those items in the medical tent will definitely be scolded. Teg leans over Shuri, offering a sincere apology for the fact that none of them had properly supported him. Driven by a sudden impulse and a desire to hear the truth directly, Teg asks the one question that had been on everyone's mind: whether Shuri actually wants to go back home. Shuri honestly admits that he wants to go home and see his family, but his expression turns somber as he confesses that he might not be able to. Teg is stunned by this revelation, questioning if it is truly impossible for him to return. As it is revealed that Shuri is a human from beyond the Seon of the Outer Sea people, Teg feels a deep sense of shame for his own ignorance regarding Shuri's origins. Long ago, in a world of chaos, the gods gathered pure beings to form the continents. Upon these lands, they created humans and animals to watch over. However, unable to eliminate all the chaos, the gods banished the remaining darkness far beyond the continents, sealing it away forever. To prevent humans from reaching the banished chaos, the gods created violent, raging seas filled with ferocious sea beasts to protect those living on the sacred lands. This is the legend passed down on the continent of Sabrayus, a story that many only half believe, however. The Outer Ring Sea and its monsters are very real, and to this day, no one knows what truly lies beyond those treacherous waters. The Outer Ring Sea is a distant, unknown world where those who attempt to cross it never return, meaning there is currently no way for Shuri to return to his family. Noticing a change in Shuri's expression, Teg feels a sense of apology from him in a heartfelt gesture that while they may not have parents, he and his childhood friends view one another as family. Shuri can only respond with a quiet. Shuri asks Teg not to waste his sympathy on him, making Teg realize that Shuri was simply trying to be considerate. Feeling a bit awkward, Teg decides to change the subject. He asks Shuri if he would be willing to tell him about his family, admitting that he has always wondered what it is truly like to have parents. Shuri begins to talk softly, sharing bit by bit the precious and irreplaceable memories of his parents. As Teg listens, a strong feeling wells up inside him. Looking at Shuri, Teg finds himself wanting to do everything he can to help him return home. As Shuri shares his memories, he is overcome with emotion and begins to cry. Teg is startled and immediately panics. Thinking he has made a terrible mistake, he berates himself for being cruel, believing that forcing Shuri to talk about his family only deepened the pain of not being able to go home. Even as Shuri tries to tell him that Hez got it wrong, Teg is consumed by guilt for his perceived stupidity. Shuri honestly admits that he truly wants to return home, but he also tells Teg that he is glad to have met the Mercenary group and wishes to stay with them. Teg is struck by Shuri's selflessness, reflecting on how fragile and vulnerable Shuri is compared to the others, yet how incredibly kind he remains. Teg even thinks that Lil would be thrilled to hear such words, especially in her own hamburger sense of happiness. Following their emotional heart-to-heart, Shuri suggests making a late-night meal and warmly invites Teg to join him. Teg is taken aback by the gesture, wondering if he is about to taste a dish that holds special meaning for Shuri. Moments later, Shuri presents a steaming, hearty bowl of food, inviting Teg to dig in. Teg takes a bite of the meal, his expression filling with warmth and satisfaction. He admits that while he has enjoyed many of Shuri's meals, this pot au feu is his absolute favorite, especially the way the potatoes soak up the rich flavor of the soup. Teg closes his eyes in pure bliss as he savors the meal. He reflects on how the carrots and onions practically melt on his tongue, leaving behind the delicious essence of the vegetables and the richness of the broth, all blending together into an indescribably wonderful flavor. Teg is deeply impressed by the meal, noting that even someone who knows nothing about cooking can tell the pot au feu is the result of tremendous effort and practice. As they eat, Shuri reveals with a bittersweet smile that his family used to make this dish for him, admitting that it makes him feel a little lonely. Teg is struck by this revelation, finally understanding the true feelings Shuri has been carrying. Teg decides he needs to say something to comfort Shuri. He explains that many of them don't even know what their own parents looked like, as their only true family has always been their companions, telling Shuri that he wants to return the sentiment of openness. Teg declares that Shuri has always been their companion, with the other mercenaries standing behind him. Teg warmly tells Shuri that he is family to them, leaving Shuri deeply touched by their acceptance. Teg continues his heartfelt words, telling Shuri that he has become someone they can rely on and has carved out a place where he truly belongs. He emphasizes that they are a family sharing the same fate and that no one would ever reject him now. As Teg pulls Shuri into a warm embrace, Shuri softly agrees. Reflecting on the moment, Shuri realizes that on this night, he has gained a best friend as precious as any of his other companions. The news of Shuri's recovery quickly spreads throughout the camp, with the mercenaries shouting in joy and calling it a miracle. Teg and Aiden stand by Shuri's side, admitting how worried they were about his condition and expressing their relief that he is finally all better. Aiden suggests that Shuri's quick recovery might be due to the nutritious meals he always provided for the group, noting that Kaguya's treatment also played a part. He reflects on how Shuri's constant effort to keep everyone healthy likely built a strong physical foundation Shuri often mentions. With the conversation finished, Aiden tells Teg he is heading out. and Teg bids him farewell. The scene shifts to the training grounds, where arrows are being fired into wooden targets. Aiden observes the practice and points out a flaw in a soldier's form, noting that their elbow is positioned incorrectly. Seeing this, Teg steps forward with his bow, confidently telling Aiden to watch as he prepares to demonstrate the correct way. Teg releases the arrow with flawless form, sending it flying straight into the center of the target. With a confident smile, he acknowledges the shot as the surrounding Tali cheer, praising their captain's amazing skill. Full of energy, Teg declares that he will be training his unit hard from now on, even adding close combat training to their routine. The Tali are left bewildered by his sudden enthusiasm, noting that the captain usually leaves most of the work to the vice captain. Teg explains the reason for his sudden drive, admitting that he wants to become strong enough to protect his best friend. He reflects on how he used to simply drift through life without purpose. But now he has finally found a dream. Looking out over the vast horizon, Teg declares his ambition to travel across the continent and experience everything the world has to offer. Teg's ambition extends even further, as he dreams of crossing the Outer Ring Sea to find Shura's homeland. He hopes to one day meet Shura's parents and tell them that their son is doing well. With a vision of documenting his journey in a book, Teg vows to work hard to turn these dreams into reality. When the Unified Kingdom was founded, a major public project was proposed, the creation of a map of the entire continent. Before this, countries only possessed maps of their own territories or fragmented sketches of enemy lands. A complete continental map simply didn't exist. For this ambitious project, one hero stepped forward to take on the task. That hero was Teg Valence, known as the first adventurer, and the founder of the Tenga-style combat arts. Despite being the first Royal Guard captain, Teg chose to hand over his command to a successor, volunteering himself to lead the monumental task of mapping the continent. Teg Valence journeyed to every last corner of the land, traveling across the entire continent. Through his immense passion and effort, he produced 2 legendary written works, a comprehensive map of the continent and a detailed travelogue recording the customs, climates, and unique regional dishes of the places he visited. Given the technology of that era, the accuracy of these works stands as a testament to his dedication. The 2 monumental works created by Teg Valence spread knowledge across the continent and became treasured references for understanding various regions. Yet, immediately after completing these tasks, Teg Valence suddenly disappeared. Even the official palace records only note his abrupt vanishing, leaving everyone in shock. But after decades of silence, he unexpectedly appeared once again. Teg Valence had traveled far beyond the continent, braving the Outer Ring Sea during an era of primitive navigation. His experiences were compiled into the record of otherworldly observations, a national treasure that sparked curiosity and a spirit of adventure in many. After a lifetime of countless great adventures, he eventually returned his titles to the palace and spent his final years in a peaceful retirement with his family. People often asked what drove Teg Valence so strongly toward adventure. He explained that it was a desire to discover unknown foods and values, a passion sparked by a single precious bowl of soup shared with a best friend. This simple experience was what ultimately inspired him to leave the continent behind and explore the unknown. Shuri expresses gratitude for his regained health as he returns to his daily routine. After catching up on all the work that had accumulated during his absence, he resumes his role as the cook, though he is left in awe by the staggering size of the army camp surrounding him. Azuma Shuri carries a crate of food, gazing out at the endless rows of tents that comprise the massive army. In another part of the camp, the leadership discusses their current situation, noting that they have been hired by a royal family to fight alongside them, and begin to review the current state of the Gungrave Mercenary Corps. The country Gungrave is currently allied with is known as New Beast, one of the continent's major powers, boasting vast grain-producing regions and the legendary Holy Forest. Their adversary is the neighboring nation of Youheidan, while Youheidan relies almost entirely on imported food. They are a dominant force in the production and processing of iron ore. Youheidan launched a sudden war to seize New Beast's food resources. To make the conflict absolute, they beheaded the envoy sent for negotiations and sent the head back as a gruesome warning. With diplomacy completely cut off, war sunk into a total quagmire. Gungrave and Azuma Shuri look on, acknowledging the dire state of the situation. Gungrave and Azuma Shuri stand before the massive walls of the Vanip fortress. Situated strategically between the nations of New Beast and Youheidan, the fortress has become a major obstacle, with Gungrave noting that the struggle to seize it has kept their forces completely tied down. Gungrave warns Azuma Shuri that their long-distance march has stretched their supply lines thin, leaving them vulnerable to being isolated if an enemy detachment strikes. He emphasizes that they must capture the fortress quickly to avoid danger. When Shuri asks about reconnaissance and intel, Gungrave explains that he has entrusted those tasks to Asagi and Kaguya, noting the harsh reality that their employers could turn on them at any moment. As several covered wagons pull into the camp, Gungrave and Azuma Shuri notice their arrival. Shuri looks on in confusion, wondering if these are the reinforcements they've been waiting for. However, as the wagons stop, a group of women emerge, leaving the two men surprised by the unexpected guests. Shuri is left speechless and stunned as the women emerge in revealing attire. He quickly realizes the truth and is appalled that Gungrave would call for prostitutes while being engaged. Losing his temper, Shuri begins shouting at Gungrave, accusing him of fooling around, while a flustered Gungrave desperately tries to get him to calm down. The tension breaks as the women reveal they are actually members of the Special Operations Squad. Shuri is stunned to recognize Asagi among them, realizing his mistake. Finding his previous outburst and modesty adorable, the women surround him, teasing him for being so pure and cute. Azuma Shuri asks in disbelief if the women were posing as workers to gather intelligence in enemy territory. Asagi confirms that this was exactly their mission, though she notes that they will provide a full report only after everyone has had a chance to wash up. As the women depart, Shuri realizes that their seductive charm was a tool used to trick enemy soldiers, concluding that while they are true femme fatales, they are an incredibly valuable asset to their side. Azuma Shuri notices Gungrave looking pained and asks what is wrong, but Gungrave quickly dismisses him, telling him to get back to work. After giving Shuri a confusing pat on the head, Gungrave leaves him wondering what happened. Shortly after, Gungrave joins a meeting with Asagi, Altros, and Teg to review the intelligence report, though the discussion ends without a clear resolution. Azuma Shuri wipes his brow with a sigh of relief, confirming that everyone has finally received their food. Around the camp, the Tali are seen enjoying their meals with satisfaction. Today's offering is simple sandwiches, a dish that has become surprisingly popular among the soldiers for being easy to eat. With the mercenary corps growing to over 200 members, Azuma Shuri finds that his workload has essentially doubled, making his duties quite exhausting. Just as the soldiers begin to enjoy their meals, one of them approaches Shuri with a request. He explains that their captain wants some light snacks to nibble on. Shuri quickly realizes that the captain being referred to is Asagi from the Special Operations Squad. Shuri muses that the request for snacks implies the officers are drinking, questioning if such a thing is appropriate in the middle of a battlefield. However, the soldier explains that Captain Asagi specifically wants something fancy and Shuri-like. Realizing it is too late to start a complex dish, Shuri decides to make sandwiches with various fillings. As the soldier leaves him to it, Shuri begins to brainstorm the perfect menu for the occasion. With a determined spirit, Azuma Shuri gets to work. He lists out the ingredients he needs: pork, salt, basil, powdered cheese, eggs, breadcrumbs, potato starch sandwich bread, and shredded cabbage. As he gathers the supplies, he is genuinely surprised to find potato starch, wondering how such a specific ingredient is available in this world. Azuma Shuri begins by seasoning the pork with salt and basil, noting that while oregano would be ideal, he'll have to make do without it. He then coats the meat in potato starch, dips it in egg, and finishes the breading with powdered cheese and breadcrumbs. After deep frying the pork at 180°C until crispy and draining the oil, he tops it off with a generous layer of his homemade hamburger steak sauce. Azuma Shuri carefully assembles the sandwiches, placing the fried pork and shredded cabbage between slices of crustless bread. After cutting them into neat, easy-to-eat portions, he admires the finished katsu sandwiches. With a satisfied hum, he notes that he now needs to prepare a large batch of them. Azuma Shuri pushes a cart loaded with a massive amount of katsu sandwiches. As he moves through the camp, he overhears the soldiers talking about the new beast army in the adjacent camp and how stressed they are due to the war. However, the conversation is interrupted when some soldiers notice the delicious-looking sandwiches, curious about what he is carrying. While delivering the katsu sandwiches, Azuma Shuri is approached by a soldier from the new beast army. The soldier asks for one, and Shuri readily gives it to him. However, the interaction leaves both of them bewildered, with Shuri wondering if the soldier had originally intended to pick a fight with him. The soldiers are absolutely thrilled, unable to believe that such high-quality food could be found on a battlefield. When they ask who is responsible for the meal and Shuri admits he made it, they are visibly shocked. Their previous tension completely vanishes as they turn to him, politely begging if he could spare some more of the delicious sandwiches. Azuma Shuri hands over a few more sandwiches to the soldiers, who express their gratitude and mention they want to share the treat with their commander. As they depart, Shuri is left curious about who they are reporting to. Turning his attention back to his task, he arrives at Captain Asagi's tent, marveling at its size and the special treatment she receives, before deciding to hurry and deliver the snacks. As Azuma Shuri steps inside the tent, He is completely stunned to discover a lively gambling den operating right in the middle of the battlefield. He awkwardly apologizes for intruding, only to be greeted by Asagi, who thanks him for coming. Asagi lounges comfortably, looking every bit like the proprietress of a gambling den. She curiously asks about the food Shuri has brought, and upon seeing the katsu sandwiches, she is impressed by how lavish they are for a drinking snack. Shuri, however, finds himself completely flustered, his heart racing as he struggles to stay calm under Asagi's seductive smile. Asagi examines the katsu sandwiches, wondering if they are fried. Shuri explains that while they might not be crispy, the secret to their flavor is the generous amount of homemade sauce he used. Looking around found at the soldiers gambling in the tent, Shuri feels uneasy and questions if such activity is permissible. Asagi notices his hesitation and winks at him, teasingly asking if he is the type of person who dislikes. Shuri admits that he wouldn't say he dislikes gambling. Seizing the opportunity, Asagi leans in with a mischievous smile and challenges him to a match, holding up a stack of money. Shuri is completely caught off guard, leaving him and the onlookers in a state of shock. Observing the rowdy crowd, Shuri thinks to himself that experiencing the local games might be a good opportunity to bond with others. He agrees to the match, and Asagi, with a confident smile, suggests they play a game called Kazugo, leaving the onlookers puzzled by the name. Asagi begins explaining the mechanics of Kazugo, showing that the game utilizes 10 wooden cards of 5 different types and 2 specific dice. She points out that the 20-sided die is used for numbers, while the 4-sided die features symbols for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. According to Asagi, the first step is to roll the 20-sided die to determine a target number, after which the player draws 5 wooden cards to use in reaching that target. Asagi continues her explanation, detailing how the first card serves as the base and the die determines the mathematical operations to reach the target number. Shuri realizes the tricky nature of the game, but his concentration is interrupted by a mercenary who skeptically questions if a mere cook can handle basic arithmetic. Offended by the mercenary's doubt, Shuri shouts that he can handle addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, noting that these are basic skills mastered in elementary school. However, his claim leaves the surrounding Tali in absolute awe. Shuri is left completely bewildered when he discovers that in this world, basic arithmetic is considered advanced knowledge, reserved only for high-ranking officials trained at the castle. Asagi mischievously announces that the stakes have been raised. Now that they know Shuri can handle all 4 mathematical operations, though slightly nervous, Shuri remains determined and agrees to play. Amused by his boldness, Asagi declares that she has taken a liking to him and officially begins the match. Asagi confidently declares that it's time to get started with the match. However, Shuri calmly interrupts her, pointing out that she used a rigged shuffle. To ensure a fair game, he takes the deck and begins to reshuffle the cards himself, leaving Asagi stunned by his observation. The surrounding Tali are left in shock as Asagi stares in utter disbelief. Shuri calmly explains that she used a stock shuffle, a blatant cheating method used to manipulate the order of the cards, leaving Asagi speechless and exposed. Shuri notes how shocked Asagi is to have been caught, wondering if she really thought her trick would work. Being lenient, he tells her hell let it slide this time since it's just for fun, but asks her not to do it again. Stunned and defeated, Asagi simply replies, "Understood." Shuri observes Asagi, noting her impressive poker face, but he manages to catch a momentary flicker of disappointment in her expression. He realizes she likely rolled a poor number and credits his past gambling experiences with friends, specifically mentioning Yamagishi for his ability to read her. As they prepare for the next move, Asagi asks with a smile if they'll be betting any money on the game. Shuri admits that while he doesn't quite grasp the value of money in this world, they certainly need it. He puts up a sum that leaves the Special Operations Squad in utter shock, though Asagi finds the amount more than sufficient. With the stakes now settled, Asagi prepares to roll the die to decide the target number for the match. Asagi confidently rolls the die to set the target number. Shuri watches with intense focus as the die spins through the air. However, as the result is revealed, Asagi's confidence instantly vanishes, replaced by a look of utter disbelief, while the surrounding squad members are equally stunned by the outcome. Shuri hands the die over to Asagi, but he warns her not to use a spin toss trick, insisting she throw it normally. As he explains that spinning the die like a top can control the outcome, Shuri finds himself terrified by how casually Asagi cheats, wondering if this is a regular occurrence for her. Asagi is completely bewildered, asking Shuri if he had survived some real hell in gambling dens to possess such knowledge. Shuri denies it, explaining that he simply learned about various tricks from his friend Yamagishi, who had extensive experience spotting cheats. Shuri firmly states that cheating is disrespectful, leaving a defeated Asagi to sigh and admit she has no choice but to play fair. Shuri takes the conversation a step further, casually suggesting that if things go badly, the penalty for cutting off a finger. The suggestion sends a shockwave through the room, leaving Asagi and the Special Operations Squad completely horrified. Overwhelmed by fear, Asagi frantically promises that she will never cheat again. Meanwhile, Shuri simply smiles to himself, wondering if he has just watched too many Yakuza movies. Shuri is completely baffled by Asagi's sudden shift in attitude, noting how she has unexpectedly become meek. Still shaken, Asagi places a huge stack of money on the table as her bet, prompting the Special Operations Squad to question the amount. Shuri watches her with a confused expression, wondering if his previous comment about the penalty for cheating sounded too much like a genuine threat. Asagi suddenly snaps back into her competitive spirit, declaring and is ready to take Shuri on. While Shuri nervously agrees to proceed, Asagi makes a shocking proposal. If she loses the game, she will give herself to him. Shuri is left completely stunned and horrified by her unexpected offer. Shuri panics, finding the idea of betting a person despicable and contemplating a deliberate loss just to escape the awkward situation. Meanwhile, the Special Operations Squad is stunned, noting that no one has pushed Captain Asagi this far since Captain Kuga. As the tension rises, the crowd wonders if Shuri's ability to corner them with words will be enough to overcome Asagi's legendary gambling luck. Asagi puts on a brave front, shouting for Shuri to accept her challenge with a determined gesture. However, a close-up of her face reveals the truth. She is actually trembling with nervousness and on the verge of tears. The results are in. Shuri has won all 3 matches, leaving Asagi completely crushed and in tears. Shuri reflects that his calculation skills were superior, especially since Asagi couldn't adapt once her cheating was blocked. Feeling awkward about the quick exit, but the Special Operations Squad stops him. They remind him that a bet is a bet and tease him, insisting that refusing the prize would make him less of a man. Though Shuri desperately claims he doesn't mind that at all, taking the wager with absolute seriousness. Asagi boldly declares that she is now Shuri's servant and urges him to give her any order he likes as a sign of her resolve. Shuri, however, is utterly overwhelmed by her sudden submission and insists that the outcome of the bet doesn't matter to him at all. To prove her resolve as his servant, Asagi sheds her outer clothing to reveal provocative lingerie, leaving Shuri utterly speechless and blushing. The surrounding Special Operations Squad members watch in sheer disbelief as Asagi leans in close to the frozen young man. Shuri is left completely stunned, his face flushing red, as he stares at Asagi's daring attire. Trembling and sweating from the intensity of the situation, he stammers that he isn't comfortable with such a reward, feeling it is wrong to take advantage of someone who has looked after him. Still blushing intensely and unable to look her in the eye, Shuri awkwardly admits that Asagi is simply too stimulating for him. Asagi is momentarily surprised by his honesty, but seeing how flustered and distressed he has become, she can't help but let out a small, mocking laugh. Asagi bursts into laughter, finding Shuri's extreme reaction to her provocative appearance absolutely hilarious. She teases him, remarking that her body must have been far too much stimulation for an innocent boy like him. Quickly regaining her composure, she covers herself up and apologizes to the surrounding tally, telling them to simply treat the whole display as a bit of entertainment and forget about it. Asagi offers a soft apology to Shuri for the earlier incident, though Shuri admits the whole situation was more like chaos than confusion. However, the moment of sincerity is short-lived as Asagi quickly shifts back to her playful nature, whispering a provocative suggestion about sneaking into his bed tonight. As a bewildered Shuri tries to process her words, Asagi continues to tease him, confidently claiming that she could make him fall for her whenever she wanted. Asagi shifts the conversation to a more serious tone, reflecting on the battle and the war they were hired for by the Kingdom of New Beast. She explains to a surprised Shuri that if things go well, Gungrave could rise in prominence, potentially being formally integrated into the army or even receiving land and nobility. However, her expression turns grim as she admits that the current stalemate, leaving them unable to act, is making them anxious. Asagi continues her explanation, warning that while they remain idle, the enemy may be strengthening their defenses or other mercenary groups might swoop in to take the fortress for themselves. She tells Shuri that they have come this far following Gungrave's dream and are determined to see it through to the end. Despite the opportunity being perfect, Asagi looks on with a frustrated expression, feeling helpless in the face of the current stalemate. Shuri is deeply moved by the beauty of the mercenaries' devotion to Gungrave's dream, recognizing the strength of their bond. However, he senses a deeper, more turbulent emotion within Asagi. He worries that her desperation and urgency could lead the group to stumble, realizing that Asagi is currently driven by a panic she cannot easily hide. Shuri interrupts the heavy atmosphere by offering Asagi a light snack he prepared. He gently explains that hunger often leads to negativity, and that the first step to feeling better is filling one's stomach. Touched by his consideration, Asagi decides to have some, enjoying the meal as she begins to relax. Asagi tastes the snack and closes her eyes in delight, admitting that it has a wonderful flavor. Shuri explains the culinary thought behind the dish, describing how the batter holds the rich sauce and meat juices, making it easy to eat without making a mess while gambling. As they talk, Shuri gently reminds Asagi that nothing good comes from rushing. Shuri suggests that Asagi should take a break to eat, drink, and find some emotional breathing room to calm her anxiety. When Asagi tries to deny her stress, Shuri points out her furrowed brow and the fact that she is rushing. Asagi lets out a frustrated sigh, but as Shuri continues to press her on her awareness of the situation, she becomes flustered and tries to laugh it off as a joke. Shuri looks at Asagi with a gentle expression, telling her that things like honor and military prestige don't seem to fit her personality. He recalls her love for fun and laughter, and her desire to protect those moments for others. With a warm smile, he explains that he prepared the katsu sandwich so she could enjoy something delicious while doing what she loves, suggesting that such simple pleasures are the true key to happiness. Shuri warmly encourages Asagi to keep laughing and spreading happiness to those around her, believing that by doing so she will surely find her own happiness as well. Deeply moved by his sincerity, Asagi smiles and thanks him, telling Shuri that she wants him to hold on to that same natural kindness himself. Asagi smiles warmly, admitting that Shuri's words really hit home. She laughs, realizing that worrying isn't like her, and praises the delicious snack once more. Shuri agrees, watching her with a soft expression. As the conversation winds down, and Asagi kindly tells him that he should get some sleep as well. When Shuri notices a strange look on her face and calls her name, she simply brushes it off, keeping her thoughts to herself with a small, mysterious smile. Shuri agrees and prepares to head out, but Asagi calls out to him one last time. With a warm, gentle smile, she tells him that having his cooking to look forward to is what helps her survive her missions. She affirms that he is already an indispensable part of the mercenary group and softly urges him to get some proper rest. Shuri softly agrees to Asagi's request to get some rest. However, the next morning he is jolted awake by a sudden thunderous noise shaking the camp. Still half asleep and rubbing his eyes, he complains about the noise before realizing that something unusual is happening. Shuri is stunned as he watches the Neri clanking through the camp, their movements signaling an immediate mobilization. Confused by the sudden chaos, he approaches Gungrave and asks what on earth is going on. As he looks at the troops, Shuri can't help but wonder why they are preparing for battle so abruptly, especially since the fortress they are targeting is supposed to be impregnable. Gungrave points toward the horizon, where smoke is billowing from the supposedly impregnable fortress. He explains that Asagi's unit managed to infiltrate the stronghold and set it ablaze, finally giving them an opening to launch an attack. Shuri is completely taken aback, his mind racing as he asks if Asagi is safe. Gungrave tells Shuri to calm down, explaining that they are about to rescue Asagi's unit and assault the fortress simultaneously. He reassures Shuri that Asagi is highly capable and will return as if nothing happened. With a determined expression, Gungrave vows to bring everyone back safely and put an end to the war. Shuri asks for clarification, confirming if his role is to make food for everyone. Gungrave agrees, ensuring Shuri has a purpose while the army moves forward to end the war. The war finally comes to a safe end, and everything turns out well. Azuma Shuri is overjoyed to see Asagi return safely with her unit. Although she suffered a few injuries during the mission, the only thing that matters is that she is alive and well. Asagi looks back on her life, noting that the world rarely follows one's desires. She remembers a time of peace, recalling her childhood as the only daughter of a caravan leader and the happy life that could have been. But that peace was shattered when bandits attacked the caravan. In a heartbeat, her family and everyone she loved were slaughtered. Asagi was left alone and terrified, spared only because her unusual hair and eyes made her valuable. To the bandits, she wasn't a child, but a prize to be sold as a slave. While held captive by the Rei, Asagi was subjected to treatment so vile and horrific that it is too painful to even speak of, however. Amidst the despair and suffering, a spark of determination ignited within her. She vowed in her heart that she would survive, and one day, she would hunt down and kill every single member of the bandit gang. The opportunity Asagi had been waiting for arrived suddenly and violently. A rival gang from the town launched a brutal assault on the Rei, who had been ravaging the area, claiming it was payback for the Rei arrogance on their turf. As the young attackers cut through the enemy, a furious bandit leader roared in rage, while a young Asagi watched the carnage unfold with wide eyes. In the midst of the slaughter, young Asagi finds her chance. She snatches the weapon from the cornered bandit leader and slits his throat without hesitation, pouring every ounce of her accumulated hatred into the final, lethal blow. Overwhelmed by her trauma, young Asagi tries to end her own life. However, she is stopped by Gungrave, the leader of the rival gang. He tells her that her life is too valuable to waste and invites her to come with him. Gungrave reveals his ambitious dream, to one day create a peaceful nation where no one ever has to starve or die. Gungrave's words fill young Asagi with a newfound sense of hope. She vows to live her life to the fullest, not only for herself but for the sake of everyone who was killed, hoping to tell them about her journey in the afterlife. With a determined heart, she joins Gungrave in his group soon after. Gungrave decides to disband the gang and establish a mercenary corporation, and Asagi chooses to follow them into this new chapter of her life. Asagi recounts her years of service, specializing in dangerous special operations that ranged from stealing enemy supplies to seducing commanders to ensnare them. Now, Gungrave's vision is finally taking shape. His mercenary corp has grown into a massive, respectable force, expanding its reach as his dream begins to move in earnest. The Mercenary Corps secures a request from the great nation of New Beast, a land blessed with fertile soil. For Gungrave and his men, this campaign is the grand battle they have been longing for, a perfect chance to make a name for themselves. As Gungrave looks out over the landscape, he realizes that a flawless victory could lead to official recruitment into the army, and perhaps even the granting of land of their own. The campaign leads them to face Youheidan, a neighboring country of New Beast. Despite its barren land, Youheidan's vast mines provide the wealth and military power that make them a formidable opponent. Hired by New Beast, Gungrave and his mercenaries spend months driving back Youheidan's troops, eventually advancing their lines to a key stronghold known for being nearly impossible to assault. Asagi explains her current situation, showing herself blending into the rowdy atmosphere of a tavern. While the soldiers cheer for dancers and demand drinks, she plays the part of a helpful server, masking her true identity. She describes this espionage as simply doing a bit of business while operating deep within the enemy's fortress. The Youheidan fortress is a formidable stronghold, perched on difficult terrain that makes a direct assault nearly impossible. Asagi explains that since the fortress is the only gateway to the capital, her special operations unit decided to infiltrate it by disguising themselves as prostitutes to gather intelligence. Surprisingly, the guards let them in without any hesitation, a fact that became immediately obvious once they were inside. Asagi reveals the grim reality inside the Youheidan fortress, describing it as a place on the verge of collapse. With food supplies running low and the well nearly dry, the soldiers were completely worn out, desperately clinging to the hope that they only had to endure for 3 more days. Asagi uses her disguise to get close to a Youheidan soldier, who reveals that reinforcements from the homeland will arrive in 3 days to turn the tide of the war. While the soldier feels reassured by this news, Asagi silently notes the 3-day deadline, continuing her act as a companion to keep him unsuspecting. Asagi continues her act, leaning into Mika to build a false sense of intimacy. While Mika thanks her for boosting the soldiers' morale, Asagi steers the conversation toward the desperation of their situation. She solemnly remarks that they are all on the edge, noting that the outcome of the war will decide the country's fate, and that Youheidan's vital mines are on the verge of shutting down. Asagi is shocked to learn that Youheidan's mines are shutting down. Mika explains that the output of iron and copper ore has plummeted over the past few years, leaving the nation in a dire state. He admits that for the people of Youheidan, this war is a necessity to gain new land and resources, as they absolutely need the wealth of the nation of New Beast to survive. Asagi realizes the tragic reality behind Youheidan's aggression. They were simply cornered and fighting for survival. Looking at the soldiers in the tavern, she acknowledges that they are people with families and loved ones, yet she knows she must still destroy this place. Mika apologizes for burdening her with such a grim story, telling her it was his good fortune to spend these moments with her. Asagi simply thanks him, while internally reminding herself that this manipulation is part of her job. Asagi softly tells Mika not to say such lonely things, keeping up her sympathetic facade. After leaving him, she reunites with the Special Operations Squad. The group gathers around a map of the stronghold, carefully planning their infiltration as they identify that the armory is located at the end of a particular corridor. Asagi reflects on the plight of the Youheidan soldiers, acknowledging that they are cornered by their own desperate circumstances. She shares the critical intelligence she gathered, pinpointing the location of the stockpiled food and the enemy's troop deployments for her squad. Despite her professional resolve, she admits that the emotional toll of her work still weighs on her heart. Finally, the Special Operations Squad returns to their camp, exhausted and relieved to finally be able to rest. Azuma finds himself in the middle of a chaotic scene as a woman scolds him for bringing a group of beautiful women to camp while being engaged. Amidst the noise, Asagi appears, curious about the commotion. Shuri is shocked to see her, quickly realizing that Asagi and her squad were posing as workers to gather intel in enemy territory. a fact that Asagi casually confirmed. Asagi observes that Shuri had completely misread the situation, thinking the squad were morale-boosting women brought in by Gungrave. However, she reflects on the things they know about him, starting with his absurdly skilled and delicious cooking, which is better than anything she has ever eaten. His meals, brimming with a strange charm, have captivated everyone, leaving one person in particular utterly addicted to his food. Asagi continues her assessment, noting that Shuri is a complete enigma whose background and origins remain entirely unknown. She describes him as a mystery in human form. Furthermore, she observes that while he maintains a polite and gentlemanly facade, he is surprisingly repressed, hiding his true desires from those around him. Asagi continues her observation of Shuri, noting how he desperately tries to avoid looking at her body, especially chest, yet can't help but sneak sideways glances. She finds his clumsy attempts at concealment transparent and typical of a virgin. Teasingly, she tells Shuri that he really should learn more about women. Turning back to the group, she mentions that they will provide a full report later. But the camp erupts into a flurry of excitement as the Tally dive into a high-energy gambling game, cards and tokens flying everywhere. Asagi watches with a satisfied smile, noting that because they are always tense on the battlefield, they must occasionally let their guard down to clear their heads and start fresh. Later, as she relaxes in a more quiet moment, Asagi admits to feeling a bit peckish, even as she reminds herself that eating so late will only lead to belly fat. Asagi reminisces about the deliciousness of Shuri's meals, admitting that they were so good she couldn't help but overeat and even put on some weight. As her stomach growls loudly, she tries to maintain her discipline and not let her guard down. However, a mercenary approaches her, praising a Shuri-style elaborate dish and cheerfully offering to go tell Shuri about it. Asagi tries to ignore her worries about weight gain, convincing herself that it's fine since the whole group is eating together. She is absolutely captivated by the luxurious meat snacks Shuri has provided, finding them fantastic. As they eat, Shuri tentatively asks Asagi if it's really okay to be in such a feast so late, but Asagi simply smiles and shifts the topic, teasingly asking Shuri if he is the type of person who dislikes gambling. Shuri admits that he doesn't necessarily dislike gambling, a response that catches Asagi off guard. Intrigued and seeing a chance to peel back his polite facade, Asagi suggests they use the occasion to see who Shuri really is. She produces a deck of cards and challenges him to a match. Shuri agrees with a smile, while Asagi looks on with mischievous confidence, determined to show him what she's capable of. Asagi begins the match with smug confidence, secretly planning to toy with Shuri and strip him of everything he owns. But her plan is cut short when Shuri calmly catches her in the act. "You used a rigged shuffle, so I'll reshuffle," he declares, leaving Asagi completely stunned as he takes control of the game. Shuri doesn't stop there, calling out her spin toss trick and lecturing her on how cheating is disrespectful. Asagi is left stunned as Shuri mentions the grim possibility of losing a finger if things go wrong. With a pile of coins in hand, Shuri prepares to start the game for real. Shuri confidently puts down a pile of money, declaring his bet. He then turns the pressure on Asagi, asking her what she is willing to wager. Blindsided by his boldness, Asagi is left flustered and sweating, unable to believe that he is pressuring her so intensely at a moment like this. Shuri maintains a calm expression, yet his words are firm. Cheating must be punished. Asagi is bewildered, unable to sense any aggression from him, but she feels belittled by his apparent lack of experience in gambling halls. Refusing to be looked down upon, she doubles down on her pride. She declares herself a gambler and accepts the match, raising the stakes to an extreme level by wagering herself as the prize if she loses. Asagi boldly declares that she only wagers her body when she is certain of victory, leaving Shuri completely shell-shocked. The surrounding Tali watch in disbelief, as Asagi reflects on how Shuri managed to corner her using nothing but his words and gaze. Finding him intriguing, she steels her resolve, imagining herself as a powerful force, and firmly declares that she will be the one to win. In the end, Asagi is utterly defeated. She is overcome with tears and humiliation, never imagining that she would lose a gamble to a mere cook. Having wagered her own body, she is now devastated by the realization that she must give herself to Shuri in the truest sense of the word. Asagi is consumed by the sting of her defeat, finding Shuri's mercy even more humiliating than the loss itself. Driven by this feeling, she suddenly strips off her clothes, revealing her lingerie. With a determined and flushed face, she declares that she is now Shuri's servant, and demands that he give her whatever orders he likes, leaving Shuri completely shocked and flustered. Asagi doubles down on her resolve, declaring that no matter what happens in front of others, her body now belongs to Shuri, and she will never complain or protest. Shuri is left completely stunned and blushing, unable to handle her intensity. He struggles to respond, feeling that it would be wrong to treat her this way, especially since she has taken care of him. Overwhelmed by the situation, Shuri admits that Asagi is simply too much stimulation for him. Asagi is stunned by his reaction. Finding his honesty unexpectedly charming, she bursts into laughter, realizing how ridiculous the scene has become. Watching the blushing young man, she concludes that he is just an innocent boy who knows nothing of women, interpreting his inability to act not as weakness, but as a form of kindness. Asagi reflects on how her presence was likely too stimulating for an innocent boy like Shuri. Despite the chaos of the gamble, she finds that the interaction helped clear her mind and lighten her heart. Looking at Shuri, she realizes that she has opened up to him about things she had never shared with anyone else. Asagi gazes at the massive, well-defended fortress, her mind heavy with strategic concerns. She admits her frustration over the lack of a decisive way to attack, knowing that while this is a golden opportunity for the mercenary company to rise, the enemy's natural defenses and high morale make the fortress nearly impossible to take. With no clear path to victory, she realizes they can only gather information, a thought that continues to gnaw at her heart. Shuri arrives with a plate of food, remarking that hunger often leads to gloomy thoughts. He offers Asagi a Latin night snack he carefully prepared to cheer her up. Asagi realizes that even after she laid bare her true feelings and the intensity of their bet, Shuri remains the same innocent and caring person. She takes a bite of the sandwich, closing her eyes in satisfaction as she finds the taste truly comforting. Asagi savors every bite of the Latinite snack, her expression one of pure bliss. She describes the rich sauce and juicy meat that soak into the bread and cabbage, noting that unlike ordinary bread, this meal doesn't dry out her mouth. She realizes that Shuri carefully designed the sauce not just for flavor, but to make the meal more comforting and easier to eat. Shuri looks at Asagi with a warm, gentle smile, reminding her that nothing good comes from rushing. Asagi reflects on his words, realizing that Shuri's care for the traditional notions of honor, valor, or glory. Instead, he believes in the simple joy of laughing together and spreading happiness to others, claiming that the more happiness one gives, the happier they become. Asagi looks up at him, touched and slightly bewildered, wondering if someone like her could truly spread happiness. Asagi watches her subordinates laughing, eating, and playing together in a rare moment of peace. She reflects on her own history, admitting that she couldn't abandon those who had suffered through circumstances similar to her own. To her, these subordinates are more than just soldiers. They are people she picked up and gave a chance to, finding a quiet sense of fulfillment in the happiness they now share. Asagi looks at her subordinates with pride, knowing she turned those who couldn't fit in as ordinary mercenaries into reliable comrades. She realizes that, without even knowing it, she had been spreading happiness to others. Shuri was the one who helped her see this, and the simple, relaxing nature of the katsu sandwich served as the catalyst for her realization. Asagi looks at Shuri, recognizing that his true self is defined by his delicious food and his sincere ability to encourage people from a different perspective. As they eat together, Asagi agrees that brooding is not their style. However, when Shuri mentions how the sauce really soaks in, the phrase echoes in Asagi's mind, leaving her wondering why that specific word feels so significant in this moment. Asagi's mind races as she connects the concept of soaking into the fortress. She realizes that while everyone focused on its solid defenses, they completely overlooked a major flaw. With her mind now clear, she turns back to Shuri. Noting how late it has become, she tells him he should get some sleep and announces that she will be heading off as well. Asagi returns to her squad, cutting their leisure time short with a stern command. After her subordinates acknowledge her, she urgently orders someone to contact Riru and have a specific item prepared immediately. Asagi commands her squad to prepare for immediate movement, stating that she will go to see Gungrave. With the cover of a new moon, she determines that the timing is perfect for a night raid. The scene shifts to the imposing stone fortress, the target of their upcoming operation. At the enemy fortress, guards are left bewildered by a strange object flying past them. Meanwhile, Asagi presents her strategy to Gungrave. Despite Gungrave's doubts about the fortress's strong defenses, Asagi confidently reveals that she has already identified a viable infiltration route for their night raid. Asagi details the infiltration route, explaining that her well-trained special operations squad can scale the steep, rocky cliffs to enter the fortress. She informs a surprised Gungrave that once they have successfully breached the perimeter, they will open the gates from the inside to let the rest of their allies in. Gungrave expresses his concern, pointing out that even if they infiltrate, the fortress is packed with enemies and Asaga's unit alone cannot possibly open the gates. Asagi, however, remains composed and reveals that Shuri gave her a crucial hint. She cryptically asks Gungrave if he thinks the wind blows in that place, leaving him bewildered. At that very moment, the plan is set in motion inside the fortress. The enemy soldiers are caught off guard as thick smoke suddenly envelops them, leaving them shouting in confusion. Ask. Asagi reveals the secret behind her strategy, noting that the surrounding rocky mountains block the wind, causing any smoke or gas to linger inside the fortress. She explains that releasing tear gas in such a stagnant environment would create absolute chaos. Meanwhile, inside the walls, the enemy soldiers are blinded and panicked, screaming as the caustic smoke burns their eyes. Asagi leaps through the thick haze, her movements precise and deadly. She reflects on the simplicity of the strategy filling the airless fortress with a stinging smokescreen, an idea that surprisingly came to her from Shuri's cooking. While the enemy soldiers are blinded and disoriented, unable to defend themselves, Asagi and hers previously been to efficiency, noting how they had previously and frontal assaults to consider such a practical approach. Asagi and her squad swiftly take down the incapacitated soldiers, with Asagi reflecting on how ambition can blind one to what truly matters in war. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocks the fortress, throwing the enemy soldiers into total confusion. Amidst the panic, an enemy commander shouts for his men to stay calm and immediately hunt down the infiltrators. Asagi glides through the thick smoke like a ghost, her expression cold and focused. The enemy soldiers, blinded and disoriented, stand no chance against her precision. A soldier barely manages to utter a confused "Madam" before Asagi's blade strikes him down in a flash. The gates swing wide open, catching the enemy soldiers completely off guard. Panic erupts throughout the fortress as the soldiers realize they have been infiltrated. With a determined expression, Asagi charges forward, leading the assault into the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The operation was a complete success. With the gates thrown wide open, the fortress was swiftly overrun and brought down by the surging Gungrave Mercenary Corps and the troops that followed. As the battlefield is left littered with the discarded weapons of the defeated, a quiet reflection lingers. Honestly, I really am a strange one. Asagi admits to feeling like an oddball for dedicating her life to someone else's dream. Azuma Akari, arriving with a tray of food, gently disagrees, suggesting that many people in their world are similar. Asagi laughs, acknowledging his point, but maintains that few can succeed entirely on their own, prompting Akari to further challenge her view. Azuma Akari continues his talk, pointing out that the food and clothes people need to survive are made by others. He argues that no matter who you are, you ultimately rely on someone else's strength to succeed. Through imagery of a blacksmith and a warrior, he explains that those who create tools for others place their own hopes in the users, wishing for them to use those creations to accomplish something great. Azuma Akari explains that relying on others is a form of entrusting one's dreams to them. Asagi finds this an interesting perspective. Akari then suggests that instead of feeling like she is merely riding on someone else's dream, she should see it as her own strength helping those dreams come true. Asagi chuckles, finally understanding Akari's point of view. Akari points out that she is the only one who can truly judge whether Gungrave has what it takes to achieve his dreams. When Asagi asks what happens if she decides he doesn't, Akari simply smiles and suggests that she help him grow, jokingly adding that he can't exactly tell her to kill him. As Akari walks away, Asagi reflects on his words. Although she admits that helping Gungrave grow is a tall order, she finds the idea far more interesting and decides to accept the challenge. Acknowledging that Gungrave can be quite a handful, she resolves to support him, believing that once his dream comes true, she will finally be free to do what she truly wants. Asagi sits quietly atop the fortress wall, savoring the katsu sandwich. As she eats, she begins to imagine her own future goal, building a happy place where everyone can have fun and relax without effort, finding inspiration in the simple comfort of the meal. The narrative takes a turn, reflecting on the duality of light and shadow, a truth that persists even within the unified kingdom. Beyond the radiant city lies a sprawling entertainment district, and standing above it all is a formidable woman who oversees the entire area. The formidable woman is revealed as Asagi Kiri, the ruler of the pleasure quarter known as Kiri-Hu Street. She is described as having a hedonistic streak, indulging in gambling even on the battlefield and seeking out anything that seemed fun. However, beneath this playful exterior, she also carried out secret covert missions during the Unified War era that could never be made public. Asagi Kiri's life was one of extreme contrasts. On the battlefield, she was feared as the Grim Reaper, using her allure to beguile targets before carrying out cold assassinations. Outside of war, she was celebrated as a peerless beauty, with records claiming her popularity rivaled that of Queen Aureus Denju Apparata. Despite her position as the ruler of a pleasure district, she was remembered as being surprisingly pure-hearted, eventually marrying the only man she ever truly loved. Asagi chose to decline a royal post, instead using her own fortune and connections to establish Kiri-Hu Street. By stationing trusted subordinates throughout every corner of the district, she gathered critical intelligence from the shadows that would have been impossible to obtain through official royal channels, supplying Gungrave with whatever information he required. This secret achievement remained unknown to history, until the records left by King Gungrave were finally discovered. Her loyalty and devotion to the nation had long been concealed. Thus, the Pleasure District was born, governed in truth by strict order. Both the adult establishments and gambling houses operated under rigorous rules to ensure the safety of ordinary citizens. Even in the present day, it remains a popular spot for tourists. Asagi Keed herself was often cited at various gambling houses, and there is a curious tale about her. A curious tale emerges involving a certain young man who would borrow a shop's kitchen to prepare food for Asagi Kaede, because he always prepared the same lavish snack. Later, scholars speculated that their meetings were actually lovers' rendezvous. It is said that Asagi Kaede would treat these meals as a good luck ritual, gambling while she enjoyed the food. Asagi Kaede looks out over the cityscape, noting that the war has finally come to an end. With Youheidan's territory absorbed and the new beast still standing, she considers this the best possible outcome for her. As she reflects on the victory, her subordinates present her with a lavish snack, and she licks her lips in anticipation. Asagi Kaede smiles with anticipation, wondering if she might one day meet the mysterious cook who created the dish she so enjoyed after the fierce battle. Thanks to Asagi's strategic efforts, the forces successfully captured the fortress and went on to storm and seize Youheidan's capital. As the victorious army moves forward with their carriages, a young man named Azuma Shuri watches the scene from inside one of them. The Mercenary Corps makes their way to New Beast's capital to receive their war reward. Gungrave informs the group that he will head to the castle to collect the payment while the others wait at an inn. He excitedly plans a victory party at a tavern, telling Shuri that Hell be in charge of the cooking. Exhausted from the journey, Shuri agrees, though he half asleep wonders if the tavern will even be large enough to fit everyone. Someone shakes Shuri awake, telling him that they have almost arrived. As he rubs the sleep from his eyes and fully wakes up, he looks out and is completely stunned by the sight of a colossal white cliff towering over the carriages. Shuri gazes in wonder at the breathtaking sight of the new beast's sacred forest. He is overwhelmed by the scale of the ancient towering trees that block out the sky and emit a gentle, warm glow, making the entire environment feel truly fantasy-like. Shuri is completely mesmerized as he enters the new beast castle town. He marvels at the fantastical sight of glowing wood, block-like buildings, and the unique attire of the locals, finding the experience of visiting a town in another world incredibly exciting. The group finally reaches the inn. Gungrave informs everyone that he is heading to the castle to collect their reward, telling the group he is counting on them. Mira confidently gives a thumbs up, promising to handle things, while Aiden adds that he has high expectations. The mercenaries reflect on the war, noting that if things go well, Gungrave's influence and power will grow. Gungrave tells Shuri to simply prepare some good food and drinks while he handles the rest. Just as Shuri agrees, a person approaches them, inquiring if he is indeed Sir Gungrave of the Gungrave Mercenary Corps. The stranger introduces himself as Rono, a servant of Princess Tatis. He reveals that he has come bearing a message from the princess, leaving Gungrave and his companions surprised as the crowd begins to murmur. Shuri is completely taken aback, questioning if the message truly comes from the royal family of the country. As the group senses that something significant is unfolding, Gungrave steps forward to formally introduce himself as the captain of the group. Rono responds with great respect, noting that they have heard of Gungrave's valor, specifically his feat of capturing the impregnable Vanib fortress in a single day. Rono reveals that Her Highness has taken a keen interest in Gungrave's mercenary corps and feels deep gratitude toward all the mercenary groups involved in the war. As a result, the princess has invited representatives from all these groups to a banquet, and Rono formally requests that Sir Gungrave attend. Shuri is completely stunned to learn that the princess herself is hosting a victory celebration and that Gungrave has been personally invited. Even Gungrave is caught off guard, thinking that while he hoped for an opportunity, he didn't expect it to happen so quickly. As they react to the news, Rono informs them that there is one specific request. Rono delivers the specific request. Every attendee must bring a dish of their own making. Shuri is stunned, questioning if the princess actually means cooking, while Gungrave is equally bewildered. Rono explains that because the mercenaries come from many different regions, Princess Tebus hopes to use food as a means of fostering connections between them. Rono emphasizes that if the princess is royalty, the dish they bring must meet her high standards. He informs Gungrave that the banquet will begin in 3 hours, and that attendants will be waiting to guide them upon their arrival at the castle. With his message delivered, Rono takes his leave, leaving a bewildered Gungrave and his companions standing in silence. Immediately after Rono's departure, Gungrave grabs Shuri, declaring that he is their only hope for the cooking challenge. A panicked Shuri protests vehemently, unable to believe that a regular guy like himself could attend a royal banquet without his heart exploding from stress. Despite Shuri's resistance, Gungrave insists, suggesting that he simply prepare something portable to bring along. Gungrave excitedly argues that the royal request means Shuri can cook right in the castle kitchen. Shuri, still panicked, tries to push him away, insisting that Gungrave focus on finding formal, portable dish. Just then, Asagi arrives with the attire, revealing that she had already prepared formal wear for everyone, including Gungrave, leaving Shuri completely stunned. Arius smiles confidently, recalling how she foresaw this event and made sure they were ready. Shuri, however, is far from enthusiastic, lamenting that he is being forced into visiting the castle with Gungrave gripping him tightly and the rest of the group looking on. Shuri is told to give up any hope of escape. Gungrave looks stunning in his formal wear, but Shuri, still dressed in his everyday clothes, feels an overwhelming sense of embarrassment and dread. Upon arriving at the castle, they are greeted by attendants and led inside. Shuri can only stare in amazement at the sheer scale and luxury of the new beast's castle. Gungrave notices Shuri lugging around a heavy bag and asks what he's carrying. Shuri explains that since he is the one cooking, he needs his own ingredients and tools to feel comfortable and perform his best. Despite Gungrave's suggestion to simply borrow equipment at the castle, Shuri refuses, terrified that if the food tastes bad, he might actually get his head chopped off. Gungrave sighs at Shuri's intensity, calling him a stubborn brat, which Shuri readily admits to. The attendant reminds Gungrave and Shuri to maintain proper decorum within the royal castle. She warns them that the princess is extremely particular about her food, which only adds to Shuri's anxiety. However, the attendant surprisingly supports Shuri, noting that a cook without pride in their tools is lowly. Realizing his mistake, Gungrave quickly apologizes to Shuri for going too far. Shuri takes in the sight of the grand royal banquet, acknowledging its lavishness. However, as he looks at the abundance of food already laid out on the tables, he begins to feel that the request for the mercenaries to prepare a dish is somewhat odd. As Shuri looks across the lavish banquet hall, he realizes who the figures on the dais are. They are the only two royals of the kingdom of New Beast. The tall man is the king, known for his steady competence in governing. Beside him stands a renowned prodigy, one of the top 5 politicians on the continent, and most notably, the supreme gourmet of the land. Shuri is completely blindsided when he realizes that the powerful figure he was just told about is actually a young girl. He struggles to process the shocking fact that Princess Tease is both a famous politician and the continent's top gourmet. Shuri is completely stunned, struggling to wrap his head around the fact that such a young girl could be so accomplished. Gungrave admits that while he has only heard rumors, the princess's achievements are truly beyond measure. He describes how she established institutions to train elite chefs and advance the research of processed foods. Although the country already had a high rate of food self-sufficiency, it was Princess Tispis who added immense brand value to it, leaving the nation's food culture technology 30 years ahead of the rest of the world. Gungrave emphasizes that every policy Princess Tabis has implemented has been a success, despite her young age. He further explains that her palate is practically divine, as she has tasted and remembered every dish from across the continent. Realizing the weight of the situation, Shuri becomes increasingly anxious, as Gungrave warns him that having someone of such importance appear before their group is no small matter. Shuri gazes at the young girl on the throne, still struggling to reconcile her appearance with her legendary status. He realizes that true geniuses really do exist. Just as he is lost in thought, a royal official calls out to them, announcing that Princess Tabis is calling for Sir Gungrave and his companion. Princess Tabis greets them with a smile, asking if they are the mercenaries who answered the call for the war. Gungrave and his companion kneel formally, confirming their identity. Shuri, however, is momentarily distracted by the princess's beauty before realizing he wasn't warned about such a formal reception. Leaving him flustered, Princess Tabis turns her attention towards Shuri, asking for his name. Overwhelmed by her presence and blushing intensely, Shuri stammers a response before nervously introducing himself as Shuri. Princess Tabis continues her inquiry, asking Shuri what role he serves within the mercenary corps. When Shuri looks confused, she reveals that she has already reviewed the rosters of every mercenary group and noticed his name was missing. As she questions whether he is some sort of assistant, Shuri is left in awe, realizing that her ability to recall such specific details is exactly why Gungrave calls her a genius. Shuri earnestly confirms that he is indeed with the Gungrave Mercenary Corps, explaining that his role is that of their cook. Princess Tabis looks at him with interest, noting, "So it's you." As she begins to address him further about his cooking, she pauses for a moment, leaving Shuri curious, but she quickly dismisses the thought, telling him it is nothing. Shuri beams with pride, explaining that his job is to provide the best meals for his hungry comrades day and night. Intrigued, Princess Tebus decides she wants to see his skills firsthand and challenges him to cook for her. She confidently declares herself a true gourmet who has tasted the finest delicacies from every corner of the world, leaving Gungrave feeling uneasy about the situation.